Chapter 101, Chapter 101, Swordsmanship Classic, Bonus. Early in the morning, Satoshi was not allowed to wake up naturally but was instead shaken awake by Gojo Shinichi. Uncle Shinichi, you're a grade 1 sorcerer now. Why are you still on wake-up duty? Satoshi rubbed his eyes, his voice laced with irritation. Being woken up mid-sleep was never a pleasant experience. Young Master Satoshi, hurry up and wash up. Someone from the Yajayo family is here. There was an unusual excitement in Gojo Shinichi's tone, something Satoshi couldn't quite understand. What did the Yajayo family have to do with him wanting to sleep in? Why was Shinichi so worked up? Did he and Satoru really need to personally greet visitors from the Yajayo family? That didn't seem necessary. Seeing that Satoshi remained motionless, Shinichi decided to get straight to the point. Tsuki no Sho, the Yajayo family wants to exchange it for a Zanpakuto. Satoshi blinked, unimpressed. Tsuki no Sho? What's that? And why would I trade a Zanpakuto for it? His lack of enthusiasm instantly dampened Shinichi's excitement. But this is Tsuki no Sho, the original swordsmanship manuscript of Yajayo Jubei. Every master of the Yajayo family has drawn their own unique insights from it. Young master, with your talent in swordsmanship, aren't you even a little curious? Shinichi did his best to convey just how rare the Tsuki no Sho was, but Satoshi remained utterly disinterested. At this hour, the only thing that could truly excite him was news of a fire element cursed tool that could serve as a base for Ryujin Jaka. Young Master Satoshi, the Yajayo family takes this matter very seriously. Yajayo Yuzuki, their clan head, Yajayo Simon, their greatest kendo master, and Yajayo Hidesuga, their top grade 1 sorcerer, all came in person. You can't just ignore them. You'll have to at least hear them out, right? Realizing that there was no way Satoshi would go willingly, Shinichi dragged him out of bed. With no other choice, Satoshi got up, washed his face, got dressed, and yawned his way toward Gojo Kyokushin Ryu Dojo. Since this was an informal visit rather than a formal challenge, only the highest-ranking members from both clans were present. 3 representatives from the Yajayo family sat across from Gojo Kumaen, who hosted the meeting as the acting patriarch. Gojo Satoru wasn't originally required to attend, but upon learning that the Yajayo family had come specifically for Gojo Satoshi, he volunteered to be there. Thus, the Gojo clan had a 4-on-3 advantage in numbers: Gojo Kumaen, Gojo Shinichi, Gojo Satoru, and Satoshi against the 3 Yajayo representatives. Master Yajayo, since Satoshi is here, our part in this matter is done. The next step is between you and him. We will remain as spectators and will not interfere. Gojo Kumaen had no intention of overshadowing the discussion and immediately handed the floor over to Satoshi and the Yajayo family. Gojo Satoru wanted to say something, but before he could, Shinichi gave him a quick tap on the shoulder, signaling him to stay quiet. By the time Satoru caught on, Satoshi had already begun speaking with Yajayo Yuzuki. To be honest, I'm not really interested in Tsuki no Sho, and a Zanpakuto isn't something you can just forge on a whim. Satoshi was about to refuse, but before he could, Yajayo Hidesuga suddenly knelt on the ground, raising Tsuki no Sho high above his head, offering it to him. Next to him, Yajayo Yuzuki and Yajayo Simon bowed their heads in silence, waiting for Satoshi's response. I really don't care about kendo manuals. It was hard to reject someone this sincere. Satoshi sighed. It seemed that unless he accepted Tsuki no Sho, Hidesuga wouldn't lower his hands. So, out of courtesy, he took the ancient scroll, just to glance at it. It was just an old antique. After all, what use could it possibly have for him? However, the moment his eyes swept over the text, a familiar notification rang in his mind. Swordsmanship Classic detected. Host has begun reading and learning. Zanjutsu experience plus 200. Satoshi's brows rose slightly in surprise. He had accepted the book reluctantly, but he never expected it to bring an unexpected bonus. On the other side, the Yajayo family representatives remained tense. They had worried that Satoshi had no real interest in kendo. But now, seeing him seriously reading Tsuki no Sho, they finally felt relieved. As Satoshi continued reading, the entire room held their breath, not daring to make a sound. Time passed in silence. Finally, the system notifications stopped. Satoshi exhaled slowly. An unexpected windfall. After reading Tsuki no Sho, he had accumulated 3,000 points of Zanjutsu experience. There was no visible experience bar for Zanjutsu, but he could feel the difference. This wasn't just theory, it was an understanding. His grasp of Zanjutsu had improved. Closing his eyes, he let the techniques from the Tsuki no Sho replay in his mind. Who is this Zanpakuto meant for? Satoshi's voice was deep and steady. A few seconds of stunned silence followed before realization dawned on Yajayo Yuzuki's face. Satoshi's question meant he had agreed to forge a Zanpakuto for them. Young Master Satoshi, it's for Yajayo Simon. Yuzuki did his best to contain his excitement as he spoke. Satoshi opened his eyes and glanced at Simon, then gave a slight nod. Although he had initially been reluctant to let the Yajayo family get involved with Zanpakuto, he had taken something from them. And since he had gained something valuable, it was only fair that he repaid the favor. Besides, as a master swordsman, Yajayo Simon was worthy of wielding a Zanpakuto. As he thought about the Shinkage Ryu's fluid, water-like swordsmanship, an image of the perfect Zanpakuto began to form in his mind. I understand. Leave the Tsuki no Sho here. Come back tomorrow for your Zanpakuto. With that, Satoshi turned around and left, taking the Tsuki no Sho with him. The room was left in stunned silence. Satoru, help me retrieve a cursed tool from the treasury that won. As the two Six Eyes users departed, Gojo Kumaen turned back to the Yajayo family with an apologetic look. Forgive us. While your clan has a request, young Master Satoshi's manner can be a bit direct. Chapter 102, Chapter 102, Hidden Functions. Before Kumaen could say anything further, Yajayo Yuzuki interrupted him. There's no need for apologies, Kumaen Dano. With Satoshi-kun and Satoru-kun in the Gojo family, your clan's future will only shine brighter. Simon, from this day forward, Yajayo Shinkage Ryu and Gojo Kyokushin Ryu shall be brother schools. Once you receive your Zanpakuto, never forget the debt of gratitude you owe to Satoshi-kun and the Gojo family. Yajayo Simon immediately lowered his head in acknowledgement, his heart filled with anticipation for the Zanpakuto that Satoshi would forge for him. While others viewed Satoshi's failed forging attempts as a setback, the Yajayo family had chosen to trust him completely. Rather than offering help when it was convenient, they had extended their hand when it truly mattered. Seeing how much this meant to the Yajayo clan, Gojo Kumaen fully grasped just how valuable the Zanpakuto was to them. For those without Jujutsu talent, a Zanpakuto was equivalent to an external organ, granting them the power of a Jujutsu sorcerer. Even a Kendo master, once disregarded by the Jujutsu world, could suddenly become a force to be reckoned with. If Zaman were to awaken a suitable Zanpakuto ability, he might very well stand at the pinnacle of the Jujutsu sorcerer ranks. Gojo Kumaen shook his head. No matter the outcome, this would ultimately benefit the Gojo family. Satoshi, you just started forging yesterday. You're really planning to forge another Zanpakuto today without taking a break. Satoru's concern was evident in his eyes. He believed that 2 consecutive forging failures must have dealt a significant blow to Satoshi. He didn't want him to push himself too hard. He wanted him to rest and approach the next forging attempt at full strength. Feeling Satoru's concern, Satoshi smiled warmly. But he wasn't as fragile as Satoru thought. Forging a Zanpakuto for Yajayo Simon wasn't just a matter of obligation, it was also a way to refine his own forging techniques. If his body truly couldn't handle it, he wouldn't force himself for the sake of the Yajayo family. More importantly, Tsuki no Sho had given him an entirely new method of accumulating experience. Completing this Zanpakuto was not just about repaying a debt, it was a chance to test this discovery. It's fine, Satoru. Just go and get me the cursed tool first. As for forging failures, haven't we already experienced plenty? It doesn't affect anything. We've already identified the issue. As long as I have the right materials, I can definitely complete the Zanpakuto. Seeing Satoshi's confidence, Satoru finally felt at ease. That didn't change the fact that finding the right materials remained a huge problem. Satoru silently resolved to speak with the clan leader and secure the cursed tool Satoshi needed no matter the cost. He could tell that this Zanpakuto meant even more to Satoshi than Sode no Shirayuki. A part of him couldn't help but wonder, what kind of Zanpakuto could make Gojo Satoshi, the forger himself, place such high expectations on it? Alright, Satoshi, I'll go get you the cursed tool. With that, Gojo Satoru vanished from sight, leaving Satoshi to walk leisurely toward the forge, holding Tsuki no Sho in his hands. Tsuki no Sho was truly a treasure. The first reading alone had given him 3,000 points of Zanjutsu experience, and subsequent readings might yield even more. If there were other swordsmanship classics on the same level as Tsuki no Sho, wouldn't that mean he had a faster and more efficient way to gain experience? Though he wasn't obsessed with swordsmanship, any method of improving his strength was worth exploring. If reading could increase Zanjutsu, then wouldn't the same principle apply to Hakuda and Hoho? But what about Kido? He still wasn't sure how Kido and Jujutsu techniques functioned in this world. That was something he'd have to figure out later. Discovering this hidden system function had completely lifted his spirits. At this rate, if he continued on this path, one day, he might truly become the strongest Shinigami, mastering every Zanpakuto and Shinigami art. Meanwhile, the 3 Yajayo members were on their way home. Their eyes shone with excitement. They hadn't expected things to go so smoothly. Even though they had given up Yajayo Jubei's legendary swordsmanship manual, they felt no regrets. Trading Tsuki no Sho for a Zanpakuto was an undeniable victory. Simon, with this, you can finally become a Jujutsu sorcerer? The future of our clan will truly be in your hands now. Yajayo Hidesugu let out a sigh of relief. As the strongest Jujutsu sorcerer in the Yajayo family, he had always carried the burden alone. Now that Simon would share that weight, their clan's future seemed brighter than ever. Yajayo Yuzuki added, this Zanpakuto will become a sacred treasure of Yajayo Shinkage Ryu. Simon, you must study it carefully and record everything about how to wield and master it. Perhaps, in the future, you will become our generation's Yajayo Jubei, and leave behind a swordsmanship classic that rivals Tsuki no Sho. Both Yajayo Hidesugu and Yajayo Yuzuki had absolute faith in Satoshi's Zanpakuto. Even if it didn't come with a technique perfectly suited for Simon, the sheer quality of the weapon alone would be enough to take his swordsmanship to new heights. After all, the memory of Suzumushi slicing through samurai swords like paper was still fresh in their minds. Simon suppressed his excitement and silently vowed to cherish this opportunity. Becoming a Jujutsu sorcerer had always been his dream. But because he lacked Jujutsu talent, he had dedicated himself entirely to Kendo instead. He had become the youngest Kendo master in the Yajayo family. Yet for a declining clan, a Kendo master alone wasn't enough. To restore the Yagyo family's status in the Jujutsu world, they needed stronger sorcerers. He had resigned himself to a lifetime of swordsmanship, never imagining that he would one day meet Gojo Satoshi. A child with 6 eyes, no cursed energy, yet the ability to forge Zanpakuto. Simon was convinced. This was a gift from fate. If he let this opportunity slip, he would forever be shut out from the Jujutsu world. He knew. The Zanpakuto that Gojo Satoshi forged for him would be perfect. And once he wielded it, the name Yagyo Simon would be carved into the annals of Jujutsu history. Chapter 103, Chapter 103, Spear Anthas, Bonus. In the world of Jujutsu, there seemed to be no secrets. The news that the 3 elites of the Yagyo family visited the Gojo clan early in the morning and personally delivered their ancestral tome, Tsuki no Sho, spread like wildfire, shaking the entire Jujutsu world. For the Yagyo family, this act was no less shocking than the Gojo clan handing out unlimited limitless techniques, the Zenin clan giving away the 10 Shadows technique, or the Kumo clan offering their blood manipulation to an outsider. Even if others couldn't use it, simply offering such a closely guarded secret was enough to make waves, showcasing the Yagyo family's boldness. Was a Zanpakuto truly worth such a steep price for them? After all, Tsuki no Sho and their mastery of Kenjutsu formed the foundation of the Yagyo family's power. If the Zanpakuto forged by Gojo Satoshi failed to meet their expectations, then the Yagyo family would be sacrificing their very foundation. Even their current standing might be at risk. Zenin clan. The Zenin clan was deeply moved upon hearing the news. The Yagyo family was willing to part with their most treasured secret in exchange for a single Zanpakuto. But if they sought to collaborate with Gojo Satoshi, they would inevitably have to operate under his conditions, missing out on other potential opportunities. The rest of the Jujutsu world might not fully understand, but the Zenin clan knew just how terrifying the Zanpakuto truly was. Forget the sheer variety of abilities, just so no Shirayuki alone, with its 7 techniques, could easily wipe out a smaller Jujutsu clan. And then there was Katen Kyakotsu, currently wielded by Toji, a blade perfectly suited for the 10 Shadows technique. The Yagyo family was undoubtedly braver than the Zenin clan. They might never get another opportunity to work with Gojo Satoshi again. Kumo clan. The Kumo clan, on the other hand, was displeased with the Yagyo family's decision. To them, it felt like the Yagyo were artificially inflating the value of Gojo Satoshi's Zanpakuto. How could a mere cursed tool be worthy of Tsuki no Sho? In the end, wasn't a Zanpakuto just a weapon for Jujutsu sorcerers? Meanwhile, Tsuki no Sho represented the accumulated wisdom of generations. Wasn't it far more valuable? This move by the Yagyo family would only serve to further inflate Gojo Satoshi's already considerable ego. As word spread, other smaller Jujutsu families began weighing their options. Was it truly worth it to exchange their most prized family tome for a Zanpakuto? The Yagyo family's gamble had now become the subject of intense scrutiny. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen after they received their Zanpakuto. Gojo clan's forge. You're so slow, Satoru. It was just a quick trip to the treasury, but it took you an hour. As Satoshi waited for Satoru, he had already read through Tsuki no Sho twice out of sheer boredom. By the time he was about to start his 3rd read-through, Satoru finally arrived. With an awkward smile, Satoru set down a spear-shaped cursed tool beside the forge. After retrieving the cursed tool, he had made another request to the clan head, hoping to acquire an even higher quality fire-based cursed tool. Through some pleading, he had managed to secure the clan head's agreement to search for one. But he wasn't going to tell Satoshi just yet. He wanted it to be a surprise. Something came up. Satoshi, is this the one? Satoshi casually placed Tsuki no Sho aside, stepped up to the forge, and reignited the furnace. A deep rumble echoed throughout the Gojo estate, signaling to all that Satoshi had begun forging once again. This time, however, no one dared to hold their breath in anticipation. After all, his back-to-back failures the previous night had left many worried about his health. Only Gojo Kuma-en remained calm. In his eyes, Satoshi would undoubtedly succeed this time. Satoshi had never been one to make empty promises. Since he had assured the Yagyo family, this Zanpakuto would be completed without fail. Besides, just moments ago in the clan head's chambers, he had learned the real reason behind Satoshi's failure the night before. A higher quality fire-type cursed tool. Kuma-en muttered to himself, excitement flickering in his eyes. If this deal satisfied the Yagyo family, then he might be able to procure the rare materials Satoshi needed through further negotiations. Such materials were incredibly rare, but Kuma-en had seen them before in his youth. Now, it was all up to Satoshi. If Satoru was right, if Satoshi truly intended to forge an exceptionally powerful Zanpakuto for himself, then this deal would likely proceed smoothly. As soon as the forge was relit, Gojo Shunichi and Gojo Takia rushed to the scene. They were both eager to see what kind of cursed tool Satoshi would create next. You don't need to be so tense, this one isn't difficult to forge. Oh, Uncle Shunichi, Tsuki no Sho is right there. Take a look for yourself, there's a lot in it that could benefit you. Satoshi spoke casually before fully immersing himself in his work. He had already decided on the Zanpakuto he would forge. Now, all that remained was to summon the sword spirit, channel its power, and melt the water-based cursed tool into the blade embryo. After an hour of focused effort, the forge's flames dimmed, the sound of hammering ceased, and Satoshi finally set down his tools. A crisp notification echoed in his mind. Ding! Congratulations, host! Successfully forged the Zanpakuto, Nijibana. In the display room, another Zanpakuto took its place among the others. Zanpakuto, Sode no Shirayuki, Possessor, Gojo Satoshi, Borrower, none. Zanpakuto, Suzumashi, Possessor, Gojo Satoshi, Borrower, Gojo Shunichi. Zanpakuto, Senbonzakura, Possessor, Gojo Satoshi, Borrower, Gojo Satoru. Zanpakuto, Nijibana, Possessor, Gojo Satoshi, Borrower, none. Satoshi lightly waved Nijibana in his hand. Beside him, Sode no Shirayuki trembled slightly, as if reacting to the presence of the new blade. Even in this world, these two Zanpakuto seemed to share an unresolved history. Satoshi set Nijihana down and gently comforted Sode no Shirayuki. These two blades must still carry echoes of their past of the battle between Kokaki Rukia and Shiba Kaien. Master and student. Vice captain and subordinate. The murderer and the slain. The entanglement between Nijibana and Sode no Shirayuki was undeniably complicated. However, in this world, they had no reason to fight anymore. Here, they could coexist. Satoru looked at the blade with curiosity. The forging process went unusually smoothly this time, he noted. It only confirmed what he already suspected. Yesterday's failure wasn't due to Satoshi's skills, but simply because the materials had been lacking. What's this Zanpakuto called? Satoru asked. Nijibana. Satoshi smiled. I think it's a perfect fit for the Yagyu-S Shinkage-ryu. Chapter 104, Chapter 104, Trident. The next day, the three masters of the Yagyu family once again arrived at the Gojo estate in person to claim the Zanpakuto, Nijibana. The Jujutsu world only knew that Gojo Satoshi had forged another Zanpakuto. However, no one knew what abilities this blade possessed or just how powerful it truly was. 3 days later, the Jujutsu organization released an official announcement. Yagyu Simon of the Yagyu family successfully eliminated 3 Grade 1 cursed spirits and was officially promoted to a Grade 1 Jujutsu sorcerer. The entire Jujutsu world was shaken. The Yagyu family now had 2 Grade 1 sorcerers? And more shockingly, Yagyu Simon had not even been a Jujutsu sorcerer before this. What was happening? Everyone quickly realized that the key to this development lay in the Zanpakuto that Yagyu Simon had recently acquired. After his promotion to Grade 1, Yagyu Simon returned to express his gratitude, accompanied by Yagyu Hidesugu. Once again, they were welcomed into the Gojo clan's grand dojo. And once again, it was Kumaen who hosted them. However, unlike before, both sides were noticeably more relaxed this time. Congratulations, Master Simon, on your successful promotion to Grade 1. I must thank Lord Kumaen once again for being the bridge that made this possible. The relationship between the two clans had grown increasingly harmonious, their interests now more aligned than ever. However, despite the friendly atmosphere, both Yagyu Simon and Yagyu Hidesugu couldn't shake a certain unease. When Yagyu Hidesugu had accompanied Shunichi to his promotion assessment, Kumaen had seemed to make things deliberately difficult for Satoshi. And yet now, as the representative of the Gojo clan, Kumaen looked completely unbothered. Throughout the entire negotiation process, he had remained unnervingly composed. Yagyu Hidesugu and Yagyu Simon exchanged a glance. The inner workings of great clans were truly intricate. But in the end, such matters had nothing to do with them. As long as the Yagyu family continued to prosper, that was all that mattered. After all, this time, the Yagyu family had been the clear winners of this transaction. Even now, Simon still found it difficult to believe the transformation he had undergone after unlocking Nijibana's Shikai. If not for Nijibana, he never would have been able to defeat those 3 Grade 1 cursed spirits. Satoshi and Satoru arrived late. Yet, no one in the room dared to show any displeasure. Both brothers were dressed in simple sportswear, having just returned from a training session at the Zenin estate. After these past few days of intense practice, Satoshi could feel himself on the verge of breaking a limit. He only needed the right opportunity to unlock Ho-Ho. However, he wasn't in a rush. For now, he was more interested in observing how well the Yagyu family was utilizing Nijibana. Through Nijibana's perspective, he had already witnessed Yagyu Simon's strength firsthand. At this point, Simon was on par with Shunichi. It was a rare opportunity to see 2 true kendo masters clash. Satoshi made a casual suggestion. How about a match? Simon and Shunichi met each other's gaze, and in that instant, sparks flew. Simon had not forgotten his previous defeat. Now that he wielded a Zanpakuto on par with Shunika's, he had every intention of settling the score. Likewise, Shunichi refused to admit defeat. That last match had caught him off guard. If Satoshi hadn't forged Suzumashi for him that day, he would have been utterly humiliated. This time, he would make sure Simon understood what it meant to be one of the 4 true masters of kendo. Kumaen, watching from the sidelines, was full of doubt. He kept glancing at Satoshi, completely unable to figure out his true intentions. Of course, Kumaen didn't have the system. He had no idea that Satoshi was merely using this match to push both sword wielders to their limits, hoping it would trigger a Bankai awakening. At the same time, he would passively gain experience points. A perfect win-win. And since the duel wouldn't just be a kendo match, but a full-fledged battle between Zanpakuto users, the 2 fighters moved the battlefield to the Gojo estate's training grounds. Had they stayed in the dojo, activating their Shikai would have reduced the entire structure to rubble. Satoshi, who do you think will win? Satoru nudged his brother, whispering with amusement. Uncle Shunichi, Satoshi answered without hesitation. Uncle Shunichi was already a Jujutsu sorcerer before, so he's naturally more experienced with techniques. Moreover, from Satoshi's perspective, Nijibana didn't hold any obvious advantages over Suzumashi. In a real battle, it all depended on how the two wielders performed. I disagree, Satoru smirked. Wanna bet? If Shunichi wins, I owe you a favor. If not, you owe me one. Satoshi glanced at his brother and saw that Satoru was clearly scheming something. But he didn't overthink it and simply nodded. It was a 50-50 matchup anyway. Meanwhile, as the two chatted, Simon and Shunichi had already exchanged multiple strikes. The strength of their Zanpakuto allowed them to fight without holding back. Hidetsugu and Kumaen observed in silence, knowing they were witnessing two of the strongest warriors from their respective clans. Although the outcome wouldn't impact the standings of Yagyu Shinkage Ryu or Gojo Kyokushin Ryu, both sides still hoped for their champion to prevail. While they watched with bated breath, Satoshi simply sat back, enjoying the show. Meanwhile, system notifications kept ringing in his mind. During the Battle of the Sword Borrowers, corresponding experience is being converted. Swordsmanship experience +1. During the Battle of the Sword Borrowers, corresponding experience is being converted. Swordsmanship experience +1. During the Battle of the Sword Borrowers, corresponding experience is being converted. Swordsmanship experience +1. No matter how small, every bit of experience mattered. At this rate, he would gain at least 100 or 200 points of kendo experience from this fight alone. As the battle progressed, both warriors began to crave more than just a kendo match. They locked eyes in mutual understanding. Then, in perfect sync, they leaped backward and raised their Zanpakuto. Their voices rang out. Cry, Suzumashi. Rankle the seas and heavens, Nijibana. Two powerful forces erupted from their blades. Both swords began to transform. Suzumashi retained its general form. But Nijibana. It was no longer a katana. Kumaen and Hidetsugu were a little surprised. This was the first time either of them had seen Nijibana's Shikai. They had never expected it to take such a form. Simon was no longer a swordsman. He now wielded a trident. To be continued. Chapter 105, Chapter 105, The Real Zanpakuto Battle, Bonus. At this moment, Nijibana had fully taken its Shikai form, a trident with a spiral-shaped spearhead at the tip. Hidetsugu looked at Simon in surprise. A master of Kenjutsu had now become a wielder of a long-handled weapon. Gojo Kumaen felt his understanding of the Zanpakuto shift completely. Until now, he had always believed that since it was called a Zanpakuto, it would remain in the form of a katana. But now, it seemed that once the wielder chanted the release phrase, the Zanpakuto could unleash a new form, unlocking a power beyond its initial state. In other words, while every Zanpakuto initially took the form of a katana, their true shape could vary greatly once released. Up until this point, the only liberated Zanpakuto Kumaen had seen was Sode no Shirayuki, which had retained its katana form. That misconception had now been shattered. Shunichi saw the transformation of Nijibana in Simon's hands and felt a wave of helplessness. As expected, once a kendo match involved Zanpakuto, it was no longer just about swordsmanship. However, a determined light flashed in his eyes. Whether in Kenjutsu or Jujutsu, he would never allow himself to lose. Now, the true battle between sorcerers would begin. On the other side, Yagyu Simon, who had just unleashed Nijibana's Shikai, forced himself to suppress his growing excitement. Seeing Satoshi's satisfied expression, he was eager to prove himself even more. Simon spun Nijibana with one hand, and waves of water surged around him. The water moved in sync with his attacks, rushing toward Gojo Shunichi. This was Nijibana's ability, the power that had elevated him from a mere Kenjutsu master to a full-fledged Jujutsu sorcerer. Shunichi blocked the incoming waves with a swift defensive maneuver before quickly creating distance between them. Unlike Nijibana, an elemental-type Zanpakuto, Suzumashi fell into the Kido-based category, its abilities far more unpredictable. With Suzumashi's sonic attacks, Shunichi could engage at both close and long range. However, in close combat against an opponent like Simon, who had powerful physical attacks, he decided to rely on long-range spells instead. Suzumashi is Haiki, Kume. As Shinika's voice fell, Suzumashi vibrated violently, emitting a high-pitched buzzing sound similar to the cry of an insect. A grey wave of sound pulsed outward from the blade, surging straight toward Yagyu Simon. If Simon failed to dodge, the hypnotic effect of Suzumashi's ability would determine the battle's outcome in an instant. Unfortunately for Shunichi, Simon was already prepared. The moment Suzumashi's technique activated, Simon instantly dodged, escaping the range of the sonic wave. At the same time, he used Nijibana's water ability to launch 3 sharp water projectiles, forcing Shunichi to break off his attack. Both attacks had failed. Hidetsugu, watching from the sidelines, felt a pang of guilt. He hadn't expected Satoshi to arrange this battle. On their way here, he had already discussed Shinika's Zanpakuto techniques with Simon, which was why Simon had been able to guard against Suzumashi's abilities from the start. On the other side, Satoru grinned as he watched the exchange unfold, his expression full of amusement. This was precisely why he had made the bet with Satoshi. Simon's understanding of Shinika's abilities gave him an advantage. And so, the duel continued. Water splashes and sonic waves clashed at the center of the training grounds, creating a spectacle for all the onlookers. This was the first real battle between Zanpakuto in this world. Everyone present was witnessing history. Half an hour later, Gojo Shinichi and Yajayo Simon stood opposite each other, breathing heavily. The prolonged intensity of the battle had drained them, yet neither had managed to gain a decisive upper hand. Continuing this deadlock was pointless. Shinichi glanced at Satoshi and saw that he was still watching with great interest. Not wanting to let Satoshi down, he made a decision. Simon, let's end this with one final technique. It's time to bring this battle to a close. Shinika's voice echoed across the training grounds. Simon stopped spinning Nijibana and gave Satoshi a serious look. Seeing that Satoshi showed no objections, he nodded. Then let's show him the true power of our Zanpakuto. A hint of pride flashed in Simon's eyes. He wanted Satoshi to witness the strongest technique he had learned. He believed that Satoshi would be shocked by what came next. The two warriors took their positions on opposite ends of the training grounds, gripping their Zanpakuto tightly. Then, their voices rang out simultaneously. Suzumashi Nishiki, Benihiko, Nijibana, rage through the seas and heavens. In an instant, Suzumashi transformed into countless razor-sharp blades that rained down from above, filling the sky like a storm of crimson locusts. At the same time, Simon hurled Nijibana forward. The spinning trident rapidly gathered the surrounding water, forming a massive sphere of churning torrents. A powerful suction force radiated outward, making it difficult for the spectators to stay on their feet. Kuma-en's eyes widened in shock. The earlier Zanpakuto techniques had already amazed him. He had thought he understood their power. But now, witnessing these final techniques firsthand, he realized just how terrifying a Zanpakuto could truly be. How could a mere cursed tool generate such overwhelming power? The abilities of Suzumashi and Nijibana had far surpassed Kuma-en's imagination. Previously, he had believed that Gojo Satoru's Senbonzakura was a special case. Its ability to form a Sakura domain over the entire Gojo estate was already astonishing. But now, he realized he had been mistaken. Every Zanpakuto forged by Satoshi possessed techniques and abilities that defied all logic. As an outsider to the Yajayo family, Satoshi had likely held back when forging Nijibana. And yet, it still displayed such devastating power. A sudden wave of regret washed over Kuma-en. Trading Nijibana for Tsuki no Sho had seemed like a fair exchange at first. Now, it felt like an enormous loss. Compared to Kuma-en's regret, Hide-sugu was filled with nothing but joy. This was his first time witnessing Nijibana's ultimate technique. And to his surprise, its destructive power was even greater than Suzumashi's Benihiko. Such a powerful Zanpakuto, and it had been willingly traded. Gojo Satoshi truly was an honorable man. This young master of the Gojo family was nothing less than a savior to the Yajayo clan. As everyone stood in stunned silence, Nijibana and Suzumashi clashed violently in midair. Chapter 106, Chapter 106, Final Technique. The flying blades of Suzumashi continued slicing through the torrents, while the churning waters of Nijibana consumed the blades one by one. For a brief moment, the two forces seemed evenly matched. In the end, as Suzumashi's countless blades were fully expended, the powerful suction of the reverse torrent weakened and eventually dissipated. At that moment, the remaining energies of Suzumashi and Nijibana fused together, causing the entire water sphere to expand violently. The sphere reached its limit, then detonated, sending a shockwave straight into the sky. Within seconds, a torrential downpour engulfed the entire Gojo estate, covering a 1-kilometer radius. To ordinary people, it was an eerie, localized rainfall, a freak weather event with no apparent cause. However, to those within the Jujutsu world, the meaning was clear. A battle powerful enough to alter the weather had just taken place at the Gojo estate. What's going on? Why is it suddenly pouring rain? There was a massive energy fluctuation coming from the training grounds just now. Should we go check it out? No need. I heard that Master Shinichi and Master Simon were having a sparring match, but there were massive waves rising into the Gojo clan had lost an invaluable treasure. The final technique. Hearing those words, Satoshi chuckled and shook his head. Who told you that the ultimate techniques of Nijibana and Suzumashi were the ones you just saw? There was a confident arrogance in his tone, yet Hide-sugu felt no resentment toward it. Wait, could it be? A bold realization struck Hide-sugu. That was only their Shikai. If Yajayo Simon manages to reach Bankai, that will be the true final technique. Satoshi nodded slightly, glancing at Shinichi and Simon, who still held their Zanpakuto firmly in their hands. Simon has already mastered Shikai in such a short time. That's impressive. But I hope you achieve Bankai as soon as possible. That will be the true sign of your worthiness to wield Nijibana. It was an unusual sight, a child speaking to grown men as if he were their superior. Yet neither Simon nor the others felt even the slightest bit of dissatisfaction. Simon listened intently, treating Satoshi's words as absolute truth. In his eyes, as the creator of Nijibana, every word Satoshi spoke carried profound meaning and had to be carefully considered. Chapter 107, Chapter 107, Satoru also wants to invest in Yorozue, bonus. After Satoshi made his remark with a smile, he stopped engaging with the Yajayo family and turned to leave. This battle had already brought him significant rewards. Not only had his Senjutsu experience improved, but his overall combat awareness had also sharpened. Satoshi felt he was on the verge of a breakthrough. Next, it was time to find Toji and verify his theories. Oh, Satoshi, wait for me? That was a draw just now, right? Don't walk so fast. Satoru called out, quickly following Satoshi. With that, only 4 people remained by the training grounds: Shinichi, Kuma-en, Simon, and Hidetsugu. Bankai. Simon muttered, his expression not one of loss but deep thought. Nejibana's potential was proving to be even greater than expected, reigniting Simon's competitive spirit. However, Shinichi had only used his Shikai's technique, he hadn't fully released his Bankai. This meant his Zanpakuto had not yet entered its true Bankai state. He couldn't let Satoshi down. Hey, Satoshi, so was that a draw? Satoru asked. I guess so. There wasn't a clear winner, after all. Satoshi responded casually. Hearing this, Satoru suddenly grinned. Then I won the bet, right? Satoshi froze for a moment, then turned his head, looking exasperated. Uncle Shinichi didn't lose. Why would that mean you won? Satoru's smile widened as if his plan had succeeded. The bet was that if Shinichi won, you won. And if he didn't, I won. Shinichi hasn't won yet, so technically, I'm the winner, right? Satoshi suddenly realized that Satoru had been playing a word game. No wonder his expression had been a bit off earlier. If things were calculated this way, then as long as Shinichi wasn't declared the winner, even if it ended in a draw, his cunning brother would still come out on top. Satoshi let out a helpless sigh. He really didn't understand what Satoru was trying to gain from this little scheme. Fine, Satoru, I miscalculated. I didn't think you'd be this devious. Alright, tell me, what do you want? Crossing his arms, Satoshi looked at Satoru, who looked exactly like him, trying to figure out what he was after. Seeing Satoshi concede so easily, Satoru, who had been prepared for a long argument, was momentarily stunned. After hesitating for a few seconds, he rubbed his hands together and said seriously, "You've been working with Toji lately to build some kind of secret base, right? Let me in on it too, I don't want to be left out." Satoshi was speechless. So that whole bet, that whole trickery just to make sure he could be involved. Satoshi shook his head in disbelief. You can't. Satoru's face fell the moment he saw Satoshi shake his head. No, that's not it, Satoshi sighed. Toji and I weren't trying to exclude you. It's just that I think he can handle this project well on his own. But if you want to be involved from the start, I welcome it. Just know that your role will be more participatory. This kind of thing is easier for an adult like Toji to manage, and honestly, he has more money. Satoshi explained, then went on to outline his plan for Yorozuya. Satoru's eyes lit up in understanding. So you're short on funds to build Yorozuya? No problem, I have money. Satoru had quickly grasped Satoshi's current financial struggle and patted his chest confidently. You have money. Satoshi was baffled. They both only received so much New Year's money every year, and the clan head didn't treat them differently. If he barely had any funds, where did Satoru get his money? When Satoru revealed that it was an annual gift from the Twin Curse faction, Satoshi suddenly felt that life was incredibly unfair. He only got a tiny amount of money each year, but Satoru had achieved financial independence at 6. Satoshi's teeth clenched in frustration. Satoru laughed. This year, they'll probably give you one too. Satoru had already noticed the shift in their family's attitude towards Satoshi. With his current standing, there was no way the clan would continue treating him like they did in past years. He had also sensed that the relationship between Gojo Kuma-en's faction and Satoshi was improving. Alright, I don't really care, as long as the money's enough. Then I'll go ahead and use your funds too. This way, Toji can design it even more comfortably. Satoshi spoke with a hint of resentment before dropping the subject. He turned and continued walking toward the forging house. Hey, Satoshi, what exactly is Yorozuya for? It's nothing, just a little project of mine. Is it gonna be our new base? No, it's my shop. You're just an employee. Wait, what? I invested money too, I should be a shareholder. If you keep talking nonsense, I won't let you join at all. Fine. After seeing Yajayo Hidetsugu and Yajayo Simon off, Gojo Kuma-en reported the matter to the clan head. As he spoke at length about the power of the Zanpakuto, a satisfied smile appeared on the old man's face. He could clearly sense the shift in Kuma-en's attitude, as well as how much importance he now placed on Satoshi. This was exactly what he wanted to see. After all, rather than forcing Satoshi to take power from Kuma-en in the future, it would be much better for it to be a smooth transition. Kuma-en, do you think it was a loss for Satoshi to forge that Zanpakuto for the Yajayo family? The clan head saw through Kuma-en's thoughts instantly. Of course. Giving a powerful Zanpakuto to anyone could turn them into a formidable Jujutsu sorcerer. And yet, all we got in return was a single Tsuki no-sho. That hardly seems like a fair trade, does it? Kuma-en was blunt. Although the Gojo clan oversaw Kyokushin Ryu, they didn't particularly prioritize Zanjutsu. Otherwise, Gojo Shinichi wouldn't be the top Kyokushin Ryu swordsman. In the current Jujutsu world, cursed techniques were king. Kyokushin Ryu was just a minor branch of the Gojo clan, primarily serving as a training ground for family members who couldn't awaken cursed energy. So in Kuma-en's view, no matter how valuable the Tsuki no-sho was, it was still just a resource for a niche group, ordinary people, and the rare Jujutsu sorcerer who practiced swordsmanship. No matter how he looked at it, this was a loss. Hearing this, the old man chuckled. Slowly, he rose from his recliner and walked to the window. Looking out at the bleak scenery beyond, he let out another sigh. Chapter 108, Chapter 108, Surpass Your Limits. Kuma-en, sometimes we can't always focus on short-term gains and losses. The actions of the Yagyo family hold great significance for Satoshi. If you are familiar with history, you might know the story of the daimyo buying horse bones for 1,000 gold pieces. The Yagyo family is the horse bones that Satoshi bought. Likewise, in the future, anyone with the same mentality will offer their most valuable possessions to try and trade with him. This is exactly what Satoshi wants. Furthermore, from the perspective of the clan, this transaction has secured a firm ally for the entire Gojo family. The old man tugged at the corner of his mouth with effort, then turned to look at Gojo Kuman. Do you really think Satoshi is just an innocent child with no caution regarding the Zanpakuto he gives away? Satoshi's thoughts run deeper than yours or mine. He was born with knowledge and maybe even more exceptional than Satoru. Kuman, the future of the Gojo family is in your hands. After speaking, the old man reclined in his chair and closed his eyes to rest. Kuman remained silent for a moment before finally preparing to leave. Wait. You and I will go to the forging house together. I want to see Satoshi again. The matter of the fire-cursed tool must be taken seriously. The old man's voice rang out once more. Gojo Kuman gave a small nod and sat down, waiting for him to recover his energy. Outside the forge, Toji and Satoshi, who had been called back temporarily, faced each other. Satoshi, are you sure you want me to go all out? Toji asked, skeptical. He had no idea what had gotten into Satoshi to make him suddenly insist on a direct confrontation. Satoshi nodded, his gaze fixed on the experience gauge that was stuck at 99.9%. He realized that only by passing Toji's test could he successfully break through his limits. This would be the culmination of all the combat experience he had accumulated so far. Alright, watching, for some time. Satoshi, the Gojo clan will fully support you. That high-quality fire-type cursed tool, leave it to me. The old man's first words brought a pleasant surprise to Satoshi. Inside the forging house, the clan head ran his fingers over the remnants of a failed Reincarnating forging attempt, his wrinkled face full of astonishment. Beside him, Kuman held another fragment, his expression mirroring the same shock. Even as failures, these broken Zanpakuto prototypes exuded an incredible presence. If Satoshi truly succeeded in forging Reincarnating, just how terrifying would the final product be? So, Satoshi, will a grade 1 fire-type cursed tool suffice? The old man asked gravely. Satoshi hesitated before nodding. A grade 1 cursed tool meets the bare minimum, but if it were a special grade cursed tool, the success rate would be significantly higher. Reincarnating far surpasses ordinary Zanpakuto, and guests appeared to be enjoying themselves. After the banquet, Satoshi excused himself, claiming exhaustion. Kamoshin, meanwhile, used the pretense of a stroll through the Gojo estate's garden to clear his mind. Not long after, he arrived at Gojo Katetsu's quarters. TCH. So it didn't work? I didn't expect the Gojo clan to be so well prepared that there wasn't even a chance for the evidence to be destroyed. Fortunately, after the shoso leaves the human body, it doesn't stand out much. I'll just reclaim it first. The moment Kamoshin reached out to touch the shoso, his expression shifted. Something was wrong. The surface of the object was wet. That shouldn't be possible. If no one had discovered this cursed object before, it should have remained here for several days. No matter how much time had passed, the surface should never be moist. It looked as if it had just been retrieved from water. Kamoshin's face darkened. Instantly sensing danger, he turned to leave. But it was too late. 3 figures had already appeared around him. Ahem, Grand Master Shin, it's unfortunate that we Gojo didn't give you the opportunity to erase the evidence. Kuman stepped forward, escorting the clan head into the room. Kamoshin knew immediately, he had been exposed. Then, his gaze fell on Satoshi. Kamoshin's eyes flashed with murderous intent. As long as he wasn't caught in the act, the Gojo family wouldn't have concrete evidence linking him to the shoso. Without hesitation, he activated his technique, ready to attack. But in that instant, an overwhelming chill overtook him. His eyes widened. The katana that Satoshi had carried throughout the banquet, previously sheathed in its ordinary form, had turned pure white. First dance, moon white. A brilliant white light bloomed beneath Kamoshin's feet. A second later, he lost all control of his body, completely frozen solid. So this was the power of a Zanpakuto? It was the first time Kamoshin had experienced its effects firsthand. And only now did he truly comprehend the uniqueness and terrifying potential of a Zanpakuto. He had been right to order Shoso to assassinate Gojo Satoshi. If these weapons were allowed to spread, traditional cursed tools would become obsolete, reduced to mere relics of the past. For blacksmiths like himself, whose livelihood depended on traditional cursed tools, the emergence of Zanpakuto was an existential threat. Kamoshin clenched his teeth. It was a shame. Not only had he failed to eliminate the threat, but he had also been caught red-handed. Half an hour later. What? You want Kamo's special grade cursed tool, Keijiro? Kamoshin's expression twisted as Gojo Kuman made his demand. In that moment, everything clicked. The Gojo clan had been searching for a fire-type cursed tool. He recalled a grade 2 cursed tool that had passed through his hands before. Now, it was clear, the Gojo family had no interest in debating the morality of what had transpired. What they wanted was Keijiro. That's right. Hand over Keijiro to the Gojo clan, and we will not pursue your crimes. The death of Gojo Katetsu will be written off. Kuman's eyes held a fierce edge. Katetsu had been a prodigious talent. Kuman could never forgive his murder, but as the Gojo family's representative, he had to prioritize. Right now, acquiring the fire-type cursed tool was the highest priority. Everything else could be set aside. Kamoshin sneered. I see. So the Zanpakuto your brat is trying to forge requires Keijiro, a fire-type cursed tool. Huh? You arrogant little brat. Do you seriously think you can use one of the rarest fire-type cursed tools to forge a fire-type Zanpakuto? Kamoshin's expression grew cold as he recalled the sheer power of Sode no Shirayuki. An ice-type Zanpakuto was already this formidable. If Gojo Satoshi successfully forged a peak-grade fire-type Zanpakuto, the balance of power could be completely upended. If he handed over Keijiro, he would be giving his greatest enemy an unparalleled weapon. You Gojo really underestimate special-grade cursed tools. That brat of yours is delusional for even considering it, and you're even crazier for indulging him. As far as I know, the cursed tool he used before was only grade 1 at best. A child who hasn't even successfully reforged a special-grade cursed tool, do you seriously think he can turn Keijiro, a relic enshrined by the Kumo clan for generations, into a Zanpakuto? Outside the chamber, Satoshi paused slightly before pushing the door open. From Kamoshin's words, it was clear, negotiations weren't going smoothly. Not that it mattered. This was just one approach. Kamoshin foolishly believed that as long as he perished in the Gojo estate, the Shoso incident would be buried with him. But that was impossible. With the Gojo family's current strength, if they took direct action, the Kumo clan would never be able to resist. Handing over Keijiro was inevitable. Of course, Kumo-an preferred not to take things that far. The Kumo clan, while losing influence, was still one of the 3 great families. Gojo had no desire to eliminate them entirely. But if Kamoshin remained stubborn, then Kumo-an wouldn't hesitate to make everything public, exposing the Kumo clan's secret dealings with forbidden cursed objects and their attempt to assassinate the Gojo clan's Six Eyes heir. A scandal of that magnitude would plunge the Kumo clan into the same disgrace they suffered 150 years ago. And that was an outcome the Kumo clan could not afford. Chapter 111. Chapter 111. Satoshi the Restless Gambler? Bonus. Satoshi walked in with a smile and sat across from Kamoshin. Kamoshin's expression darkened, his entire face contorted with malice. He had underestimated Satoshi. If not for his presence, he might have successfully escaped by now. Faced with such undisguised hostility, Satoshi's youthful face showed only mild curiosity. Grandmaster Kumo, we've never had a past grudge, nor have we recently clashed. So why did you try to kill me using Shoso? If I recall correctly, today is our first meeting, isn't it? Kamoshin remained silent. It was as if the man who had showered Satoshi with praises during the banquet was someone else entirely. Satoshi smirked, a sharp edge to his expression. Then let me guess. Is it because I forged a Zanpakuto? Is it because Zanpakuto threatened the traditional cursed tool industry? Is it because you relics are afraid of me, the one who created the Zanpakuto? Satoshi fired off each question deliberately, one by one. A flicker of shock crossed Kamoshin's eyes. He knew Satoshi was intelligent, but hadn't expected him to see through everything so clearly. The child before him wasn't just the Gojo clan's Six Eyes prodigy, he was more like a demon with eyes that could peer into the depths of the human soul. Come now, Grandmaster Kumo. Let's play a game. Let's make a bet. Let's wager on something you excel at. Do you believe I am incapable of reforging a special grade cursed tool and turning it into a brand new Zanpakuto? Satoshi ran his fingers along the pristine white blade of Sode no Shirayuki, his tone brimming with confidence. Kamoshin scoffed, unwilling to back down in his area of expertise. You are doomed to fail. Special grade cursed tools can be destroyed, but they cannot be reforged. Their abilities are set in stone the moment they are created. His voice was resolute. He was, after all, a renowned authority on cursed tool forging. Is that so? Satoshi casually placed Sode no Shirayuki against Kamoshin's neck. The blade's freezing touch sent a shiver down Kumo's spine, his body instinctively stiffening as if the sword would slice his throat at any moment. Kamoshin trembled, his breath unsteady. Closing his eyes, he muttered, "Kill me, Gojo brat. It doesn't change the fact that you cannot forge it. Oh? Then allow me to grant Grandmaster Kumo's wish." Satoshi chuckled, the tip of Sode no Shirayuki pressing slightly against Kamoshin's throat. A light stroke almost imperceptible and an eerie sensation spread across Kumo's neck. In an instant, the skin froze over. Kamoshin's body convulsed, his eyes filled with despair. He had resigned himself to dying in the Gojo estate, yet now, faced with the moment, he found he wasn't quite as accepting of death as he'd thought. Haha, Grandmaster Kumo, relax. It was just a joke. Satoshi withdrew his Zanpakuto, the frigid air dissipating instantly. Warmth returned to the room. Kamoshin instinctively reached for his neck. No wound. He had survived. The realization left him feeling oddly relieved. Just then, Satoshi's expression softened into a warm, almost playful smile. Pouring a cup of hot tea, he set it down in front of Kamoshin. Since Grandmaster Kumo believes I can't reforge a special grade cursed tool, let's make a bet. Kamoshin stared at the boy. Aside from his age, there was nothing childish about him. He finally conceded. What bet? Satoshi smirked, his lips curling into a playful grin. Let's bet on whether I can successfully reforge Keijiro into a Zanpakuto. If I fail, the Gojo clan will act as if the Shoso incident never happened. You will remain president of the Blacksmith Association, the undisputed master of the craft, and the Kumo clan's reputation will remain intact. Kamoshin's expression twitched. His heart wavered slightly. And if I lose? Then you will return to the Kumo clan and handle the matter yourself. Settle your debts before your death. The Gojo clan will still pretend the Shoso incident never happened, and your family's reputation will remain untouched. Satoshi lazily rubbed his earlobe, flashing an ugly grin. After all, you do have the blood of a Gojo on your hands. And now that the victim's kin has come to collect their due, you refuse to put anything on the table. Kamoshin took a deep breath, shifting his gaze toward Gojo Kyuman. He refused to believe Satoshi had the authority to make such a decision on behalf of the entire Gojo clan. Kyuman, sensing Kumo's doubts, turned towards Satoshi. He had already grasped what Satoshi was aiming for. Suppressing his astonishment, he nodded firmly. What Satoshi said stands. As the representative of the Gojo clan, I approve of this bet. Is this really the same Satoshi I've been neglecting? How could he possess such sharp, commanding authority? Have I been blind all these years? How did I fail to notice this about Satoshi? Is this what the clan head meant by the terror of one who is born knowing? With just a few words, Kamoshin has been maneuvered into a corner. Kamoshin hesitated, but at that moment, the doors swung open. The clan head entered, his pace slow but deliberate. On behalf of the Gojo clan, I acknowledge the bet between you and Satoshi. The terms are set. Satoshi must forge a Zanpakuto from Keijiro. The old man's presence crushed the last of Kamoshin's resistance. With the Gojo clan's formal backing, there was no doubt left. Satoshi's bet was real. Fine. I accept. But don't underestimate special grade cursed tools, Gojo brat. There is a fundamental difference between them and grade 1 cursed tools. I'll be waiting to see you fail. Having come to terms with his survival, Kamoshin regained his composure and immediately tried to rattle Satoshi with taunts. But Satoshi remained indifferent. Grandmaster Kumo, please arrange for someone to deliver Keijiro. Everything else was secondary. What mattered was forging Ryujin Jaka. Wait. Kamoshin suddenly spoke up again. Kyuman frowned. Kamoshin, don't push your luck. This bet is already generous toward the Kumo clan. Kamoshin shook his head. I'm not asking to change the terms. I simply wish to witness the entire forging process. His request wasn't without reason. He firmly believed Satoshi would fail. But in the process, he could observe how Zanpakuto were forged, perhaps even uncover their secrets. Chapter 112. Chapter 112, Know Thyself. After the incident, Kamoshin finally realized that there would inevitably be animosity between the Kumo and Gojo clans. He had to start preparing in advance to counter the Gojo clan. And the best option for now was, naturally, to study the forging methods behind Zanpakuto. Kamoshin was, in fact, the only true cursed tool grandmaster, and he had absolute confidence in this field. He believed that as long as he observed carefully, he would be able to pinpoint the core principles behind Gojo Satoshi's forging techniques. Kyuman looked hesitant. To be honest, Kamoshin's suggestion wasn't unreasonable. It involved matters of life and death. However, this also touched on Satoshi's secrets, and he couldn't help but worry that Kamoshin might really succeed in learning Satoshi's forging techniques. Even though he now trusted Satoshi deeply, the fact remained that there was still a small chance of failure. Even if it was only a small probability, as the representative of the Gojo clan, he had to guard against it. Thinking this through, Kyuman was worried that Satoshi would feel cornered, so he prepared to directly refuse Kamoshin's seemingly reasonable request. Right now, the Gojo clan was the sword, and the Kumo clan was the fish on the chopping board. A person at the mercy of others, why bother talking about fairness? But just as he opened his mouth, Satoshi smiled and said, "Sure, that request can be granted." Kyuman nodded stiffly. Satoshi really did act beyond common sense, didn't he? And to think he was worrying about him just now. Inside the forge. For the first time, Satoshi felt that the large room was a little cramped. It was the first time so many people had gathered in the forge. The participants in the bet, Gojo Satoshi and Kamoshin. Spectators, Gojo Satoru, Gojo Kyuman, Gojo Shinichi, Gojo Takiya, and Zenintoji. Satoshi began forging the Zanpakuto alone while 6 people looked on. He touched the still-warm cursed tool, Keijiro, then felt the item in his pocket that he had improvised from the estate owner. His heart slowly calmed. A blade like fire, this was Satoshi's last shot. If he missed this forging, it would be extremely difficult to find another fire-type cursed tool material. If he failed, he could essentially say goodbye to Ryujin Jaka in this world. The furnace roared to life, and the rumbling echoed throughout the Gojo estate. Everyone knew, Satoshi was forging again. I heard that the president of the Jujutsu Blacksmiths Association visited the Gojo estate today to verify whether young Master Satoshi is qualified to join the association. This forging must be Kamoshin's test for him, right? I believe young Master Satoshi will definitely meet the Grandmaster's standards. After all, both Sode no Shirayuki and young Master Satoru's Senbonzakura, those are epic-making cursed tools. Right. Even though they were made for outsiders, one turned Zenintoji, just a regular guy, into the strongest member of the Zenin clan, and the other helped Yajayu Simon rise to a grade 1 Jujutsu sorcerer. From now on, with young Master Satoshi and Satoru, the Gojo clan can basically dominate the entire Jujutsu world. Cut the nonsense. Don't embarrass young Master Satoshi and Satoru. The weather's awful today, it's getting dark, and looks like a storm's coming. Creepy. You think it'll affect our ability to watch the forging? Watch? You mean listen from outside? Like you aren't doing the same. Members of the Gojo clan waited silently, full of anticipation for Satoshi's results. Many were already imagining the shock on outsiders' faces when the news spread, Satoshi joining the Blacksmiths Association. The other clans received similar information. They also assumed Satoshi was firing up the furnace for Kamoshin's evaluation. Only a few more perceptive clans had lingering doubts. From their understanding, Kamoshin didn't like Satoshi. How could he start an evaluation just one day after visiting? Something didn't add up, but they lacked key intel. They could only keep their suspicions buried in their hearts. What they didn't know was that this seemingly ordinary forging was connected to the life and death of the president of the Blacksmiths Association. 1 hammer, 2 hammers, 3 hammers. This time, Satoshi didn't follow the usual forging technique. He chose to strike the cursed tool Keijiro first. A special grade cursed tool was indeed a special grade. Even after being subjected to prolonged high-temperature forging, the blade merely felt warm, it never actually got hot. Seeing this, Satoshi finally understood why Kamoshin had been so confident. Fire-type cursed tools were rare, and due to their inherent traits, their fire resistance was extraordinarily high. This made reforging them significantly more difficult than tools of other attributes. Still, that was no problem for Satoshi. If 1 hour wasn't enough, he'd take another. His body, strengthened by heavenly restriction, had undergone extensive, seemingly pointless training, but it was enough to support this forging session. He was no longer the little weakling who got dizzy after forging Sode no Shirayuki. And so, the monotonous, laborious forging process began. After a full hour, Toji had already given up watching. Shunichi was rubbing his eyes. Even Satoru had begun to doze off. Only Takia, Kuma-en, and Kamoshin were still intently watching Satoshi's movements. Kamoshin, this brat Satoshi is really something. Swinging that hammer for an hour without even flinching? Fine, I'll play along. I want to see just what you can make out of Keijiro. Gojo Takia, Satoshi's forging this time feels different from usual. Did he hit a wall? I keep getting the feeling that Kamoshin is looking at Satoshi strangely. There's something off about his mood. Gojo Kuma-en, that resolve, that posture, that physique. I really underestimated Satoshi's growth these past years. Honestly, he might already be more in control of the Gojo clan than even Satoru. Each person stood from a different perspective and carried their own thoughts. But none of that affected Satoshi. At this moment, he was fully absorbed in the reforging of the special grade cursed tool Keijiro. It was a tough one to break through, but that only ignited the fighting spirit of Gojo Satoshi, a swordsmith transformed into a god of the forge. In front of Uritsu Nimeya, there's no blade he can't remake. Chapter 113, Chapter 113, Learn, Reflect, Rebuild, Bonus. And so, Satoshi struck Keijiro again and again, and the once sturdy blade gradually began to curve, visible to the naked eye. Seeing this, Kamoshin's expression changed drastically, while Takia let out a breath of relief. Kamoshin never expected that the boy in front of him could actually alter Keijiro's form. This was a special grade cursed tool, and one of the most difficult fire-type tools to reforge. Resonating with the spirit of the sword god, Satoshi hammered Keijiro into shape bit by bit. The forging was progressing, and this counted as the first step on a long and arduous path. Everyone saw hope, but only Satoshi knew how many more obstacles lay ahead. After another hour of forging, he successfully tempered Keijiro's flame attributes into the blade's surface. Then, he began forging the shallow Asachi. With his current strength, Satoshi was already highly proficient at forging shallow-cut sword embryos. In just 20 minutes, the forging was complete. Next came the most crucial step. How would Satoshi fuse this Asachi with Keijiro? How could he draw out Keijiro's essence to summon forth the soul of Ryujin Jaka? Holding the Asachi in his left hand and the cursed tool Keijiro in his right, Satoshi took a step forward, only to feel an extreme sense of rejection. The shallow blade was repelling Keijiro. This was something he had never encountered before. In all his past creations Sode no Shirayuki, Suzumashi, Senbonzakura, Katen Kyakotsu, as long as he used cursed tools with matching attributes, the Zenpakuto soul would be easily guided, allowing the blade embryo and tool to merge, and the Zenpakuto to manifest in the world. So why was this happening now? Everyone stared blankly at Satoshi. Although they were filled with anxiety, no one dared to utter a sound. Kamoshin, on the other hand, burst into laughter upon seeing the scene. He realized that Satoshi had hit a wall. He still didn't know how Satoshi was able to forge Zanpakuto using cursed tool materials, and he hadn't yet succeeded in stealing the technique. But based on what he was seeing now, he had likely won this bet. After countless attempts, Satoshi found that Keijiro and the Asachi still couldn't come into contact. The two were like opposite poles of magnets, always kept apart by an invisible force. Even his body, strengthened by heavenly restriction and far beyond the limits of ordinary strength, couldn't brute force the two together. Is he going to fail? Kuma-en felt a wave of regret. He could see how much effort and determination Satoshi had poured into this, but now everything was at a deadlock. And things were starting to go in a bad direction. He was the only one present who knew about the terms of the bet, which made him fully aware of how gleeful Kamo must be feeling right now. In the past, Kuma-en had always been cold and calculating. The death of a clan member was little more than an offering to him. But ever since he noticed the changes in Satoshi, his mindset had shifted drastically. In his eyes, every member of the Gojo clan now had meaning. At this moment, speaking as the clan's representative, he sincerely hoped that Kamoshin would die, all for the sake of Gojo Katetsu, an ordinary member of the clan. This was the burden of the Gojo clan's proxy head, his responsibility. Kuma-en had already begun to calculate in his mind, if Kamoshin really won the bet today, how could he arrange for Shin's natural death in the future? Meanwhile, Kamoshin was already beaming with delight. When Gojo Kuma-en discovered Shoso, he had assumed he would not escape unscathed. Who would have thought that Satoshi would randomly suggest a bet? He knew that Satoshi wanted the cursed tool Keijiro, but what made him any different? Wasn't he luring Satoshi in? If Keijiro were truly easy to reforge, would he, as a cursed tool grandmaster, have left it untouched in the family's treasury? A special grade cursed tool had the potential to cultivate a grade 1 cursed tool master. For the Kumo clan, currently falling behind such a sorcerer would be a precious asset. A grade 1 Jujutsu sorcerer could bring temporary revitalization to the family. He had already tried. He knew just how terrifying Keijiro was. Satoshi was still too naive. Though far more mentally mature, he was still lacking. Right now, Kamoshin was just waiting for Satoshi to extinguish the flames and admit defeat. As Satoshi stood frozen in place, the entire forge was swallowed in silence. Only the steady roar of the furnace echoed through the room. Is it really impossible to forge Raijin Jaka? Satoshi questioned himself silently. No, something must be off somewhere. His mind spun like a revolving lantern, flipping through every memory of forging Zanpakuto. For Sode no Shirayuki, he used the ice-type cursed tool, Yoro. For Suzumashi, a cursed tool with sonic characteristics, Cicada's Cry. For Senbonzakura, one with Sakura and fragmentation attributes. For Katen Kyakotsu, a tool imbued with shadow and ringed blade properties. Thinking this far, it felt like he was close to an answer, but there was still a veil he couldn't pierce. What exactly is it? Satoshi frowned, and the painful memory of his forging failure from last month resurfaced. Learn, reflect, rebuild. This was essential when mastering a new craft. Had he made a mistake somewhere? A flaw that went unnoticed while forging Suzumashi, Senbonzakura, and Katen Kyakotsu, one that hadn't affected those results. But now, that flaw was being exposed in the attempt to forge Raijin Jaka. Images of Raijin Jaka's Bankai filled his mind, its charred blade, and the 4 techniques it embodied. Zanka no Tachi, Higashi, Kyakujitsujin, Longsword of the Remnant Flame, East, Rising Sun Edge. Zanka no Tachi, Higashi, Kyakujitsujin, Longsword of the Remnant Flame, West, Remnant Sun Prison Garb. Zanka no Tachi, Minami, Kakajiminokushi Daizojin, Longsword of the Remnant Flame, South, Great Burial Ranks of the 10 Trillion Fire Dead. Zanka no Tachi, Kita, Tenshi Kaijin, Longsword of the Remnant Flame, North, Heaven and Earth and in Ashes. Then, in a flash of realization, clarity struck. The cursed tool material wasn't sufficient to attract Raijin Jaka. Keijiro was just a fire attribute. It wasn't enough for Raijin Jaka's soul to descend into this Asachi. Raijin Jaka didn't just wield fire, it commanded death. Kakajiminokushi Daizojin was the foundation that allowed Raijin Jaka to fight as a one-man army. Chapter 114. Chapter 114. Everything is turned into ashes. Although the quality of Keijiro was high, it lacked unique characteristics. Therefore, this forging was doomed to fail. Satoshi felt a twinge of regret. If he missed this opportunity, it would be extremely difficult to find another cursed tool possessing both fire and death attributes. There might be only one special grade fire-type cursed tool in existence. And because the properties of Keijiro had already been refined during forging, once the process failed, the weapon would be reduced to scrap metal rendered unusable. Thinking of this, Satoshi let out a deep breath and gently set down the Asachi and Keijiro. A look of calm washed over his face. Though the forging had failed, he now understood why. This meant that as long as he fully prepared next time, he could avoid failure altogether. Unfortunately, the cost had been too steep. Using the failure of Raijin Jaka as a stepping stone to understand Zanpakuto forging, Satoshi couldn't say whether he had gained or lost. No, he probably took a massive loss. Haha, Gojo Satoshi, you lose. Realizing that Satoshi had chosen to give up, Kamoshin's face was filled with pride. Although he had lost the special grade cursed tool Keijiro, he had successfully resolved the fire affinity scandal. His laughter echoed unpleasantly through the forge, making everyone except Kuma-en visibly displeased. The other 4 didn't know the terms of the bet between Kamoshin and Satoshi, so they couldn't understand the joy Kumo was experiencing. Shut up. Toji instantly appeared in front of Kumo, right fist raised and ready to strike. Toji, stop. Kuma-en's voice rang out. Toji's fist froze midair, then slowly dropped. Satoru was also staring coldly at Kamoshin, his 6 eyes filled with indifference. In his view, Kumo's laughter was not just mocking Satoshi but mocking the entire Gojo clan. Gojo brat, I win. Even though Toji's aura had briefly overwhelmed him, once Kamoshin gathered his wits, he couldn't contain his smugness. Watching Kamoshi's triumphant expression, a flicker of disgust flashed through Satoshi's eyes. If this man were let go now, wouldn't he just use another cursed object, like in the Shoso case, to disturb him again in the future? People like him were true scum in the Jujutsu world. I really don't want to lose this bet. Staring at Kamoshin, staring at that smug smile, Satoshi drifted into a daze. And in that instant, a bolt of lightning sparked in his mind. Shoso? Instinctively, he reached into his pocket. Fire element, death? The cursed object in his hand seemed to possess both attributes. It might be worth a try? A bright light surged within Satoshi's 6 eyes. Even Toji, with his back turned, could feel the excitement surging from behind him. Dang dang dang! Satoshi picked up the hammer once more and began pounding with force. Shunichi and Kumaen, who both knew the true context of the situation, immediately noticed the cursed object Satoshi had set aside earlier Shoso. They didn't know what he was planning. But clearly, Satoshi had discovered another path forward. A glimmer of hope bloomed in their hearts. Next to the furnace, Satoshi tempered the sword embryo and Keijiro again. Then, he opened the container and took out the Shoso. What are you doing, Gojo brat? Kamoshin's voice rang out in shock. Without hesitation, Satoshi tossed the cursed object into the furnace. In that moment, the flames inside surged with newfound intensity, growing even fiercer. The Shoso vaporized on contact, instantly filling the entire furnace with its presence. Under the influence of this fuel, Satoshi felt the resistance between the blade and the cursed tool begin to fade. Cursed tool Keijiro and the Asachi finally merged. In that moment, the power of Raijin Jaka filled Satoshi's mind. Every battle, every flame, every scorched battlefield he had seen from it. As Keijiro and the Asachi fused completely, Satoshi let out a low roar. All things in this world turned to ash. Raijin Jaka. In an instant, the flames in the furnace were drawn into the katana in Satoshi's hand. The entire room fell into darkness. A second later, a dazzling column of fire erupted. A raging inferno shot into the sky. The blaze overturned the furnace, tore the roof from the forge, and soared into the clouds, vaporizing the dark storm overhead. Not a single drop of the torrential rain reached the forge, it was all incinerated midair by the firestorm. Centered on the Gojo estate, within a radius of 100 miles, the cold of winter was instantly replaced by the heat of summer. The moisture in the air was completely sucked dry. Everyone's lips cracked from the sudden dryness. In the back courtyard of the Gojo estate. This fire pillar, is this the power of young master Satoshi's Zanpakuto? How could flames like this even exist? Gojo Teisho, a grade 4 Jujutsu sorcerer of the Gojo clan, wasn't particularly strong, but his knowledge far surpassed ordinary people. The ability to perceive techniques and curses separated Jujutsu sorcerers from the average citizen. He stood frozen, staring at the blazing pillar of fire outside the window, his face bathed in its crimson glow. Honey, did young master Satoshi do something again? Beside him, Gojo Rin, an ordinary person, looked curiously out the window. Though she couldn't see the flames, she could clearly sense the environmental change. It doesn't feel cold anymore. And it was raining heavily a moment ago, but now the sky is suddenly clear. To ordinary people, sudden shifts in weather could evoke fear toward nature's unpredictability. But in the eyes of Jujutsu sorcerers, all natural phenomena had their source. Just like the winter cherry blossoms summoned by young master Satoru, just like the torrential rain caused by Gojo Shinika's duel with Yagaya Simon. And now, the sky-scorching flames from young master Satoshi? To Gojo Teisho, who had watched this miracle unfold, Satoshi, the one who could forge Zanpakuto, was now truly a miracle child of the 6 eyes. Satoshi, you didn't disappoint me. In the main hall, the old patriarch lay weakly in his recliner, a trace of relief on his face. Due to his health, he couldn't witness the birth of Raijin Jaka firsthand. But seeing the pillar of fire piercing the heavens, that no longer mattered. All the effort the Gojo clan had poured into this Zanpakuto had been worth it. He could feel it, the overwhelming power of the Zanpakuto, far surpassing any other blade. If Senbonzakura and Katen Kyakotsu were comparable to grade 1 Jujutsu sorcerers, then this was undoubtedly special grade. A true special grade weapon. The smile on the old man's lips deepened. Satoshi, raised by his hand, once nearly discarded by the clan, had brought true miracles back to the Gojo family. Chapter 115. Chapter 115. Bonus. Zenin Estate. Zenin Naobito, Zenin Aji, and Zenin Shinsoke all stared at the pillar of fire that shot skyward from the Gojo family estate. Their expressions were filled with shock, but in the next second, that shock was completely eclipsed by overwhelming regret. The Zenin clan was truly in turmoil. Such a terrifying pillar of fire, such overwhelming power, not even a top-tier Jujutsu sorcerer could unleash something like that, let alone a Zanpakuto. Who would have thought that the 6-year-old child they had nearly formed an alliance with could actually forge a cursed tool that defied all logic and comprehension? Gojo Satoshi's Sode no Shirayuki, Gojo Shinika's Suzumashi, Gojo Satoru's Senbonzakura, Toji's Katen Kyakotsu. They were already considered insane. Then there was Nijibana, wielded by Yagaya Simon. And now, this newly forged, nameless, flame-wreathed Zanpakuto that was clearly on a whole different level. At this moment, the Zenin elders wanted nothing more than to exile their own sons and nephews from the clan. If they hadn't acted so arrogantly back then, if they had simply cooperated, one of those Zanpakuto could have been in the hands of the Zenin clan by now. In a separate room, a cold look formed on Zenin Aji's face. He knew that Gojo Satoshi despised him, and that deep-rooted aversion was something he could never understand. But the result was clear. Even if he was shocked by the appearance of this Zanpakuto, there was no longer any hope for the Zenin clan to collaborate with Gojo Satoshi. And since cooperation was off the table, Satoshi had now become an obstacle to the clan's future. For the sake of the Zenin family's position in the Jujutsu world, he had to start thinking of ways to suppress both Gojo Satoshi and the entire Gojo clan. If things continued unchecked, the Zenin clan would eventually be forced to bow down completely to Satoshi. Elsewhere, Zenin Shinsuke's expression was filled with despair. Toji's raw physical prowess and the Zanpakuto crafted by Gojo Satoshi, two individuals without any innate cursed energy, had completely shattered the worldview he once believed in. He now understood that his past confrontation with Satoshi had likely been his only real chance to stand on even ground. Zenin Shinsuke realized that he might no longer be qualified to even be Satoshi's opponent. All this time, he had been chasing after Gojo Satoshi, but perhaps he had never even been in his line of sight. His heart shattered completely. The will to compete was gone. Yajayu Estate. The strange phenomenon at the Gojo Estate did not surprise the three main members of the Yajayu clan in the slightest. At this moment, they had gathered in the courtyard, calmly discussing the Gojo clan's future. Simon, how do you think this new Zanpakuto forged by Gojo Satoshi compares to the Nijibana in your hands? Yajayu Yuzuki couldn't clearly gauge the difference between Zanpakuto. Though he could sense that the fire-type Zanpakuto was stronger, he still wanted to hear Simon's opinion. After all, Nijibana was a water-type Zanpakuto. Even if it was slightly weaker, surely the gap wasn't too large, right? Yajayu Hidesugu and Yajayu Simon exchanged helpless glances. Their patriarch was being too naive. Yajayu Hidesugu shook his head. Their families were closely tied, but no matter how generous Satoshi was, it was unrealistic to expect him to hand over a Zanpakuto on the level of Senbonzakura. That Nijibana was already a miracle. The fact it could match Gojo Shinika's Suzumushi was more than enough for their family. Simon was more straightforward. He placed Nijibana onto the stone table and looked Yajayu Yuzuki squarely in the eyes. Sir, do you see? Nijibana is trembling. Hearing that, both Hidesugu and Yuzuki instinctively looked at the blade, but saw no visible change. They turned back at the same time, waiting for Simon to explain. He let out a long sigh. Nijibana doesn't dare compare itself to that newly born Zanpakuto. In its heart, that sword is the strongest of them all. The birth of that Zanpakuto will elevate the Gojo family's power to an entirely new level. What we of the Yajayu clan must do, is follow the Gojo family, earnestly and without hesitation. Their rise is inevitable. That was already the consensus when the Six Eyes were born. Everyone has been waiting for Gojo Satoru to mature, but no one expected Gojo Satoshi to push the Gojo clan's advancement forward by at least a decade. Yajayu Simon's heart was filled with emotion. In his eyes, Gojo Satoshi, who possessed no cursed energy at all, was the one who would truly reshape the future of the Jujutsu world. Yajayu Hidesugu and Yajayu Yuzuki fell silent. After a long pause, both nodded at once. The Gojo family now had Gojo Satoshi, and in the near future, they would have Gojo Satoru, heir of Limitless and the Six Eyes. With that terrifying duo, there would be no one left who could rival the Gojo clan. Iiari household. Iiari Inamichi held Shoko in his arms, staring blankly at the flame pillar erupting from the Gojo estate. His heart was filled with deep regret. Why didn't I agree to the engagement between Shoko and Gojo Satoshi? That had been the best timing, when no one had yet discovered his potential, when the future was still unwritten. If I had decided then, the Iiari clan would have been the greatest beneficiary. He looked down at Shoko, full of remorse. At the time, he believed that with Shoko's talent, Gojo Satoshi, just a powerless child, was unworthy. So he dismissed the Gojo family's proposal. He brushed it off then, but now it was entirely out of reach. The boy who forged a flame-type Zanpakuto of terrifying strength was no longer the overlooked orphan of the Gojo clan. Shoko, have you visited the Gojo estate recently? He looked down at his daughter, dozing in his arms, his heart full of complex emotions expression. This generation of the Gojo family has produced two individuals with six eyes. One of them inherited Limitless and will definitely become a powerful Jujutsu sorcerer in the future. The other has created an unprecedented Zanpakuto system. His face was filled with frustration. As the head of the Kumo family, not a single one of the children his wife had born for him could inherit the family's red blood manipulation technique. The Kumo family's red blood technique must be passed on. You must give me a child who inherits the red blood technique. Listening to her husband's impotent fury, Kumo Mio looked on with disdain, not taking his words to heart in the slightest. Whether I can give birth to a child who inherits the Kumo clan's technique depends on you, doesn't it? I don't have the Kumo family's blood, so stop blabbering. You men always like to blame women for your incompetence. Is it our fault the Kumo family has declined to this point? Kumo Mio shook her head dismissively, turned, and left, not even granting Kumo the respect due to a clan head. Kumo Shinji's face turned red with anger, but he could do nothing against his wife. She came from a prestigious clan herself, and his words often held no weight in front of her. Uncle still hasn't returned. The Gojo family has forged a Zanpakuto this time. Surely Uncle had a chance to observe it, right? As the only Grand Master blacksmith, could Uncle learn the forging process behind this so-called Zanpakuto? If he could grasp it, perhaps the Zanpakuto could temporarily compensate for the lack of an heir who can inherit red blood manipulation. Shinji looked out at the moonlight and the blazing flames rising from the Gojo compound, his expression a mixture of regret and anticipation. But what he didn't know was that Kumo Shin, who had been watching the entire forging process at the Gojo residence, was already drowning in despair. Inside the forge, Kumo Shin's body trembled as he raised a finger to point at Gojo Satoshi. His cracked lips opened slightly, but no words came out. As a master blacksmith, How could he not recognize the power of the cursed tool in Gojo Satoshi's hand? Just a few minutes ago, he had been mocking Gojo Satoshi for failing to reforge the special grade cursed tool Keijiro into a Zanpakuto, even feeling relieved that he had survived the attempt. But now, in just a matter of minutes, he had experienced the true meaning of joy turning into despair. Why did Gojo Satoshi incorporate the Shoso phase during the forging of the Zanpakuto, allowing the weapon to finally take shape? Kamoshin truly couldn't understand it. The Shoso phase, his greatest trump card, had now become the very measure that decided his fate. He had eliminated countless potential threats using that technique. So in the end, was he to die because of it? How did Gojo Satoshi achieve this? How could the fusion of a cursed object and a cursed tool forge such a mysterious Zanpakuto? Even after watching the entire process, he still couldn't grasp the principles behind forging this blade. He finally understood why Gojo Satoshi had been so calm, even allowing him to observe up close. Feeling the cold stare of Gojo Kuma-en beside him, Kamoshin knew his fate was already sealed. Kuma-en pressed his lips together. In his heart, he was both shaken by the flame-like sword and quietly pleased at Kamoshin's inevitable downfall. Forging Raijin Jaka had been extremely difficult, but its terrifying capabilities more than justified Gojo Satoshi's years of effort. In truth, Gojo Kuma-en even harbored a heretical thought, that Gojo Satoshi's Raijin Jaka might be even more outrageous and rare than the Gojo clan's 6 eyes. Before Raijin Jaka's creation, he had thought that Gojo Satoshi's success in forging a Zanpakuto was due largely to his possession of the 6 eyes. But now, standing before the pressure of Raijin Jaka, those thoughts vanished. No matter how rare the 6 eyes were, how could they give birth to something more powerful than this? The true root of everything was Gojo Satoshi himself. The Gojo family was born blessed, all because of him. Because of Gojo Satoshi's existence, the Zanpakuto came into the world. Whether he had the 6 eyes or not, the blade would still have been born in his hands. Satoshi was destined to become a world changer. And if the Gojo family wanted to reap the greatest rewards in the future, they needed only to follow Gojo Satoshi's lead. At this moment, Kuma-en solidified his belief. He would not stand in Gojo Satoshi's way, he would lead the Gojo family and become his strongest supporter. As for Gojo Satoru, all he could do was sigh inwardly. Compared to Gojo Satoru, it was clear that Gojo Satoshi was the one most suited to lead the Gojo family. This traditionalist had completely overturned the beliefs Gojo Kuma-en once held. Cursed energy? In front of Gojo Satoshi's Raijin Jaka, and faced with Zenin's overwhelming physical prowess, cursed energy was nothing more than a gift the heavens gave to the mediocre. People like them could only barely glimpse Gojo Satoshi's true strength with the aid of cursed techniques. As for Kamoshin, who stood against the tide, in Gojo Kuma-en's eyes, he was already a dead man. Before Raijin Jaka, Satoru, Toji, and Shunichi all tightened their grips on their own Zanpakuto. Just like the blade in Yagaya-Simon's hand, all 3 of their Zanpakuto were trembling ever so slightly. The Zanpakuto are afraid. The 3 of them exchanged glances, seeing the shock mirrored in each other's eyes. They had known that the Zanpakuto forged by Gojo Satoshi was powerful but never imagined that it would induce fear in their own Zanpakuto. All things in the world returned to ashes. Satoru murmured Raijin Jaka's release phrase. Even the words of its Shikai exuded overwhelming dominance. Toji continued to concaten Kyakotsu, his expression gradually returning to composure. Satoshi had already surprised him time and time again. He knew there would be more about Satoshi he couldn't comprehend in the future. But he didn't mind. They were friends, weren't they? Even with the age gap, they both bore the weight of heavenly restriction. They could understand each other. Shinika's eyes, filled with unwavering trust, remained fixed on Satoshi. He knew that Satoshi would never let him down. In his heart, only a Zanpakuto as powerful as Raijin Jaka was worthy of someone like Satoshi. Chapter 117, Chapter 117, Kamo's True Ending, Bonus. Outside the Gojo family mansion, a woman holding a pink paper umbrella quietly observed the pillar of fire piercing the night sky. She gently touched the suture across her forehead. Zanpakuto, huh? I didn't expect it to wield such powerful strength. This generation of the Gojo clan is frighteningly talented. Kaori smiled faintly, speaking to herself. She could sense the immense potential of the Zanpakuto, but she also understood clearly Gojo Satoshi, in his current state, couldn't yet unleash the weapon's full power. Gojo Satoshi, the one who forged the Zanpakuto, can you really keep it for yourself? I like this Zanpakuto very much. Why don't you give it to me? A seductive smile spread across Kaori's delicate face. It wasn't as if she hadn't killed a 6 eyes user before. Originally, she hadn't cared much for the Gojo twins of this generation. But now, Gojo Satoshi might just be worth her attention. If she could obtain this brand new Zanpakuto, her future plans would become significantly easier to execute. Inside the forge, Satoshi ran his hand along the still hot blade, his heart brimming with satisfaction. I almost gave up, he thought. But in the end, Raijin Jaka was successfully forged. Obtaining Shoso by accident was the critical turning point. He should probably thank Kamoshin for that final provocation. If he hadn't been so bold with his declaration, he might never have connected the dots to the Yakusuji technique. Gojo Satoshi gently swung the blade. The towering pillar of fire slowly receded, eventually getting fully absorbed into Raijin Jaka. The heat hanging in the air began to dissipate. Ding! Congratulations to the host for successfully forging the Zanpakuto, Raijin Jaka. The system's notification confirmed the birth of Ryujin Jaka. On the system's Zanpakuto panel, the blade now appeared in the display list. Zanpakuto, Sode no Shirayuki, owner, Gojo Satoshi, borrower, none. Zanpakuto, Suzumushi, owner, Gojo Satoshi, borrower, Gojo Shinichi. Zanpakuto, Senbonzakura, owner, Gojo Satoshi, borrower, Gojo Satoru. Zanpakuto, Katen Kyakotsu, owner, Gojo Satoshi, borrower, Zenantoji. Zanpakuto, Nijibana, owner, Gojo Satoshi, borrower, Yajayu Simon. Zanpakuto, Ryujin Jaka, owner, Gojo Satoshi, borrower, none. From this moment on, Gojo Satoshi possessed 2 Zanpakuto for himself, 1 ice, 1 fire. Sode no Shirayuki and Ryujin Jaka. These 2 blades were more than enough for the current Satoshi. After all, biting off more than he could chew would only hinder him. He hadn't even completed the Bankai of Sode no Shirayuki yet, and it would take even longer for Ryujin Jaka to reach its Zankan no Tachi state. Moving forward, Satoshi no longer planned to actively pursue forging new Zanpakuto. His approach would be more casual. After all, sword borrowers must be chosen with care. Lending a Zanpakuto recklessly would be nothing short of blasphemy toward the blade itself. Satoshi approached Kamoshin, Ryujin Jaka in hand. Looks like I won the bet between us. The absent-minded Kamoshin slowly returned to himself. At that moment, he looked years older, his energy completely drained. He had considered going back on the bet, but that idea vanished as quickly as it came. Right now, the Kumo family wasn't even in the same league as the Gojo clan. Compared to the flourishing Gojo family, the Kumo clan was clearly in decline. If his attempt to assassinate Gojo Satoshi was ever exposed, the consequences would be devastating to the Kumo family's already fragile reputation. That was something he, who had dedicated his life to the clan's revival, could not allow. Moreover, all the leverage was in Gojo Satoshi's hands now. Kamoshin understood that this bet was no longer anything more than a charitable formality granted by Satoshi. I understand. Kamoshin's hoarse voice echoed inside the forge. He cast one last look at the Zanpakuto that had determined his fate, then opened his mouth with difficulty to ask one final question. What's the name of that technique? Sensing Kamo's sincere curiosity, Gojo Satoshi chose to fulfill the dying man's last wish. Flowing blade-like flame. Kamoshin nodded. In this moment, he was simply a blacksmith. The forging process he had witnessed from Gojo Satoshi was no longer mere craftsmanship, it was a miracle. Flowing blade-like flame, what a brilliant technique. He turned and looked at Gojo Takiya. Takiya, the future of the association will be in your hands. I hope that under your and Gojo Satoshi's leadership, Jujutsu Blacksmith Association will flourish. From the moment the first Zanpakuto appeared, he had tried everything to suppress it, knowing it would disrupt the cursed tool world structure. Now, he understood he had merely tried to shake a giant tree. The moment Zanpakuto entered this world, it was destined to leave an indelible mark on the Jujutsu world. This was the trend of the times. If he couldn't understand that, he would only be crushed beneath the wheels of change. Grandmaster, you. Takiya didn't know about the bet between Gojo Satoshi and Kamoshin, nor was he aware of Kamo's prior actions. So, he couldn't understand why Kamo would suddenly entrust him with such responsibility. But Kamoshin didn't say another word. He simply dragged his aging body out of the forge and left the Gojo residence step by step. He was the head blacksmith of the Kamo family, the clan's elder. His death had to be untainted by disgrace. It was the only way to preserve what remained of the Kamo family's reputation. Satoshi, what's going on with Grandmaster Kamo? What did he mean just now? Gojo Takiya frowned. Something felt off about Kamo today. Takiya, don't worry. Grandmaster Kamo entrusted the association to you, so you'll have to bear that responsibility. Gojo Kumaen patted Takiya on the shoulder. He knew this was Kamoshin's final gesture of goodwill toward the Gojo family, a trade before death. In exchange for sparing the Kamo family, he handed over the fully formed Jujutsu Blacksmith Association. Kumaen was willing to accept this offer. After all, gaining control over the entire association was a major opportunity. It would allow the Gojo family's influence in the Jujutsu world to expand even further. As long as Kamoshin honored their agreement, the conflict between the Gojo and Kamo clans would end here. This was exactly what both sides hoped for. Chapter 118, Chapter 118, How to Practice Shunpo. Satoru, Shunichi, Takiya Satoshi's been forging for quite a while now. He needs a proper rest. Let's head out first. Toji, you can decide based on your own schedule. Gojo Kumaen addressed everyone. Seeing how exhausted Gojo Satoshi was, he began ushering people out. Everyone glanced at Satoshi, then at Ryujin Jaka in his hand. Though curiosity about the Zanpakuto's power filled the air, no one pressed further at this time. Satoshi, get some rest. We'll be heading back now. As Gojo Satoru finished speaking, the group left the forge. Toji immediately departed the Gojo estate. He had to return to the Yorozuya to continue overseeing operations. After sending everyone off, Satoshi exhaled a long breath. Staring at Ryujin Jaka and Sode no Shirayuki resting on the sword rack, he began contemplating how he should improve going forward. With the arrival of Ryujin Jaka, Satoshi understood that his growth through forging cursed tools had essentially reached its peak. Even if he continued creating more Zanpakuto, they would merely serve to expand his arsenal's functionality. In terms of practicality, Ryujin Jaka and Sode no Shirayuki were already more than enough for daily battles. As for upcoming forging plans, aside from the Zanpakuto he planned to craft for Shoko, the rest weren't urgent. More importantly, upon coming into contact with Ryujin Jaka, Satoshi could feel its cold rejection. Even though he had forged it, he hadn't earned its acknowledgement yet. He had completed its initial release but he hadn't yet mastered its Shikai techniques. That meant his top priority going forward was to master Ryujin Jaka's Shikai. Even achieving Shikai mastery alone would significantly raise his combat power. Of course, his ultimate goal was to unlock its Bankai Zankan no Tachi. Once that form awakened, even peak form Ryaman Sukuna wouldn't be a match for him. However, Satoshi still had no idea how to deepen his connection with Ryujin Jaka, and was far from grasping its Bankai. Beyond Zanpakuto refinement, the most immediate way to improve his strength was to study Shunpo. Satoshi had already mastered Zanjutsu and Hakuda. That left Ho-Ho and Kido untouched. But when it came to Shunpo, Satoshi felt stuck. Shunpo, in essence, was speed manifest. But how exactly should one train in speed and high-speed movement? He had no real example to reference. In the future, Satoru would become the fastest Jujutsu sorcerer, but right now, he was the same age as Satoshi. The second fastest Neobaido was currently the representative of the Zenin family. For now, Toji seemed like the most realistic candidate to study from. When Toji fought Satoru in the future, his speed had been monstrous, second to none. But Satoshi hesitated. Could that kind of speed really be learned? Toji's high-speed movement was entirely physical. To match that speed, Satoshi's body would need years of development. Since physical speed was largely innate, the only thing Satoshi could replicate was movement technique. That meant Toji, who relied purely on physical strength, could be ruled out as a reference. That left two potential candidates, his discount brother Satoru, and the Neobaido who possessed projection sorcery. But Satoru hadn't yet mastered cursed technique reversal, blue, and couldn't perform high-speed teleportation like he would in the future. Which meant the only real option left was the Zenin turn. They were even willing to part with their ancestral texts. Some would even sell themselves if it came to that. In just half a day, Gojo Geniki had received dozens of such guests. At this point, he truly didn't know how to handle them and could only turn to his grandfather for guidance. Kuma-en glanced at his grandson's frustrated expression, a cold glint flickering in his eyes. He still regretted personally brokering the deal that gave Nijibana to the Yajayo family. Although the Yajayo now followed the Gojo family's lead, giving such a powerful Zanpakuto to another clan and letting them produce a grade 1 sorcerer was, in Kuma-en's eyes, a bad trade. Now these minor families dared to follow in the Yajayo's footsteps and try to fleece the Gojo clan? He had no intention of making the same mistake twice. Kuma-en snorted coldly. Geniki, keep entertaining them. Isn't Satoshi in closed-door training? That's the perfect excuse to dismiss them. Not just anyone is qualified to wield a Gojo-forged Zanpakuto. Even if Satoshi has his own criteria, as his kin, we should take on the first round of screening. Kuma-en's firm tone restored Geniki's confidence. The Gojo family, holders of the Six Eyes, had every right to reject other families. After all, not every clan was part of the Big Three. And even the Kumo clan, one of the Big Three, had obediently sent their family's prized cursed tool to Satoshi for forging. Geniki, unaware of Kumo-shin's betrayal, mistook the Kumo clan's actions as fear of the Gojo family. Still, in his mind, things looked good. Even the Kumo family was no longer a match for the current Gojo clan. Upon hearing that Satoshi had gone into closed-door training, many emissaries from Jujutsu families let out deep sighs. They didn't know whether this was Satoshi brushing them off or the Gojo clan flat-out rejecting them, but they could only return to their families with the news. None of them dared voice their dissatisfaction directly. They could only curse the Yajayo clan in silence. They all knew the real reason for the Gojo clan's rejection likely lay in how flashy the Yajayo had been after receiving Nijibana. That brute from the Yajayo clan just couldn't keep his mouth shut. You got a Zanpakuto, great. Why couldn't you just enjoy it quietly? You got promoted to grade 1 and you still don't know how to hide your strength? You had to march back to the Gojo estate and show off? Would you die if you didn't brag? The Zanpakuto duel between Yajayo Simon and Gojo Shunichi had already become public knowledge. Simon's Nijibana was far too eye-catching, completely cutting off any chance these small families had of acquiring a Zanpakuto for themselves. An ordinary man isn't guilty but carrying something extraordinary makes him a target. Thanks to that, the Yajayo clan had now become the target of resentment for many smaller Jujutsu families. Chapter 120. Chapter 120, A Long Road to Adjustment. Satoshi remained in recluse for 15 days. And during those 15 days, a major event shook the Jujutsu world. Kumo-shin, elder of the Kumo clan, president of the Blacksmithing Association, and master of cursed tool forging, passed away within the Kumo estate. Before his death, Kumo handed down his final wishes, transferring the position of president of the Blacksmithing Association to the Gojo family. The Kumo clan, having lost a foundational pillar, weakened further, while the Gojo family gained control over the Blacksmithing Association, elevating their influence and reputation to new heights. Apart from those directly involved in or witness to the bet, no one knew the real reason behind Kumo's death. Though Takia felt some regret over Kumo's passing, as the only grandmaster in the world of cursed tool forging, his loss was significant. Takia understood that Kumo must have done something to provoke the Gojo clan's wrath. Otherwise, both the Gojo clan's decision and Kumo-shin's willingness to accept death so readily would be unexplainable. Taki aside, he had obtained the presidency without any real qualification to lead the association. For now, all he could do was bluff his way forward, relying entirely on the prestige of Satoshi. After all, the man who forged Reincarnating had already become a godlike figure in the entire forging world. As long as Satoshi stood behind him, the blacksmiths under the association wouldn't dare to cause trouble. Even though he hadn't actually taught Satoshi much of anything, that didn't stop others from assuming he was Satoshi's master. 15 days of recluse yielded no significant breakthroughs for Gojo Satoshi. His bond with Reincarnating remained lukewarm. While he could activate its Shikai with the release phrase, he still couldn't use its techniques afterward. It was like a beautiful woman lying naked on the bed, but he still couldn't get it up. Satoshi was beyond frustrated. But he understood that achieving true synchronization with Reincarnating required more than time. He probably needed to experience something else with the blade, something deeper. He could feel the pride emanating from Reincarnating. After all, its last wielder had been the strongest Shinigami in the Soul Society, Captain Commander Yamamoto Genri Yusai Shiji Kuni. It would be stranger if such a blade didn't have a will of its own. The news of Satoshi leaving his closed-door training quickly reached Kuma-en. As soon as Satoshi returned to the forge, Kuma-en came to meet him. Satoshi, how was your time in seclusion? Any progress? Kuma-en had a bright smile on his face, no trace of the resistance he once had toward the boy. Satoshi's response was calm. Not much progress. If I want to fully unleash the power of Reincarnating, it'll take a long time. Sensing the discouragement in Satoshi's voice, Kuma-en chose not to press the matter. As someone who merely represented the clan, he didn't fully grasp the nature of Zanpakuto. This was something only Satoshi could work through himself. Instead, he pulled out a booklet and handed it over. These are the requests that came in from various Jujutsu families while you were in seclusion. They're hoping you'll forge Zanpakuto for them. This is the result of my screening. I believe Zanpakuto should be treated as strategic resources, not something to be handed out lightly. But some of the trade items they're offering are tempting. Look it over and decide based on what you need. After handing it over, Kuma-en didn't offer any more suggestions. He didn't know what Satoshi truly needed, nor what might help him. So he left the decision entirely in the boy's hands. Even though Satoshi was only 6, Kuma-en already treated him as an adult. Satoshi flipped through the list casually, then shook his head. He wasn't in the mood to forge more Zanpakuto right now. Although many of the offers were valuable, none were useful to him at the moment. Reject them? Kuma-en found himself agreeing wholeheartedly. The value of a Zanpakuto was immeasurable. None of these trades were worth the exchange. Understood. I'll have Genichi reject them one by one. Kuma-en nodded, then asked with hopeful anticipation. Satoshi, is there any other cursed tool you need right now? If it's not in the clan archives, we can try acquiring it through other means. He understood the significance of a forged Zanpakuto. Naturally, he wanted Satoshi to make as many as possible. Even if not all could be as powerful as Reincarnating, blades like Senbonzakura or Katen Kyakotsu were still incredibly rare. If Satoshi could forge more Zanpakuto and arm clan members, the Gojo family's standing in the Jujutsu world would rise dramatically. I'm a little tired. Satoshi's response made Kuma-en freeze mid-sentence. I won't be forging any more Zanpakuto for a while. I need to rest. The follow-up completely crushed Kuma-en's expectations. Seeing the fatigue on Satoshi's face, he said nothing more. During Satoshi's recluse, Kuma-en had gained a better understanding of the forging world thanks to Takia taking over the association. Any cursed tool master who wanted to forge a weapon above grade 1 had to devote an extraordinary amount of time and effort. From that perspective, Satoshi forging 5 Zanpakuto in such a short time was beyond comprehension, completely breaking the standard logic of cursed tool creation. It really is time for him to rest. Forging a Zanpakuto isn't like slicing vegetables, it takes a massive toll mentally. He spent hours forging Reincarnating. If this keeps up, it could hurt his body. Finishing his own mental rationalization, Gojo Kuma-en nodded and told Satoshi to take his time recovering, then quietly left. Just as Satoshi lay down, ready to rest, Toji walked in. Satoshi, you're finally out. Satoshi gave a lazy nod. Toji, long time no see. Toji walked right up to him and said, the Yorozuya has been built. Want to come take a look? Satoshi, who had been groggy moments ago, suddenly lit up. Let's go. Chapter 121, Chapter 121, Tombs of the Star, Bonus. One day ago, Tombs of the Star. A woman with long, silky hair and a loose kimono leisurely sipped her tea. Beside her stood a tall woman with short blonde hair and a commanding presence. This generation's 6 eyes from the Gojo clan has really exceeded my expectations. The woman in the kimono set her teacup down, a flicker of curiosity flashing across her face. If possible, I'd really like to meet this 6 eyes, someone who shouldn't have even existed. Zanpakuto, it doesn't belong to this world, yet it's so novel. Yuki, how much do you know about Zanpakuto? Looking at the kimono-clad woman slumped lazily in her chair, the blonde woman could only sigh helplessly. No one would believe that this seemingly laid-back woman was the revered Tenjin-sama of the entire Jujutsu world. Tsukumo Yuki exhaled deeply. Tenjin-sama, 2 Zanpakuto from the Gojo clan have already leaked. One is in the hands of Yajayu Simon, named Nijibana, and the other is with Zenin Toji. He's wielding Katen Kyakotsu. I've been here with you lately and haven't gone out, so I only know what I've heard. As a star plasma vessel, Yuki and Tenjin had a unique connection. Ever since discovering she was a star plasma vessel, her family periodically sent her to the tombs of the stars to spend time with Tenjin. Though nominally it was for her to receive Tenjin-sama's teachings, the true purpose was to normalize her star plasma vessel identity and prepare her for assimilation with Tenjin when necessary. Truthfully, Yuki didn't care much about being a star plasma vessel, she just valued her freedom. Of course, Tenjin's lazy nature had been far beyond her expectations. She couldn't imagine what she'd become after merging with someone like this. Tenjin stretched her legs and looked at Yuki. Though far one level, Curses already possessed a certain degree of intelligence. Perhaps he could capture it and extract some answers. When Toji raised his fist, preparing to eliminate the obstruction, Satoshi reached out and stopped him. This grade 1 curse was the perfect opportunity to test something. He wanted to try fighting it himself, to see if Raijin would react to combat and activate its compatibility with him. After all, it was said to be the most powerful Zanpakuto in terms of raw offense. Surely it would be interested in a fight. Toji, leave this curse to me. I want to try out Raijin. Hearing Satoshi's request, Toji nodded and stepped aside. He knew Satoshi's strength well. A grade 1 cursed spirit was nothing to be concerned about. Even if this particular one had a hidden trump card, he was confident he could crush it before it had a chance to act. Raijin, please fight alongside me this time. Satoshi gripped Raijin and stepped forward to face the cursed spirit. From a distance, unnoticed by the others, Itadori Kaori observed silently. Her gaze was locked on Satoshi as he engaged the curse, carefully analyzing the abilities of the Zanpakuto in his hand. This grade 1 cursed spirit posed no real threat to Satoshi. However, Kaori also noticed something, an undeniable helplessness in the way Satoshi wielded his sword during the battle. The curse was defeated by Satoshi and his Zanpakuto, but at no point did the fire-type Zanpakuto display any of its techniques. A faint smile appeared on Kaori's lips. As expected, such a powerful Zanpakuto hasn't been fully mastered. With Satoshi's current strength, he still can't draw out the true power of that sword. If that's the case, then things might be easier than I thought. She murmured to herself and turned away. The curse had served its purpose, it had already provided all the information she needed. This is too much. Way too much. You're a Zanpakuto, after all. How is this performance any different from an ordinary katana? The opponent was a cursed spirit. Couldn't you at least act like a proper Zanpakuto? Even just a flicker of flame to burn it to death would have been something. Gojo Satoshi held the now warm Raijin and stared at the cursed spirit he had just slashed into pieces, looking utterly dejected. Even though Raijin was said to be the strongest offensive Zanpakuto, in his hands right now, it was no better than a glorified stick. So, the Shikai I activated was just superficial. After saying the incantation, the sword transformed into Raijin, but functionally it's no different from an Asachi? Toji caught Satoshi's muttered complaints, the corners of his mouth rising slightly. Compared to Raijin lack of cooperation, his own Katen Kyokotsu could almost be described as overly cooperative. As for Benkai's temporary refusal to awaken, so be it. He wouldn't force constantly interrupted by ordinary people, it would become a real hassle. This room is mine. You can sort out the rest however you want. Oh, and make sure to leave one for Satoru. He's a shareholder, after all. Satoshi picked the sunniest room on the second floor for himself, and even remembered to reserve one for Satoru. When Toji heard that Satoru might be living here in the future, his expression soured. The tension between the two wouldn't be erased just because time had passed. Still, given that Satoru had invested a considerable sum of money, Toji could only grit his teeth and accept it. There were enough rooms upstairs. Even if no one officially assigned one to Satoru, he could just crash in a guest room. Anyway, we still need to do some decorating. Add a few plants or something. Don't be so stiff. If you bring a girl home and the place feels too cold, you'll scare her away. Especially with your stone-cold face and the frosty Zenin family atmosphere, you're not doing yourself any favors. Satoshi gave Toji a meaningful look. After all, Toji had been hanging around the Yorozuya every day recently. He'd originally thought about introducing a girl from the Gojo family to Toji, but then remembered the canon timeline where Toji and Megami's mother were supposed to have a good relationship. What if Megami vanished because he meddled too much? Satoshi shook his head and decided to leave it be for now. Toji hadn't expected that a 6-year-old kid like Satoshi would be concerned about his love life. Frowning slightly, he placed his hand on Satoshi's head and said seriously, "If you've got that much time to worry about me, maybe focus on your relationship with Shoko instead. Ever since you offered to forge a Zanpakuto for her, her attitude toward you has definitely changed." Toji had been paying close attention. During this period, he'd carefully observed everyone around Satoshi and had noticed Shoko's subtle shifts in behavior. Satoshi's expression turned awkward the moment Shoko's name came up. Isn't that unnecessary? She's only 6. Toji shrugged. You're 6. She's 6. Sounds like a perfect match for childhood sweethearts. Besides, Shoko's talent with the reverse curse technique means her standards will be sky high. After spending so much time with you and Satoru, she's probably lost interest in anyone else. I'd say the guest rooms might not be enough. Give it a few days and someone might claim one for herself. Satoshi gave an embarrassed laugh in response to Toji's pointed sarcasm. Yeah, that really did sound like something he would allow. If Shoko really wanted to live here, as the owner of the Yorozwaya, he definitely wouldn't have the heart to drive her out. Just as he was about to say something, Toji's gaze suddenly dropped to the floor. Looks like someone's here. Satoshi also lowered his gaze. He was a bit surprised. He hadn't expected a visitor so soon after the Yorozwaya's doors opened. Just a curious passerby? No, definitely a sorcerer. With his 6 eyes, Satoshi saw through the identity of the intruder and sensed the technique she possessed. Even without 6 eyes, Toji's senses, sharpened to an extreme by heavenly restriction, could clearly detect something unusual about the visitor. Let's go down and take a look. Satoshi and Toji exchanged a glance, nodded, and turned toward the stairs. They were curious too. Could it be that the Yorozwaya was already attracting business on its very first day? Yuki stepped inside the Yorozwaya and looked around in surprise. The room was spacious, but aside from a traditional-looking counter that resembled something from the Edo period, it was empty. Next to the counter was a wooden staircase that led to the second floor. Satoshi and Toji were nowhere in sight. Yuki looked up at the stairs, then quietly decided to wait. The first floor was clearly a public area, while the second floor was more private. She didn't harbor any hostility toward them, but barging into someone's personal space without permission would definitely leave a bad impression. However, it was now clear that her earlier assumptions had been wrong. Satoshi and Toji hadn't come to the Yorozwaya to seek help, they were the owners. That alone piqued her interest. Why would the strongest member of the Zenin clan and the 6 Eyes heir of the Gojo clan open a strange shop like the Yorozwaya? Was family life too dull for them? That seemed unlikely. Gojo Satoshi was currently one of the most in-demand figures in the Jujutsu world. Smaller sorcerer clans were lining up just for the chance to have him forge a Zanpakuto for them. How would someone like that have the time to run a small business? Something wasn't adding up. Yuki felt like she'd stumbled upon a fascinating mystery and wanted to dig deeper into the thought process of Satoshi and Toji. Just as she was about to approach the counter for a closer look, footsteps sounded from the second floor, followed by the voice of a young boy. Miss, the Yorozwaya isn't open today. If you need anything, please come back another time. Chapter 124, Chapter 124, I want to study your body. Yuki looked up at the stairs as Satoshi and Toji slowly descended. As they reached the first floor, Satoshi and Yuki, walking in the front, locked eyes. What a cute little boy. Is this Gojo Satoshi, the boy who's been shaking up the Jujutsu world lately with his Zanpakuto? That snowy white hair and those brilliant blue eyes, seriously adorable. It was the first time Yuki had seen Satoshi up close. The moment she got a clear look at his face, she realized something. This little boy was so cute, she felt like squishing him against herself. Satoshi stared at the girl before him. She looked to be a few years older, with short golden hair and a figure already starting to show signs of maturity. For some reason, she seemed familiar. Even though he was certain they'd never met, the sense of familiarity in his chest didn't lie. There's no doubt about it. She's someone I know from the original timeline. With that in mind, Satoshi began observing her more carefully. Short golden hair, a budding figure, her future image grew clearer in his mind. Yuki. This girl is Tsukumo Yuki. Satoshi's eyes widened slightly as he confirmed her identity. But why is Yuki in Tokyo? Isn't she supposed to be from Kyoto? She should be in middle school by now. So why is she here? And even showing up at the Yorozwaya? Seeing Satoshi staring at her, Yuki's cheeks flushed bright red. At this point in time, she hadn't yet become the voluptuous, long-haired, cool beauty who would ask every person she met, "What kind of woman do you like?" Though her 12-year-old body appeared mature, her mind was still that of a teenage girl. She had only come to meet Satoshi at Tenjin's request. Otherwise, while she was curious about him, she never would have barged into someone's home like this. The blush on her face made Satoshi feel a bit of emotional whiplash. It was hard for him to connect the short-haired, shy girl in front of him with the confident, biker-chic image he remembered from the original series. Curious as to why she'd come to the Yorozwaya, Satoshi chose to pretend not to recognize her, despite having already guessed her identity. Miss, even though the Yorozwaya isn't open for business today, if you have something on your mind, feel free to share it. You're clearly a sorcerer. Are you facing a cursed spirit problem? Or some other request? Lucky for you, the ace shopkeeper of the Yorozwaya happens to be in today. Satoshi casually pointed to Toji behind him, instantly assigning him the role of ace shopkeeper. Ace shopkeeper equals gold medal enforcer. Sounds about right. Under the piercing gaze of Satoshi's 6 eyes, Yuki hesitated. She wasn't sure if she should reveal her identity. Tenjin was highly respected in the Jujutsu world. If she mentioned his name, Satoshi and Toji might take her seriously. But she had her own pride. Since Satoshi was exactly her type, even if they were far apart in age, she wanted their first meeting to be simple and natural. What do I even need? Honestly, nothing. Should I just say that Tenjin-sama wants to know about Zanpakuto? Yorozwaya. Jack of all trades. Thinking back to the plaque outside, a new idea popped into Yuki's head. If it's truly a jack of all trades shop, then anything should be possible, right? Tenjin may want information about Zanpakuto, but what I want is to study Gojo Satoshi and Zenin Toji. Watching her stare at him and then at the Zanpakuto at Toji's waist, Satoshi quickly put the pieces together. Even a future special grade sorcerer like Yuki would be curious about Zanpakuto. But doesn't she already have a Shikigami? Garuda should be her signature weapon. Would she even need a Zanpakuto? That said, Yuki seems like an excellent candidate for the borrowed sword system. If she became one of my sword borrowers, the experience would be right up there with Satoru's. Satoshi had no objection to forging her a Zanpakuto. She was one of the 4 special grades in the future, at the absolute peak of the Jujutsu world. Establishing good relationships now and collecting high-tier feedback data from her later would be a win-win. The real question was, what kind of Zanpakuto should he forge for her? Even as he pondered that, he was already calculating what kind of reward he should ask for once she made her request. After all, this was a serious business. Payment upon completion was only fair. Just as Satoshi was thinking about which Zanpakuto might suit her best, Yuki finally opened her mouth and shared her request. What she said completely blindsided both Satoshi and Toji, plunging the room into stunned silence. Gojo Satoshi, I want to study your body. Yuki raised her head, baring her slender neck like a proud swan. Her expression was serious, yet what she said completely threw off the 2 boys in front of her. What kind of pervy line is that? Satoshi completely misunderstood her intent. To him, it sounded like an innocent teenage girl had just said something shockingly inappropriate. Toji's expression froze. Are all girls this direct these days? If you're curious about boys' anatomy, go review your junior high health class. Both Toji and Satoshi stared at her, wide-eyed. The atmosphere instantly turned awkward and heavy. Seeing their stunned reactions, Yuki was confused for a second, then paused, and realized. Her face turned bright red. No, that's not what I meant. Don't get the wrong idea. Steam practically poured from her head, as if a kettle had just hit boiling point. Why did I say something so misleading? Study your body? It sounds so indecent. Seeing her flustered reaction, Satoshi realized he might have misunderstood her. Still, watching the future Oni-san Yuki blush like that was oddly satisfying. Miss, please relax. Satoshi smiled and took the initiative to ease the tension in the room. Since you know us, that means you probably know of us. But we still don't know you. Since this is your official commission, shouldn't we start by getting to know the very first customer of the Yoroswia? Realizing Satoshi had given her an out, Yuki let out a quiet breath of relief. She gave him a meaningful look, then began to introduce herself. Chapter 125, Chapter 125, I can be your girlfriend. I'm Tsukumo Yuki, and I have a dream. Yuki's self-introduction gave Satoshi a strange sense of déjà vu, like he was listening to Martin Luther King. But after hearing her real request, Satoshi finally remembered this girl standing in front of him was someone with unconventional methods but unwavering conviction. She was a star plasma vessel who refused to assimilate with Tenjin. She despised curses and always sought a way to eradicate them completely. Because of a conversation with her, special grade sorcerer Geto Suguro clarified his path and became a true sorcerer, unwavering in his resolve. She mentored the powerful grade 1 sorcerer Aoi Todo, and in the end, to protect Tenjin and fulfill her mission, she died at Kenjaku's hands in the tombs of the star without ever releasing a domain. There was no doubt this was a complex and captivating woman. But just like Satoru, her story ended in a cruel narrative death. Yuki's desire to study his body stemmed from the fact that he had 0 cursed energy. Satoshi could understand that. After all, in the original timeline, she'd tried to study Toji but was turned down. Still, understanding didn't mean he could casually agree to such a thing. Miss Yuki, you said you wanted to study me because I have no cursed energy. But Toji is also someone with 0 cursed energy. Why not study him instead? That was different from how things played out originally. Faced with the question, Yuki's eyes flicked between Toji and Satoshi. She quietly mulled over her thoughts. There's no difference between the two of you, you're both heavenly restriction types with 0 cursed energy. But if I'm going to study someone, I want to study someone who fits my taste. Toji looks way too fierce and difficult to approach. Even if I asked, he'd probably refuse me on the spot. Of course, she couldn't say that out loud. Although you're both without cursed energy, Toji's body has already fully matured. You, Gojo Satoshi, are still growing. Studying your development might help us understand the root cause of 0 cursed energy. It was a flimsy excuse. Satoshi gave her a suspicious look. His expression seemed to say, I know you're lying, I just can't prove it yet. That makes sense. After thinking for more than 10 seconds, Satoshi nodded. From a scientific standpoint, children's bodies do carry more unknowns and potential. Toji, looks like she's not interested in you. Satoshi gave him a pat on the back, his expression full of mischief. Toji didn't react much. He raised an eyebrow. This Yuki is clearly into you. Do you really think there's any difference between us? You may have the 6 eyes, but my observational skills are sharper than yours. Toji's lips silently formed a word Shoko and Satoshi instantly froze. That's just because I'm more popular than you, he muttered defensively. Toji didn't bother responding. He brushed past Satoshi and sat behind the counter, leaving the space to him and Yuki. Take her to the back if you want to chat. She's our first customer. Can't have her standing here talking like that. I won't be joining. He pointed to the doorway behind the Norin curtain beside the counter, then turned away. Realizing he'd been a bit neglectful in terms of hospitality, Satoshi gave Toji an annoyed look, then turned to invite Yuki into the back reception area. The moment they stepped through the curtain, Yuki realized the back of the Yoroswia was like a completely different world. Compared to the front room, which was practically empty save for the counter, the back was much more lived in. Still, calling it a reception area felt like a stretch. It looked more like the cozy living room of a private home complete with a kotetsu and television. It didn't feel like a shop's guest area at all. Satoshi scratched his head and smiled awkwardly. Sorry. The place isn't really set up for customers yet. The hospitality's not exactly professional. How about we just get into the kotetsu? He asked tentatively. After all, there was a difference between boys and girls. Inviting her to sit in the kotetsu felt a little forward. To his surprise, Yuki nodded, casually slipped off her shoes, and slid into the kotetsu. It's so warm. Yuki sprawled over the table, stretching out her body comfortably. Kotetsu is winter's perfect match. Seeing how naturally she treated him like a child, Satoshi stopped overthinking it and climbed into. Kotetsu really is the ultimate winter survival tool. With both of them curled up beneath the kotetsu, the winter chill faded, and the serious conversation began. So, Gojo Satoshi, was that a yes to my commission? Yuki's eyes sparkled with anticipation. From the earlier exchange with Toji, it seemed like Satoshi wasn't strongly opposed to the idea. Not only could she observe the Gojo family's six eyes air up close, but she could also investigate the formation of zero cursed energy. A total win. As for the task Tenjin had given her, at this point, she'd completely forgotten about it. Looking at her eager expression, Satoshi smiled slightly and tapped the side of his head. These are the Gojo family's greatest secret. Your request can't be accepted. I'm sorry, but I'll have to refuse. His polite rejection left Yuki visibly disappointed. Still, she wasn't ready to give up. After spending this time with him, she felt their relationship had warmed up significantly. And a bold, slightly embarrassing thought came to her mind. If you agree to let me study you, I can be your girlfriend. Oni-sans like me are super popular. And I have great curse technique compatibility. I'd be a top-tier girlfriend. Gojo Satoshi, won't you consider it? Pfft. At the counter in the front area, Toji choked on his water. With his sharp hearing, he never expected to hear that from Yuki. He had noticed she might be a little interested in Satoshi, sure. But this serious? Yuki might be old enough for romance, but Satoshi was 6 years old. If Shoko and Satoshi could be called childhood sweethearts, then Yuki and Satoshi were clearly an older girl-younger boy dynamic. Chapter 126. Chapter 126, Assertive Yuki, Bonus. Yuki's words made Satoshi momentarily doubt his own ears. He stared into her eyes, trying to find a trace of sarcasm. But unfortunately, Yuki's expression was dead serious. There wasn't the slightest sign that she was joking. Miss Tsukumo, there's quite an age gap between us. I don't think we're very compatible. Satoshi spoke gently, attempting to defuse the situation. Satoshi glanced at his own body and suddenly felt powerless. This kind of thing wasn't right. It's fine. We sorcerers don't need to worry about that kind of thing. Yuki clearly had already considered the future. Her determined tone left Satoshi at a loss for words. Miss Tsukumo, you can't just treat emotions like some kind of trade. Besides, this is our first meeting. We're not even familiar with each other yet. Satoshi really didn't know how to deal with a girl as forward as Yuki. And Yuki seemed to realize that this was where Satoshi struggled, so she became even more proactive. Then, Gojo Satoshi, do you think I'm pretty? She asked the question head-on, without a hint of subtlety. Satoshi let out a bitter smile, fell silent for a few seconds, and finally nodded. Yuki was undeniably one of the most striking women in the entire Jujutsu world. Then, am I your type? I don't have to be your only type, but at the very least, do I make you uncomfortable? Yuki pressed on. Satoshi felt a bit helpless, but he still nodded. There's no discomfort. Hearing his response, Yuki grinned happily. Then that's it. I'm beautiful, and I don't make you uncomfortable. She leaned forward on the kotetsu table, closing the distance between them. Her breath lightly brushed against Satoshi's face, making it difficult for him to dodge. So, it shouldn't be a problem for you to help me with my research, right? Yuki had once been the kind of girl who would blush at the mention of this kind of topic. But now, without Toji's presence, it was like she had transformed into someone else entirely. You're way too experienced with this kind of thing. You must be a veteran. Isn't that contrast a bit too much? Satoshi looked at her and thought, this future special grade sorcerer truly gave off a massive contrast vibe. Miss Tsukumo, I don't have any issues with you personally, but I can't accept your request. As the first client of the Yorozouya, we do want to fulfill our first commission properly. But unfortunately, the Yorozouya can't help you with that. Satoshi didn't dare to continue the topic of romance with Yuki. That was an area he wasn't good at. Besides, with his current age, it wasn't something he should be focused on. Yuki was a bit disappointed to see Satoshi suddenly change the subject, but she wasn't willing to give up just yet. Though her approach was somewhat direct, she believed that with her charm, this boy who had the soul of a mature man wouldn't be able to resist her. Her competitiveness suddenly flared. Even though she had no dating experience, she'd at least seen how it was done. Just now, while trying to persuade Satoshi, she had already completed a strategy for how to win him over. A fierce fighting spirit ignited in Yuki's eyes. She figured that Satoshi simply didn't know her well enough yet. If he saw her true strength, maybe the six eyes of the Gojo clan would finally realize how valuable she was. Being stared at like that by Yuki made Satoshi feel a chill run down his spine. Is Yuki going to be mad because I rejected her? When she first asked for a commission, I really just wanted to give her a reason to let me forge her Zenpakuto. If she asks me to do that, I'll agree. But anything else? I really can't accept. Gojo Satoshi, I know your standards are high. No, my standards aren't as high as you think they are. Can we please not talk about this? But you probably don't realize that I, Tsukumo Yuki, am also really strong. Don't say it, I know you're strong. You're going to be one of the strongest sorcerers in the future. Out of the 4 special grades, who would dare say you aren't strong? I know your Zanpakuto is incredible. You even forged a flame-type Zanpakuto that can change the weather. Don't even bring that up. It's all pain and tears. Ryujin Juka is useless now. It's basically just a really sharp fire stick. This is way too hard. You're already famous in the Jujutsu world. But I, Tsukumo Yuki, definitely won't lose to you in the future. Gojo Satoshi, it's really not easy to find a girlfriend like me. I already know that without you saying it, but seriously, now's not the time for me to be thinking about relationships. Let's just get back to business. If you need me to forge a Zanpakuto, that's totally fine. Seeing Satoshi just staring at her and staying silent, Yuki grew a bit annoyed. She'd already taken the initiative, and yet Satoshi could still remain so calm. Chapter 127, Chapter 127, Star Rage, Bonus. Is my charm really that lacking? Yuki widened her eyes and stared at Satoshi, clearly unwilling to let the matter go until she got an answer. Faced with this overly forward girl, Satoshi was a little flustered, his gaze unconsciously darting away. That momentary hesitation allowed Yuki to see through his thoughts. The girl smiled proudly. She was confident that she still had her charm. Thinking of this, Yuki wanted even more to show her strength. Although the Tsukumo family wasn't as renowned as the Gojo clan, it was still a respected sorcerer family in Kyoto's Jujutsu world. Her status and power were more than enough to match Gojo Satoshi, the son of 6 eyes. Gojo Satoshi, give me your hand. Yuki looked at him seriously. Satoshi was confused but still extended his hand, curious as to what she was trying to do. I know you don't have your own technique yet. I don't care what kind of ancestral power your family carries, my technique won't lose to the Gojo clans. Now, I'll show you my real strength. I'll be the strongest girl you've ever seen. After hearing Yuki's declaration, Satoshi still had no idea what she intended to do. In fact, he might even know more about her cursed technique than she did. And Star Rage wasn't something one should casually invoke. Just as he was about to pull back his hand, Yuki's slender fingers had already pressed against his palm. Gojo Satoshi, if you can lift my finger, I'll give up on my previous commission and stop asking to be your girlfriend. But if you can't, then from now on, you'll be my boyfriend and no flirting with other girls allowed. The surroundings didn't change in the slightest, but Satoshi knew that Yuki had already activated her technique Star Rage. Even though it was just a finger pressing against his hand, that single finger carried the weight of imagined mass through Yuki's technique. Gojo Satoshi, this is my power. I know you're talented, but can you endure it? There was a catch in her words. Technically, the weight he was facing was not her own power but the product of her imagined mass, granted form by Star Rage. So what Satoshi was up against wasn't Yuki's physical strength, but a conceptual weight, a manifested illusion imbued with reality. Staring at her slender finger pressing down, Satoshi smiled faintly, amused. This mass is quite strong. He tried pulling his right hand back, but her finger didn't budge at all. Toji, sitting in the front room, felt the shift in Yuki's cursed energy and smiled faintly. He had overheard the entire exchange and was interested to see how Satoshi would respond. Earlier, he had teased Satoshi for speaking so shamelessly about his love life. Now it was Satoshi's turn. Let's see how you handle it. Toji leisurely took a sip of tea, not concerned at all about the commotion in the back room. Although Yuki was undeniably powerful, Satoshi, wielder of a Zanpakuto, was in no way inferior to her. At this point, though, it would all depend on Satoshi's current physical capabilities. Toji was curious whether Satoshi could endure the technique of Yuki. Satoshi just mentioned mass. I think he might know something about me? But wait, this isn't right. I shouldn't have used my technique in front of others. Besides, it's impossible for someone to guess the nature of my ability just by seeing it once. Still, what was the meaning behind that smile just now? No matter. With Satoshi's current strength, there's absolutely no way he can overcome the imagined mass of Star Rage. Yuki was a little surprised by Satoshi's reaction, but her confidence in her own technique was unshakable. Although the mass she imagined wasn't that high, just twice her body weight, roughly 180 kilograms, that was already an impossible load for a 6-year-old child. Even most adults couldn't lift 180 kilograms with one hand, much less a child. So from the beginning of this bet, she had already placed herself in an advantageous position. Watching Satoshi try to pull his hand away, Yuki chuckled inwardly. Trying to pull his hand back was the best way to go. The weight wasn't being applied downward on his palm, it was simply suspended there. If he didn't apply upward force, he wouldn't feel the full 180 kilogram mass. But of course, she had accounted for that. That's why she chose to use her finger rather than her palm. Her fingertip pressing into his palm acted like a nail anchoring his hand in place. So unless Gojo Satoshi lifted her finger with his own strength, there was no chance of success. And if he did try to forcibly lift it, he would face another problem. Was his hand durable enough to withstand it? If not, her imagined 180 kilograms of weight could easily crush his palm. From Yuki's perspective, she had sealed off all avenues of retreat. In this bet, Satoshi was already in a losing position. Unfortunately, what Yuki didn't know was that she was dealing with Satoshi, the restless gambler who had never lost a bet in this timeline. She may have believed she had accounted for every variable, but she had no idea how durable the body of someone under heavenly restriction truly was. Even though Satoshi looked like a 6-year-old, after rigorous training with Toji and gaining mastery over Hakuta, his physical strength had reached a level far beyond ordinary comprehension. He wasn't quite at Toji's level yet, but lifting 180 kilograms with one hand? For Satoshi, that was nothing. Chapter 128, Chapter 128, Attack by an Unexpected Person. Miss Tsukumo, if I win this bet, then we shouldn't bring this topic up again. A confident smile appeared on Satoshi's face. Yuki found it hard to believe this was a weight of 180 kilograms. Satoshi himself didn't even weigh a third of that, right? 5. Just as Yuki was about to question him, a powerful force surged through her fingertips, making her fingers tremble. The sudden feedback stunned her. How is this possible? How could a little boy like Gojo Satoshi, with those skinny arms and legs, exert that kind of strength? Yuki thought she might have misjudged what she was feeling, but then Satoshi's palm applied force again. Under her shocked gaze, Satoshi's right hand wrapped around her fingers and slowly lifted her arm. Even with 180 kilograms of resistance, Satoshi's expression didn't change at all. He really lifted Yuki's arm. How is that possible? How did you do that? Yuki's eyes widened. She didn't come back to her senses until Satoshi let go of her hand. Satoshi's lips curled slightly. Miss Tsukumo, you're underestimating what mass really means. Don't you want to study my body? Seems you still don't understand enough about someone with a heavenly restriction. Satoshi stood up and stretched. I've won the bet, Miss Tsukumo. So please, let's drop the earlier topic. I need to head back. I won't keep you company any longer. If you have any other requests, go find Toji. He'll decide whether or not to accept the commission based on the situation. After speaking, Satoshi nodded to Yuki and turned to leave. His steps were swift. He had no idea what other unpredictable ideas Yuki might come up with. He really didn't want to deal with a woman like her. Meanwhile, Yuki continued staring blankly at her fingers, disbelief written all over her face. Satoshi's strength was beyond normal human comprehension, especially for a child. Is it a binding vow? Yuki wondered if Satoshi had used some kind of binding vow to lift her hand. But then she wanted to laugh at herself. How could that be possible? Satoshi was widely recognized across the Jujutsu world as someone born without cursed energy. There was no way he could use any binding vow technique. So there was only one conclusion. His physical strength was real. Just as he said she wanted to study people with heavenly restrictions and curse bearers. But her understanding of those two paths was still far too shallow. So this is the strength of someone with a heavenly restriction? Yuki watched Gojo Satoshi's departing figure, and an inexplicable smile crept onto her face. He's really a mysterious boy. I'm genuinely interested in him now. And, you seem to know my technique very well. Are you saying my illusions aren't strong enough? You actually saw through Star Rage in one glance? Gojo Satoshi, I won't give up that easily. Dash. In the front courtyard, Satoshi, who was still discussing something with Toji, suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. Toji asked, "You're heading back alone?" "Yeah. Help me block Yuki. I'll go back myself." Toji smirked. "Now you realize women are hard to deal with, huh? You won't run into trouble heading back solo. You're underestimating the power of Sode no Shirayuki and Ryujin Jaka, aren't you?" Satoshi patted the two Zanpakuto at his waist. With these two by his side, he didn't take any ordinary enemy seriously unless it was a special grade cursed spirit. Toji nodded. In the end, Satoshi decided to slip away before Yuki could reappear. Better to return early than get dragged into another strange situation. Dash. A few minutes after Satoshi left, Yuki walked out of the reception room and revealed her identity to Toji. "A messenger from Master Tenjin? You planning to stay in the Yoroswia for a while?" Toji didn't expect her to hold such a position. Considering Master Tenjin's status in the world of Jujutsu, even the three great sorcerer clans would have to show proper respect. "That's fine, but I can't guarantee when Satoshi will return." Toji saw right through her real purpose, but he didn't care. It wasn't his business. Satoshi could handle the problem of the new resident himself. And just like that, without Satoshi knowing, the Yoroswia gained a new member. Dash. On the way back, the image of Yuki kept flashing through Satoshi's mind. He found this future special grade sorcerer very interesting. Maybe when she grew up a bit more, she could even be a suitable partner. But for now, it was still too early. Besides, Yuki's thought process was just as eccentric as Satoru's. Satoshi had no interest in playing with another problem child. Still, he knew it was necessary to build a better relationship with Yuki. She would become one of the top combat forces in the Jujutsu world. When the time came to face Kenjaku and Ryaman Sukuna, Yuki would be a powerful ally. Let's think about what kind of Zanpakuto to forge for Yuki and harvest this massive experience pack early. That way, I can grow faster. As he hurried along, numerous Zanpakuto images flashed through Satoshi's mind as he began to consider which would best suit Kyujuku Yuki. But as he entered a narrow alley, his usual shortcut home, he suddenly sensed something off in the air. For some reason, his body abruptly felt heavy. Is it Yuki? Is she pissed off and coming for revenge? The sensation was similar to Yuki's Star Rage, but Satoshi quickly dismissed that thought. This isn't Star Rage. That technique only affects Yuki herself and her Shikigami, Garuda. There's no way I'd feel this kind of pressure because of her. There's another enemy. Satoshi's expression instantly turned cold as his six eyes activated, scanning the surroundings. Within his field of vision, he noticed that a barrier had been deployed around him at some point. In one corner of that barrier, a figure was locked in his sights. Chapter 129. Chapter 129, Oni-san with bad intentions. Come out. Satoshi stared coldly at the location of the hidden figure, exposing the enemy's disguise. Clap clap clap. Crisp applause echoed, followed by a husky yet seductive voice that drifted into Gojo Satoshi's ears. As expected of the six eyes, you saw through my position in an instant. So perceptive. I was even planning to treat you gently at first, but now it seems we'll have to jump straight to the main course. A tall woman with short hair appeared before Satoshi. At first, he only found her face vaguely familiar, but the moment he saw the stitched scar across her forehead, he immediately recognized her identity. Kenjaku, or more accurately Itadori Yuji's mother. Satoshi instinctively took a step back, surprise flashing in his eyes. He hadn't expected Kenjaku to appear before him. Seeing Satoshi's reaction, Itadori Kaori's lips curled up slightly, and a flicker of interest passed through her gaze. Oh, Gojo Satoshi-kan, do you know me? Satoshi shook his head. I don't. I just didn't expect the one who trapped me would turn out to be a woman. He wasn't arrogant enough to reveal Kenjaku's identity directly. Right now, he didn't have the strength to go head-to-head with Kenjaku. If he exposed her identity, it would only draw more of her attention in the future. Satoshi understood where his real advantage lay. He possessed knowledge of future developments and remained in the shadows. So even when facing Kenjaku, he would never reveal more than necessary. Itadori Kaori frowned slightly. Oh, is that so? She felt Satoshi was hiding something, but couldn't tell what. This was her first time meeting him. He shouldn't know who she really was. So, Oni-san, why did you stop me here? I need to hurry home. Satoshi slowly began retreating. The person before him was the true final boss of this world, and he didn't yet have the ability to fight her. If Ryujin Jako were fully obedient, he might still stand a chance. But right now, Ryujin Jako was nothing more than a glorified fire poker, and his body hadn't fully matured. He was no match for Kenjaku in her current form. The best option now was to run fast. Noticing Satoshi's subtle movement, Itadori Kaori smiled with amusement. Gojo Satoshi-kun, I just want to borrow something from you, okay? I hold no ill will toward you. Satoshi narrowed his eyes and looked at her warily. Borrow something? I don't think I have anything valuable on me. Kaori shook her head. Of course you do. You're so young, yet you carry two swords around. Isn't that a bit heavy? Why not lend me one? Her gaze lingered on Ryujin Jako. This Zanpakuto held immense power. Once activated, it would unleash world-shattering flames. Ryujin Jako. The moment she spoke the name, Satoshi's body tensed. He had assumed Kenjaku was here to nip a potential threat in the bud, but it turned out, her target was actually Ryujin Jako. Oni-san, this is just an ordinary katana. It's really not worth your time. Satoshi tried to play it off. Even though Kaori had said she was targeting the Zanpakuto, Satoshi didn't dare to lower his guard. Kaori's eyes sparkled. I like fire a lot, you know, so how about lending me this sword? I'll give it back later. Besides, your Oni-san just likes ordinary katanas, so don't take it too seriously, Satoshi-kun. Her attitude made it clear, she was determined to get her hands on Ryujin Jako. She could sense the threat it posed and had no intention of letting it slip away. As for Satoshi himself, she didn't see him as a real threat. Over the years, she had killed other Six Eyes users from the Gojo clan before, but even if the Six Eyes died, the eyes would eventually reappear. So her killing intent wasn't particularly strong toward him. If possible, she preferred that Satoshi cooperate and avoid complicating her future plans. Realizing her determination, Satoshi started weighing his options. Thanks to the system, even if Kenjaku forcibly took Ryujin Jako, she wouldn't be able to strengthen herself with it. After all, if he willed it, the Ryujin Jako in her hands would become nothing more than a real fire stick. Even so, he absolutely didn't want to lose Ryujin Jako unless he had no choice. He knew just how powerful this Zanpakuto could become. It was one of his future trump cards against Kenjaku and Ryomen Sukuna. Having Ryujin Jako and not having it were two completely different leagues. Well, if Oni-san likes it, I'd be happy to help. This one, right? Satoshi gripped the hilt and drew Ryujin Jako. Kaori's eyes gleamed as she nodded. That's the one. She was surprised at how cooperative Satoshi was. But in the very next moment, he swung Ryujin Jako with a powerful Zanjutsu technique, aiming directly at her. There's no need to struggle, Kaori said calmly. Satoshi-kun, I've been watching you for a while now. You still haven't unlocked Ryujin Jako's true power. Just its sharpness alone won't be enough to break through my barrier. Watching Satoshi resist, Itadori Kaori realized that taking Ryujin Jako wouldn't be so easy after all. Satoshi-kun, this barrier is completely invisible to others. I personally designed it. It's an advanced version of the curtain. Not only is it undetectable to regular humans, but even Jujutsu sorcerers won't be able to notice it. Unless someone pours a huge amount of cursed energy into a scan, no one will ever find this place. I know you're trying to stall for time, but are you sure it's worth wasting our energy like this? Upon hearing her explanation, Satoshi's heart skipped a beat. She was right, even something like Ryujin Jako might not be able to break through this barrier. 10 minutes is more than enough for me to kill you 100 times. So let's save ourselves the trouble, okay? Kaori casually revealed the barrier's duration, its only weakness, but she didn't care in the slightest. Chapter 130, Chapter 130, A Request for Help. In Kaori's eyes, Satoshi had no means of resistance. She assumed he was relying solely on the power of his other Zanpakuto, so no Shirayuki, which explained his lack of fear. However, to her surprise, Satoshi's eyes lit up the moment he heard that the barrier would only last 10 minutes. You're not seriously expecting someone to come rescue you, are you? If so, aren't you underestimating my strength just a bit too much? Kaori narrowed her eyes. She had seen through Satoshi's thoughts. Since persuasion failed, she would simply resort to force. She took a step forward. Up until that moment, Kaori believed everything was proceeding as planned. What she didn't know, however, was that while this barrier could block sound and vision, making it nearly impossible for others to detect, Satoshi was no sorcerer. Using a trick that worked on standard Jujutsu users against him was bound to backfire. The moment Raijin Jaka failed to shatter the barrier, Satoshi had already used the system to transmit a message through every Zanpakuto connected to a borrower. The swordsmith is in danger. Location coordinates. Sent. Kaori would never have imagined that, at this moment, every sword borrower had all received Satoshi's distress signal. Gojo clan. Satoru, currently in seclusion, immediately snapped out of meditation when he heard the message from Senbonzakura. His expression darkened as he rushed out of the chamber. Approaching him was Gojo Shunichi, equally grim-faced. Shunichi, you got the message too? Yes, young master Satoru. The two exchanged a look. Satoru gave a direct order. Shunichi, go find the clan head and the acting agent. I'll head to the location and get to Satoshi myself. Shunichi wanted to stop Satoru from going alone, but there was no time to argue. Young master Satoru, please be careful. Satoru nodded and vanished right before Shunichi's eyes. During his retreat, he had already mastered the core principles of blue and focused especially on its mobility techniques. Satoshi, just hold on, I'll be there soon. Yajayo clan. Yajayo Simon, along with Yuzuki, knocked on Yajayo Hidesugu's door. What is it? What happened? Hidesugu looked confused, but Simon had no time for explanations. Come with me, Hidesugu. Young master Gojo Satoshi is in danger. The moment he spoke, Simon had already disappeared from sight. Hearing that, Hidesugu's expression changed drastically, and he immediately activated his technique to follow. Gojo Satoshi was the Gojo clan's most precious asset. If anything happened to him, the entire Jujutsu world would plunge into chaos. The two Grade 1 sorcerers from the Yajayo clan moved out at full speed toward the coordinates. Yorozuya. In the Yorozuya, Toji, who had been speaking with Yuki, suddenly froze. A terrifying killing intent surged from his body. Yuki, standing across from him, instantly felt an overwhelming pressure bearing down on her. She reflexively summoned Garuda, thinking Toji might attack her, that her life was in danger. If she didn't fight back, she would die. But this was just Yuki's misconception. Toji wasn't targeting her. Gojo Satoshi is in danger. After dropping those words, Toji vanished from the Yorozuya. Yuki's expression shifted, and she immediately activated her cursed energy to chase after him. She didn't know how Toji had learned of the situation, but if it concerned Satoshi, she couldn't afford to ignore it. Three separate forces were now converging toward the barrier's location. Satoshi, viewing the scene through his Zanpakuto's shared perception, confirmed their movements and formulated his strategy. Right now, he couldn't defeat Kenjaku, but he didn't need to. He just had to buy time until the others arrived. As long as Toji reached the scene, Kenjaku would likely abandon the idea of stealing Raijin Jaka. After all, with Toji and Katen Kyokotsu currently at their peak, even Kenjaku could not guarantee a swift victory. So, just as Kaori began to advance, Satoshi had already drawn Sode no Shirayuki. At the moment the blade left its sheath, it entered Shikai. A pristine white blade radiated an intense chill. Satoshi swung Sode no Shirayuki, drawing a circle along the edge of the barrier. First danced Sakishiro. He poured all his strength into activating Sode no Shirayuki, even wrapping himself within the circle to try and freeze Kenjaku for just a few seconds. An overwhelming wave of ice erupted from the circle beneath his feet, surging through the entire barrier. In an instant, both Satoshi and Kenjaku were engulfed in ice. Satoshi didn't bother defending himself. His only wish was for Tsukishiro to hold out just a little longer. But this was merely wishful thinking. Tsukishiro's power was nothing compared to Kaori. It couldn't even slow her down. At the moment the technique spread through the barrier, Kenjaku activated her own technique anti-gravity system. When activated in the forward direction, the technique reversed gravitational pull. The moment Tsukishiro touched her, the surrounding ice floated upward, becoming weightless and condensing at the top of the barrier. Tsukishiro couldn't even graze her. Seeing this, Satoshi let out a soft sigh, but he had expected this outcome. Tsukishiro was only Sode no Shirayuki's most basic technique. If it were enough to stop Kenjaku, she wouldn't deserve the title of hidden boss. Gojo Satoshi-kun, I suggest you stop struggling. You still have a technique called Hakuren, don't you? Don't waste your strength. Kaori's voice was calm. She stood in the barrier like a goddess, gravity bent to her will. But surrender wasn't in Satoshi's nature. Second dance Hakuren. The white avalanche surged forth from his blade. And just as Kaori had predicted, despite its overwhelming power, Hakuren couldn't reach her at all due to the anti-gravity effect. The massive snow waterfall floated harmlessly above her. Kaori smiled slightly. Although these two large-scale ice techniques were impressive, they posed no threat to her. But in the middle of the snowstorm, a faint gleam of cold light suddenly flashed. Hidden behind the cascading snow, Satoshi had launched a surprise close-range attack. Chapter 131, Chapter 131, Technique, Anti-Gravity System. Satoshi's speed was incredibly fast, but Itadori Kaori still didn't take him seriously. If he wanted to pierce her with his Zanpakuto, at his current level, he would need to train for several decades at least. However, as Satoshi approached her, the combined effects of the technique's forward rotation and the anti-gravity system began to destabilize his body. Just as he lost his balance, Kaori prepared to end it with a single strike. But in the very next second, an inexplicable sense of danger surged within her. Satoshi's body was clearly off balance, and so no Shirayuki was far from him, so why did she suddenly feel threatened? Kaori wanted to push forward with her attack, but her instincts told her to trust herself. She quickly pulled back her fist and stepped backward. At that moment, she finally saw what had triggered her instincts. Third dance, white sword. Sode no Shirayuki abruptly extended, its length doubling. At such close range, if she hadn't dodged in time, she definitely would have been impaled. Seeing her evade, Satoshi's expression carried a trace of regret. That last wave wasn't just white sword, he had also dropped his body temperature to -18 degrees Celsius, activating technique, -18 degrees. As long as the blade connected, the freezing of her blood would have significantly slowed her movements. Unfortunately, even though it was her first time seeing white sword, she still managed to avoid it with ease. Kaori frowned, facing both the sudden increase in Sode no Shirayuki's length and the biting chill radiating from Satoshi. She hadn't expected that Sode no Shirayuki had other hidden techniques. And what's more, it actually posed a threat to her. She suddenly realized that the Zanpakuto forged by Gojo Satoshi might possess greater potential than she'd originally assumed. Since there's another technique I didn't know about, could Sode no Shirayuki have even more? 4 techniques are already absurd enough, but it feels like Satoshi still has a trump card left. Kaori never imagined that Satoshi could remain this composed while facing her. Yet here he was, launching an offensive, meaning he still had confidence left. Kaori felt it was time to get serious. If she stayed too lax, this boy might actually defeat her. Under the influence of the anti-gravity system, Satoshi barely kept himself upright. As expected of Kenjaku, this technique really was absurd. Right now, it was only the forward rotation of the system. Satoshi recalled that she could reverse the anti-gravity flow. It hadn't been used yet, probably because Kaori didn't see him as a real threat. But Satoshi was fine with that. If he could hold out for just 2 more minutes, Yajayu-simon would arrive. Satoru would reach them in about 3 minutes, and Toji in 5. As long as he lasted 5 minutes, Kaori would have no choice but to retreat if she didn't want to expose herself. Just as Satoshi was weighing his options for reinforcements, Itadori Kaori had already discarded any trace of underestimation. Curse technique reversal, gravity. The reversal that Satoshi had just been thinking about was suddenly used by Kaori. The gravity within the barrier instantly multiplied several times over. Satoshi felt his body grow exponentially heavier, and his movements slowed. Gojo Satoshi-kun, your Zanpakuto really surprised me. That alone proves you're worth my attention. So, as a sign of respect, I'll show you what a real technique reversal looks like. There was a glint of amusement in Kaori's eyes. As the only person currently capable of using cursed technique reversal, she had every right to be proud. However, to her surprise, Satoshi remained remarkably calm. Forget it. You're still young. It's normal you don't understand the power of cursed technique reversal. I won't blame you. Kaori shrugged, thinking Satoshi was simply ignorant. She had no idea he already understood it all. The moment he sensed the gravity intensify, he activated technique, -50 degrees. In an instant, all moisture on the ground froze solid, and he used the icy condensation to anchor his footing. Kaori tried to approach again, but suddenly, the ground trembled violently. An earthquake. She steadied herself. It wasn't surprising for Japan, but this one had been far too sudden. Kaori didn't think much of it. But as she continued to walk, the ground quaked again. When she stopped moving, so did the shaking. It was as if the earthquake followed her steps. After a moment of observation, Kaori immediately realized this wasn't a natural occurrence. It was Satoshi's doing. She narrowed her eyes and stomped the ground. Under the weight of the increased gravity, the surface cracked instantly, and beneath it, fine ice threads were exposed to her eyes. I see now. The tremors were caused by these ice threads, weren't they? I never expected a Zanpakuto to have such bizarre abilities. So this is Sode no Shirayuki. A glint of madness appeared in her gaze. If you have any more techniques, use them, Gojo Satoshi-kun. I want to show you what true despair feels like. Satoshi's face showed a trace of regret. Oni-san. Sode no Shirayuki has no more techniques to offer. I didn't think you'd be so strong that I'd be forced to use everything. I'm really curious about your identity, Oni-san. Maintaining his current persona was becoming uncomfortable. But for the sake of the final outcome, and to shift the balance of power, he had no choice but to lie against his nature. Is that so, Gojo Satoshi-kun? You've already done very well. As long as you hand over Ryujin Jaka, you will gain my friendship. Hearing the hint of submission in Satoshi's tone, Kaori's eyes sparkled with satisfaction. To her, Satoshi had exhausted every resource, tried every strategy, and in the end, accepted his fate. Chapter 132, Chapter 132, Domain, Bonus. Oni-san, you're so strong. I'm lucky to have your friendship. With you, Ryujin Jaka might finally show its true power. Satoshi sighed, a mix of regret and reluctance on his face, as he drew Ryujin Jaka once again. Sensing the ice on the ground melting and noticing that Sword no Shirayuki had returned to its sheath, Kaori assumed Satoshi had given up. She relaxed slightly and began walking straight towards Satoshi, ready to take Ryujin Jaka. However, the moment she reached out her hand, a sudden fluctuation of cursed energy surged around her. Yajayo Simon and Yajayo Hidetsugu? Why had they shown up here? And even more puzzling, how did they land so precisely outside the barrier? Is young Master Satoshi here? Why can't I sense him anywhere? Yajayo Hidetsugu sounded clearly anxious. Nijibana told me this was the place. Yajayo Simon was anxious as well, but now wasn't the time to panic. He could only search carefully. Inside the barrier. After hearing Yajayo Simon's words, Kaori's expression darkened. These two from the Yajayo clan had been drawn here because of Satoshi. She only now realized that Nijibana had somehow transmitted information through a Zanpakuto. It was the first time she'd heard of a Zanpakuto being able to do that. Satoshi hadn't surrendered at all. If he could send a message via Nijibana to Yajayo Simon, then Gojo Satoru, who wielded Senbonzakura, and Gojo Shunichi, the wielder of Suzumashi, must have received it as well. Likewise, there was no way that Katen Kyokotsu hadn't conveyed the situation here to Zenintoji, which meant that strong reinforcements from the Gojo clan, the Yajayo clan, and the Zenin clan were all converging here. A cold gleam flashed in Kaori's eyes. She'd been tricked by Gojo Satoshi. In a flash, she leapt backward. There was no way Satoshi would obediently hand over Ryujin Jaka. There had to be a trap. Once again, her instinct had saved her from disaster. Satoshi hadn't expected that the person he had asked for help would arrive and expose the trap he had set for Kaori. Since he wasn't the one controlling the barrier, he had no way of knowing what was happening outside. He didn't know that Yajayo Simon and Yajayo Hidetsugu had shown up just as he was trying to deceive Kaori and happened to speak about Nijibana. Even if he had known, Satoshi could only sigh at how coincidental it all was. As Kaori jumped away, Satoshi slashed forward with Sword no Shirayuki, unleashing his ultimate technique. Absolute Zero. The surrounding temperature plummeted to -273.15 degrees Celsius. In such conditions, any target struck would be instantly frozen. Had Kaori been hit by that absolute zero slash just now, everything would have been decided. Unfortunately, due to a strange turn of events, Satoshi's most crucial attack missed. Now, standing in the state of absolute zero, Satoshi radiated a terrifying chill. Even someone as powerful as Kaori could feel that approaching him would cause severe harm. She didn't know how long he could maintain this state. But with reinforcements from the Gojo clan and Zenintoji en route, she realized she could not afford to drag things out. If Satoshi could hold on for even a few more minutes, the barrier might be discovered. Her expression turned grim. Satoshi-kun, you've really impressed me. You've actually forced me to use domain expansion. She began forming hand seals in front of her chest. Watching her, Satoshi, whose body temperature was gradually returning to normal, felt a sudden jolt of surprise. He could only maintain the absolute zero state for 4 seconds. If he had just held out a little longer, he would have been able to move again. More importantly, exiting the absolute zero state had to be done gradually. If it was released too quickly, it would damage his body. Now, because of absolute zero, Kaori was forced to use her domain, making her reveal one of her trump cards. Once the domain was deployed, it should become observable, even from outside. After all, the power of a domain was far from subtle. As if reading his mind, Itatori Kaori sneered. Satoshi-kun, don't get your hopes up. Even if your allies arrive, they won't be able to break in before this barrier deactivates on its own. This transformation barrier is integrated into my domain. Even if it becomes visible, the people you called won't be able to break a domain that merges with the barrier itself. Satoshi-kun, I'm furious now. I'll take Ryujin Jaka, and I'll take your life and your body too. As for your reinforcements, Gojo Satoru, Zenintoji, they'll watch helplessly from outside as you die in my hands. Her sneer twisted into a malevolent smile. She hadn't wanted to go this far, but Satoshi had left her no choice. To be pushed this far, what a humiliation for her, a master strategist. Domain expansion, womb perfusion. Outside the barrier, Toji, moving at full speed, arrived even before Satoru. Seeing Yajayo Simon and Yajayo Hidetsugu standing in front of him, his expression grew heavy. He instantly understood, they had come because of Satoshi's message. Did you find Satoshi? Yajayo Simon shook his head. They had only just arrived themselves. He had been wondering whether Nijibana had relayed false information, but now that Toji had also appeared, it confirmed the message had been accurate. Damn it. Toji frowned. Behind him, Yuki finally caught up. After witnessing Toji's speed firsthand, she finally understood what a body bound by a heavenly restriction truly meant. Is Satoshi in danger? Huh. Isn't that him? She pointed at a boy in a kimono ahead of them. Her eyes lit up. Didn't Toji just say Satoshi was in danger? But he's right there. But then, the boy who looked exactly like Satoshi appeared beside Toji. Where's Satoshi? Didn't he leave with you? How did he end up in danger? Satoru's expression was dark and stormy. Toji didn't respond. He simply walked in the direction of the barrier, guided by instinct. Though he couldn't see the barrier, his absolute perception had already picked up an anomaly in the surrounding space. Young Master Satoru, what's most important right now is finding young Master Satoshi, Hide-sugu whispered a reminder. Toji was the strongest among them. This wasn't the time for internal strife. Chapter 133, Chapter 133, The Battle of Zanpakuto's Submission. When she heard Hide-sugu address him, Yuki immediately realized that the young man in front of her wasn't Satoshi. This one possessed cursed energy and techniques. He was another Six Eyes child of the Gojo clan and Satoshi's twin brother, Satoru. Aside from their cursed techniques, the two were indistinguishable. Of course, the Zanpakuto at their waists were also different. Satoru calmed himself and gave a small nod to Hide-sugu. Right now, the priority was finding Satoshi. While everyone focused on locating him, Toji had already followed his instincts and struck the barrier with a powerful Hakuda. With a single punch, the ground beneath them trembled. Then, a translucent barrier emerged before their eyes. In the previously empty alley, Satoshi and Kaori appeared. Satoshi. The moment Satoru laid eyes on him, he immediately released cursed technique lapse, blue. Without holding back a single drop of cursed energy, he poured everything into the barrier. Yuki and Hide-sugu were visibly shaken. A 6-year-old had this much cursed energy? For the first time, the Gojo clan's monstrous talent was being shown to the outside world. As expected of the Gojo clan's inherited technique, this thought ran through both their minds. But what happened next shocked them even more. Even Satoru's full power technique failed to break the barrier. The entire structure merely shuddered slightly, no visible cracks at all. At the same time, they all felt the shift in gravity within the barrier. Just by standing near it, their bodies felt twice as heavy. A domain. Hide-sugu muttered, his expression darkening. He hadn't expected the one attacking Satoshi to actually master domain expansion, the ultimate secret of a Jujutsu sorcerer. Meanwhile, Yuki's eyes locked on the caster inside the barrier, her face full of disbelief. That was the short-haired, sharp-eyed woman she had encountered before. She'd never imagined that the real reason she'd been observing Satoshi was to set him up for an ambush. The situation was far more complex than she'd expected. But one thing was certain, this woman was a clear threat to Satoshi. As the domain continued to unfold, the danger to Satoshi only escalated. Yuki summoned Garuda, ready to support Satoru and Toji in breaking the barrier, but Hide-sugu stopped her. Don't act rashly. Act rashly? It was the first time anyone had ever said that to her. She was stronger than the uncle beside her, how could she possibly be acting rashly? Just as Yuki was about to speak up, 3 surging energy bursts erupted from Toji, Satoru, and Simon. Flower Wind Rage and Flower God Roar, Heavenly Wind Rage and Heavenly Demon Sneer. Rankle the Seas and Heavens, Nijibana. Scatter Senbonzakura. All 3 Zanpakuto activated their Shikai simultaneously. Before Yuki's eyes, the true forms of the Zanpakuto unfolded. Within a storm of cherry blossom blades, Katen Kyakotsu's dual swords and Nejibana's long spear struck the barrier in unison. Inside the barrier, Kaori's expression turned even more grim. Thankfully, she had already deployed her domain. Otherwise, the combined attacks from Toji and Satoru might have shattered the barrier entirely. Even now, while the domain held strong, Kaori knew it wouldn't last much longer, not after another round of coordinated Zanpakuto strikes. She had to take Ryujinjaka immediately and prepare for evacuation. Dragging things out would only work against her. Now that she'd expanded her domain and merged it with the barrier, Kaori no longer considered Satoshi a real threat. Sode no Shirayuki's absolute zero had been dangerous, yes, but he was no longer in that state. Within her own domain, Kaori believed Satoshi was already within her grasp. She raised her right hand and slammed it down. Satoshi instantly felt his entire body become 10 times heavier. If it weren't for the enhancements of his heavenly restriction, his bones might have been crushed. He immediately recognized the ability, an indiscriminate gravitational field. A domain ability, not unlike Sukuna's cleaving slashes. If he couldn't endure this pressure, it was over. Toji and the others were outside, and it was only a matter of time before they broke through the barrier. But if he died at Kaori's hands before that happened, then even if they tore her apart afterward, it would be meaningless. So, Satoshi knew he could only rely on himself now. He had to block her attacks, no matter what it took. But what cards were left for him to play? Kendo? That wouldn't work against someone who could manipulate gravity. His Zanjutsu would never connect. Rushing her? Under these warped conditions, even his basic movement was distorted. Unless he could unleash Ryujinjaka's Shikai, or achieve Sode no Shirayuki's Bankai. But both paths were near impossible right now. Still, this was a desperate situation. No matter how difficult it was, he had to try. Satoshi gripped Sode no Shirayuki tightly, his heart as cold as the blade. Under crushing gravity, he forced his body upright. Are you truly prepared? A gentle voice echoed in his heart. A woman appeared before him, wearing a white kimono, her appearance that of a perfect Yamato Nades Hiko. A glint of determination flashed in Satoshi's eyes. He nodded. The personified Sode no Shirayuki smiled softly and pulled him into her embrace. Her entire form merged with Satoshi. In that moment, a fierce internal battle ignited in his consciousness. The battle between him and Sode no Shirayuki. A battle to determine whether the Zanpakuto would accept submission. A battle that would decide if her Bankai would be realized. A battle that would decide if Satoshi would live or die. If Sode no Shirayuki won, Satoshi would perish. But if she lost, Satoshi would be reborn. Chapter 134. Chapter 134, Bankai, White Haze Punishment. Satoshi-kun, please stop resisting. This barrier is strong enough for me to kill you dozens of times. Kaori approached Satoshi unhurriedly and directly pulled Ryujinjaka from his waist. She was still surprised that Satoshi could stand within her domain. But it no longer mattered. She had already taken Ryujinjaka. Gojo Satoshi, I believe you will find it a worthy death, to die by the Zanpakuto you forged with your own hands. Kaori gently stroked the still warm hilt of the blade. A trace of fanaticism flickered in her eyes. This powerful Zanpakuto would become hers from now on. Just because Satoshi couldn't wield its Zanjutsu didn't mean she couldn't. She believed that Ryujinjaka would bloom with unimaginable brilliance in her hands. Before that, she would use the blood of its forger to whet its edge. She drew Ryujinjaka and slashed towards Satoshi. Everything would end. Satoshi, Satoru and Toji's eyes blazed with fury. The barrier in front of them was about to collapse. If they could just hold out a few more seconds, it would be over. The Gojo clan's sorcerers, brought by Kuma-en, were also pouring spells into the barrier. Everyone was giving their all. They could already see the overwhelming difference between Satoshi and Kaori. With the domain expansion, Satoshi no longer stood a chance. Yuki looked at Satoshi, still trying to stand inside the barrier, her face full of sorrow. Garuda continued, pushed to its maximum illusionary state, but it still couldn't affect the barrier. Simon and Hidetsugu stared at the scene inside, stricken with fear. The Zanpakuto, Nijibana, forged by Satoshi for the Yajayo clan, had helped establish their footing in the sorcerer world. If someone like him died here, they didn't know how they could face the Gojo clan. Kuma-en stood silently, watching everything unfold. Though the Gojo clan had many sorcerers, when facing true power, they were often reduced to mere cannon fodder. Even such numbers wouldn't secure the Gojo clan's future. Shunichi held Suzumashi in one hand. Suzumashi Nishiki was ready for deployment, but it was already too late. Satoru stared at the crisis inside the barrier. Tears were close to bursting from his eyes, and blood was already seeping from the corners. His limitless technique and Senbonzakura had nearly been depleted. Toji had fallen into madness. Katen Kyakotsu, used like a hatchet, hacked repeatedly at the barrier with speed far beyond normal perception. The barrier trembled violently under everyone's combined assault. It could collapse at any moment, but it was too late. Inside the barrier, Kaori had already drawn Ryujinjaka. This was the end. Satoshi-kun, it's over. A cold glint danced on Ryujinjaka's edge. Satoshi was moments away from being beheaded. Despair clouded the faces outside the barrier. To die by the very Zanpakuto he forged, what a cruel fate. Many Gojo sorcerers instinctively shut their eyes. None of them could bear to witness Satoshi's death. But just as Ryujinjaka was about to slash through Satoshi's neck, a voice colder than ancient ice rang out across the battlefield. Bankai. Satoru, Toji, Shunichi, and Simon all jerked their heads toward the interior of the barrier. They were all familiar with Bankai by name, but none had ever seen it. Hearing it now, hope ignited in every heart. Haka no to game. Satoshi spoke the 3 words with a frosty calm. At the exact moment his voice fell, everyone trembled. The temperature in the air plummeted instantly. In a single instant, Satoshi's entire form transformed. The light blue kimono he wore turned pure white, as though encased in frost. His once snow-white Sode no Shirayuki had turned completely transparent, like a blade of pure ice. This is Sode no Shirayuki's Bankai. That thought surged through the minds of every sorcerer who had borrowed a Zanpakuto. This was also the first time a Bankai had ever appeared in the world of Jujutsu Kaisen. Inside the barrier, Kaori's expression twisted the moment she heard the name Haka no to game. She had never imagined that in this situation, Sode no Shirayuki still held a hidden technique. What kind of power lay hidden in a technique that could completely transform Satoshi's appearance? She could clearly sense the danger emanating from Sode no Shirayuki, but she refused to back down. The chance to kill Satoshi was right in front of her. She would not let it slip away. From this moment forward, she was a true enemy of Satoshi. If she didn't finish him off, he would surely become a thorn in her side. Just one more step. With the sheer sharpness of Ryujinjaka, his body wouldn't withstand a single blow. Still, she couldn't shake the unease about this white haze punishment. Despite that, she was confident. With her domain's gravity and Ryujinjaka's unmatched sharpness, even if Satoshi had a trump card, it was already too late. Just as Ryujinjaka was about to strike his neck, Satoshi and Kaori locked eyes. That single glance sent a chill crawling through Kaori's soul. It was a lifeless cold, a void in which time itself seemed meaningless. Clang. The flowing blade met an icy edge. At the very last second, Sode no Shirayuki blocked Ryujinjaka. Though Sode no Shirayuki and Ryujinjaka were not on the same level, the former had now reached its Bankai state, while the latter remained in its Shikai. For the first time, Ryujinjaka faltered before Sode no Shirayuki. Kaori's expression shifted. She instinctively tried to pull back her blade. Her instinct screamed at her that she could no longer kill Satoshi. Withdraw now. She already had Ryujinjaka. There was no need to concern herself with Satoshi for the moment. Once she mastered Reincarnating's techniques, its power would surely surpass that of Sode no Shirayuki. But what Kaori didn't know was that from the moment Satoshi activated his Bankai, nothing would go as she intended. Chapter 135, Chapter 135, I Will Remember You. The moment Reincarnating touched Sode no Shirayuki, its blade was instantly coated with a layer of frost and froze in midair. Only then did Kaori realize that her entire domain had been flooded with an overwhelming cold. At some unknown point, a massive disk of pure white chill had formed above her domain. Then, a pillar of cold surged up from the ground and pierced through the sky. Simultaneously, waves of cold air swept across the surface like a roaring tide. Cannot touch it. Absolutely cannot touch it. Kaori felt the overwhelming threat within this cold air. If she made contact with it, she would truly die. Oni-san, you'd better run. This barrier is the perfect place for Haka no Togame's cold energy. If you're still obsessed with Reincarnating, then go ahead and try touching it. This cold will freeze everything within its range. Anything it touches will be encased in ice, and in the end, it will wither and shatter like broken glass. Satoshi spoke calmly. Kaori furrowed her brows. She could tell that Satoshi wasn't lying. The danger of this cold was very real. But to give up Reincarnating now was something she couldn't accept. She had gone through all this trouble, setting up the barrier, making elaborate preparations, and even revealing her identity all for this one blade. Kaori attempted once more to reclaim Reincarnating, but the cold air from Haka no Togame surged toward her like it had a will of its own. In a few more seconds, you won't have a chance. A confident smile appeared on Satoshi's face. Under the bombardment from outside, cracks had begun to form in the barrier that had fused with Kaori's domain. Kaori's gaze shifted between the suspended Reincarnating and Satoshi. Her expression changed constantly. In the end, she gritted her teeth and made her decision. Retreating was the best option. This Bankai level Zanpakuto had already made her feel threatened. If Toji, Simon, and the others arrived to assist Satoshi, she wouldn't be able to retreat unscathed. As the barrier collapsed, Kaori withdrew her domain completely. In that instant, a powerful wave of cursed energy erupted. Covered by the surging force, her figure vanished from the scene. Kaori chose to flee. But just as the barrier collapsed and she evacuated, she finally realized Satoshi was already at his limit. His barrier had also been used to contain the cold. Now that it was broken, the cold began to spill outward uncontrollably. If she had persisted just a little longer, Satoshi's condition would have deteriorated on its own. She realized that this cold energy would target everything except for Satoshi himself. Now that the barrier had collapsed, Satoshi would be forced to suppress his Bankai in order to protect others. There was still a chance for her. But unfortunately, she had made the wrong call. All she could do now was watch as Satoshi ended his technique and was surrounded by Toji, Satoru, and the others. Gojo Satoshi, I will remember you. Kaori's figure darted into the distance and disappeared from everyone's sight. The cold air that had protected Satoshi moments ago now became an obstacle that hindered everyone's pursuit. It's over. A trace of relief appeared on Satoshi's face. The activation of Haka no Togame had completely drained the last of his physical strength. If Kaori hadn't chosen to retreat just now, he truly wouldn't have been able to hold on. Satoshi collapsed into Toji's arms, completely exhausted. No one knew the identity of the attacker, but everyone understood how powerful that person was. After all, not a single one of them had a domain. The only ones present with the potential to awaken a domain were Yuki and Satoru, both destined to become special-grade sorcerers in the future. Though the attacker had escaped, everyone had witnessed the true power of Satoshi. After seeing a Zanpakuto's Bankai firsthand, they realized it could truly rival a sorcerer's ultimate techniques. Seeing Reincarnating's towering pillar of fire, capable of changing the heavens, Kuma-an believed the blade to be unmatched. But now, having witnessed Sode no Shirayuki's Bankai, he realized he had still underestimated the true potential of a Zanpakuto. At least in that moment, Sode no Shirayuki's power was not inferior to Reincarnating at all. Kuma-en didn't understand the difference between Shikai and Bankai, but he could sense the overwhelming power of the technique. The potential of Zanpakuto was immeasurable. Right now, he was immensely grateful that Satoshi had held on until the end and survived an opponent who possessed a domain. Hidetsugu and Simon both exhaled deeply. Hidetsugu was shaken by the might of Haka no Togame and relieved that Satoshi was alive. His survival meant the world of Jujutsu could avoid descending into chaos. Simon, however, was focused entirely on Satoshi's Bankai. So this is Sode no Shirayuki's Bankai? Just like young master Gojo Satoshi said, a Zanpakuto's Bankai is its final form. Doesn't that mean Sode no Shirayuki in Bankai form already surpasses a grade 1 sorcerer? In today's world of Jujutsu, where the special grade rank remained vacant, a grade 1 sorcerer was already among the top tier forces. The fact that Sode no Shirayuki had shattered this ceiling after achieving Bankai was enough to prove that the influence of Zanpakuto in this world hadn't reached its peak. When Nijibana in his hand achieves Bankai, when Suzumashi in Shinika's hand does the same, when their strength would ascend to an entirely new level. A fiery passion lit up in Simon's eyes. He was determined to reach Bankai. He wanted to see Nijibana's true power, and he wanted to climb to the pinnacle of the Jujutsu world. Shunichi put away Suzumashi and silently stood beside Toji, guarding the unconscious Satoshi. He was shaken by the power of Bankai, but even more filled with guilt for failing to protect him. He had only one responsibility: to guard Satoshi's life. If he had stayed by Satoshi's side, even if he couldn't defeat that mysterious woman, he could have at least bought time for him to escape. This time, it was Satoshi who had mastered Bankai and fended off the enemy with his own strength. Everything had been far too dangerous. One mistake, and Satoshi could have died here today. Shinichi was overwhelmed by guilt, and in that moment, he made a vow. From now on, he would protect Satoshi with everything he had. This had been the first time Satoshi was attacked, and Shinichi would ensure it was also the last. Chapter 136, Chapter 136, Bankai, must be achieved. Bonus. The sharp cherry blossom blades floating in the air gathered around Satoru and reformed into Senbonzakura in his hand. In the face of Sode no Shirayuki's Bankai, Senbonzakura seemed to stir unnaturally. Satoru could feel its yearning, its desire for Bankai. He stood motionless, staring at Satoshi, whose pale figure lay unconscious in Toji's arms. His heart was filled with conflicting emotions. He was relieved that Satoshi had successfully awakened Bankai at the critical moment and resolved the crisis. The power of Haka no To game just now could only be described as terrifying. Anyone touched by that cold would have been instantly frozen and shattered. Even someone like him, who possessed the six eyes, was shocked by the sheer might of Bankai. But at the same time, Satoru felt conflicted. He had just completed his training and mastered Blue, a technique Satoshi himself had once admired. He believed that with this technique, he had finally surpassed Satoshi. But in front of Haka no To game, he suddenly felt inferior. At the very least, from Satoru's own perspective, even with Blue, he would have been powerless against the woman with the domain. And he had no confidence in surviving Haka no To game's cold either. Was this technique of his, Blue, really something Satoshi should envy? Satoru had already grasped the fundamentals of the Gojo clan's limitless technique. With the addition of Blue, his strength now exceeded most sorcerers. But he wasn't satisfied. I'm still too weak. I can't stay like this. I refuse to be left behind. Because of Satoshi's existence, he had witnessed the pinnacle of the Jujutsu world in the form of a 6-year-old child. He could no longer bear the arrogance of being the six eyes of the Gojo clan. If the other families knew what he was thinking right now, if they heard that the one hailed as the Gojo family's genius believed himself mediocre, they would probably think he had lost his mind. The limitless technique alone is not enough to protect Satoshi. None of this is enough. That thought echoed clearly in Satoru's heart. The limitless technique was powerful, but he had yet to master all of it. Had Satoshi not been attacked, he might not have felt such urgency. But after seeing the gap between himself and Kaori, between himself and Toji, Satoru's desire to become stronger burned hotter than ever. And the only path forward that he could clearly see was mastering Bankai with Senbonzakura. Satoru was certain that Senbonzakura's Bankai would not be inferior to Sode no Shirayuki's Haka no To game. If he could master Senbonzakura's Bankai, he should be able to go toe-to-toe with the woman who ambushed Satoshi. I have to master Bankai. At this moment, Satoru made his decision. Only by awakening Bankai could he keep up with Satoshi. Toji looked down at the unconscious Satoshi lying in his arms. His thoughts were calm and steady. He had memorized the face of the woman who had attacked. If she ever appeared again, he would eliminate her without hesitation. His body, strengthened by heavenly restriction, was incredibly powerful. But against certain types of techniques, pure physical strength still wasn't enough. Just like moments ago, if he had been stronger, if he had been able to break the barrier sooner, maybe Satoshi wouldn't have come so close to being cut down by Ryujin Jaka. Before this battle, Toji had full confidence in his body. Even high-level sorcerers were like fragile paper in front of him, not worth a second glance. But now, after failing to break through a barrier in time, he had been forced to confront the reality that brute strength alone couldn't overcome carefully prepared techniques. Katen Kyokotsu's abilities after Shikai were more suited for one-on-one combat. Now that he had Katen Kyokotsu, he needed to diversify his fighting methods. Toji began to reflect. He had been relying too much on brute force. He hadn't even considered incorporating Katen Kyokotsu's true nature into his combat style. That technique was far too unique. To use it so plainly was a waste. This time, Satoshi had relied on Sode no Shirayuki's Bankai, Haka no To game, to claw back a sliver of hope. The power of Haka no To game was so overwhelming that it posed a threat to everyone present. It was far from ordinary. Toji believed that the Katen Kyokotsu in his hand was no weaker than Sode no Shirayuki. I need to master Bankai as soon as possible. And I need to broaden my methods of attack. As the Zanpakuto in the hands of Toji, Satoru, and the others reverted to their dormant forms, Yuki observed everything with fresh eyes. It was her first time truly witnessing the wonder of Zanpakuto. She finally understood why the Jujutsu world said the emergence of Zanpakuto would change everything. These weapons had transcended physical form and carried the power to completely rewrite the rules. Transforming from a plain katana into a sea of cherry blossoms. Transforming from a sealed blade into twin black broadswords. Transforming from a regular sword into a sleek halberd. Transforming into a transparent ice blade that even altered the user's appearance and attire. Yuki struggled to understand what sort of rules governed the Zanpakuto Satoshi forged. She finally understood why Tenjin was so interested in him. Satoshi was a complete anomaly in the world of Jujutsu. Even though she was confident in her own strength, Yuki knew that if she had faced Satoshi in the state of Haka no To game, she would have died. The power of ice and frost had broken past natural limits, transcending even the concept of cold, seemingly grasping the very essence of the world's laws. Using Bankai, Satoshi had defeated someone at the pinnacle of Jujutsu, an opponent who had even mastered a domain. This was the power of Zanpakuto, and the power of Gojo Satoshi. Yuki looked at Sode no Shirayuki, which had now returned to a simple katana in Satoshi's hand, then shifted her gaze to Ryujin Jaka lying nearby. A thought stirred in her heart. If Ryujin Jaka also reached Bankai, just how terrifying would that power be? A Zanpakuto that even someone like Kaori had gone to such lengths to obtain must possess unimaginable potential. Maybe, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have Gojo Satoshi forge a Zanpakuto for me. Yuki's curiosity toward the boy in front of her only deepened. This young man who had attracted Tenjin's attention. This boy who had stirred her heart. He was someone worth investing her time and energy into. At that moment, Yuki made a firm decision. She would get closer to Satoshi. She wanted to understand him. Chapter 137. Chapter 137. Home. Toji picked up the unconscious Satoshi and turned to leave. Toji, where are you going? Kuma-en called out, but Toji didn't stop or turn toward the Gojo clan. I'm taking him home. Toji's voice was cold. You're heading the wrong way. Satoshi needs to return to the Gojo estate to recover. Kuma-en's tone was serious. I'm taking him to his real home. The Gojo clan is no longer strong enough to protect him. Toji spoke a truth that Kuma-en didn't want to admit, one that was devastating in its clarity. With the current strength of the Gojo clan, if they were attacked again by that woman, they still wouldn't be able to stop her. At present, no one in the Gojo clan could even activate a domain. Their only true top combat forces were Satoshi and Satoru, and Satoshi was only 6 years old. Kuma-en had originally intended to stop Toji from taking Satoshi away, but after hearing those words, even he had to acknowledge the painful reality. The Gojo clan appeared mighty on the surface, backed by the influence brought by Satoshi's Zanpakuto, with enough momentum to suppress even the Zenin and Kamo clans. But without true top-tier strength, there was nothing he could say to refute Toji. In the face of someone like Toji, who wielded a Zanpakuto, or a domain user like the attacker just now, the Gojo family's proud core of sorcerers would be little more than cannon fodder. Grandfather, are you really going to let Toji just take young Master Satoshi away? Genichi leaned in and whispered. Right now, Toji is the only one truly qualified to protect Satoshi. Kuma-en shook his head. It was the only logical choice. Genichi, go inform the head of the Iiri clan. Tell Inamichi to meet us at the Yorozuya and ask him to treat Satoshi. After activating Haka no Togame, his body is under immense strain. Make sure Inamichi understands how critical this is. Since Satoshi couldn't return to the Gojo estate, they could only make arrangements elsewhere. Understood, grandfather. Genichi nodded. The Gojo clan had known of the Yorozuya since its founding. Now, even Toji considered it the safest place, so there was no objection. After all, Toji's residence was undeniably the safest location for now. I'm going with you to the Yorozuya. Satoru's face was solemn. As Satoshi's older brother, he had to stay at his side now that he was unconscious. Shunichi also stepped forward without a word, his resolve clear. Toji glanced at the group, then silently gave his approval. Iiri estate. When Genichi relayed the news of the attack on Satoshi, Inamichi was utterly shocked. What? The attacker was a domain user, a sorcerer who manipulates gravity. Inamichi had never heard of such a person. But the fact that they had attacked the Gojo clan made it clear, they were not affiliated with the Jujutsu Association. The enemy was a curse user. But what stunned Inamichi even more was Satoshi's response. In this era, a domain user was practically untouchable. Yet Satoshi had managed to survive an assault from such a person. That alone was unimaginable. When Genichi explained that Satoshi had resisted the domain using the Bankai of Sode no Shirayuki, Inamika's understanding of Zanpakuto was once again overturned. Bankai. So that's what Bankai is, a power capable of standing against a domain. He had always believed he valued his Zanpakuto enough. But now, he realized he'd been far too arrogant. The Yajayo clan had truly struck gold. Once this news spread, the smaller families that had yet to secure a sword-forging promise from the Gojo clan would be gnashing their teeth in envy. A Zanpakuto capable of resisting a domain. Even if Bankai was extremely difficult to achieve, it represented hope. Some had criticized the Yajayo clan for handing over the Tsuki no Sho, the very foundation of their family, in exchange for a single Zanpakuto. Many thought it was a massive loss. But now, with the true power of Zanpakuto revealed, no one would dare say that again. At least we in the Iiri clan already secured a promise, thanks to Shoko. Inamichi breathed a sigh of relief. Because of Shoko, the Iiri clan didn't have to panic like the others. Zanpakuto weren't mass-produced. The Gojo clan would never allow such powerful weapons to spread indiscriminately. The other two great families didn't have Zanpakuto at all. Compared to them, the Iiri clan was fortunate. Satoshi had even taken the initiative to promise one to Shoko. Though they weren't as visionary as the Yajayo, the Iiri clan wasn't completely left behind. Besides, the Iiri family had their reverse curse technique, which was highly valuable to the Gojo clan. Thinking this over, Inamichi immediately fetched Shoko, who had just finished resting. Since the goal was to heal Satoshi, Shoko had to come along. Spending more time around Satoshi would increase the chances he would remember to forge a Zanpakuto for her. Come on, let's go. Where was it again? Inamichi had already forgotten the place Genichi had mentioned. Apparently, they didn't need to head to the Gojo estate this time. Lord Inamichi, to the Yoroswia. Genichi reminded him. Right, the Yoroswia. Inamichi nodded. He didn't know exactly where that was, but it didn't matter. He'd follow Genichi. Zenin Estate. When Naobito learned that Satoshi had been attacked, his expression turned grim. Though he had his grievances with the boy, and even though the Zenin clan had clashed with him in the past, Satoshi's fate wasn't something he deeply cared about. If he had died during the attack, Naobito wouldn't have felt much sorrow. After all, the Zenin and Gojo families were rivals. Satoshi's birth had completely shattered the power balance. From a family perspective, Naobito naturally hoped to see the Gojo clan decline. But what truly shocked him was that even a domain user hadn't been able to kill Gojo Satoshi. And the reason was Sode no Shirayuki, Zanpakuto's Bankai. So Gojo Satoshi wasn't lying. Sode no Shirayuki really has that many techniques. That kind of trump card. Chapter 138. Chapter 138, Kamo and Zenin under pressure. The Zenin clan really missed out. Naobito looked deeply regretful. Now, with Satoshi and his Zanpakuto system beginning to take shape throughout the world of Jujutsu, he had become the beacon of hope for many minor clans. If Satoshi ever decided to extend the right to forge Zanpakuto beyond his own clan, the Gojo family's dominance in the Jujutsu world would become completely unshakable by the Zenin. Satoshi's ability to repel the domain-level curse user with his Zanpakuto became an unforgettable moment. At this point, no one was interested in investigating the identity of the curse user. They were all shocked, both by the power of the Gojo clan's 6 eyes and the legendary Zanpakuto's might. Meanwhile, Zenin Shinsuke and Aji, now practically labeled as sinners of the Zenin, were in an awkward position within the clan. Somehow, word got out that the Zenin had once considered collaborating with Satoshi. Since Shinsuke and Aji were the ones who rejected that potential alliance, they had effectively crushed the Zenin clan's only real chance of rising again. Perhaps, due to the status of the two families, the Gojo would never allow the Zenin to wield any powerful Zanpakuto. But that was only speculation. No one could assume Satoshi's stance based on something that hadn't yet occurred. After all, he had personally forged a special dual-blade Zanpakuto for Toji. Who could say he wouldn't do the same again for the Zenin? Such assumptions meant nothing in the face of reality. So, the Zenin could only blame Shinsuke and Aji, especially someone like Genichi, who had been eyeing their positions. He wasn't shy about fueling the fire. As Toji's elder brother, and with his own strength not inferior, Toji's status in the clan had already become quite unique. Aji no longer dared to speak recklessly about Satoshi. Even Shinsuke had completely abandoned the thought of confronting him. This battle had fully proven Satoshi's strength and, more importantly, the power of his Zanpakuto. If previously, Zanpakuto were just categorized as special-grade cursed tools without clear standards. Now, this battle confirmed it. The true power of a Zanpakuto could rival that of a special-grade sorcerer or even higher. All the minor clans had gone into a frenzy, flipping over every box and chest just to find anything that might be used as leverage to catch Satoshi's attention. The Kamo clan. Without Kamo Shin, the great forging master, the influence of the Kamo clan had declined sharply. There was no successor for the blood manipulation technique, and the number of grade 1 sorcerers in the entire clan had already been caught up by the Yajayo. If not for their 1000-year heritage, they would have been expelled from the Big Three long ago. As the head of the family, Kaname had long harbored suspicions over the sudden death of his uncle, who had always been healthy. He was convinced it had something to do with the Gojo. After Satoshi forged a Zanpakuto capable of summoning a pillar of fire, his uncle had returned home in defeat. A few days later, the old man began arranging his funeral and even transferred authority over the Blacksmith Association directly to the Gojo clan. What was even more telling was that the Gojo didn't say a word, they simply accepted the power without any objection. It was clear his uncle had made some kind of deal with them, a deal that cost him his life. Kaname was wary but dared not investigate. If his uncle had chosen such a method to resolve things, then this matter would bring monumental consequences for the Kamo clan. In such a scenario, all he could do was feign ignorance. He couldn't touch it, and he didn't dare to. Even so, he still envied the younger generation of the Gojo. Satoshi had forged many Zanpakuto, and had even used one to battle a domain-level curse user. Meanwhile, Satoru had once again showcased the overwhelming power of his limitless technique. These two six-eyes prodigies seemed poised to dominate the future of Jujutsu. How long would the Kamo have to live under the shadow of the Gojo? Kaname was full of frustration. He knew the blood manipulation technique wasn't inferior to limitless, but when would he finally have a descendant capable of mastering it? He thought of his overbearing wife and sighed. He didn't even want to go back to his room. Have a baby. Give birth to a child who could inherit blood manipulation. This had become Kaname's obsession. Tombs of the Star. She attacked Satoshi and possessed strength beyond a grade 1 sorcerer. A flicker of doubt appeared on Tenjin's face. As an immortal entity, she had countless old acquaintances in her long memory. But something about the sudden appearance of the curse user felt off. It must be an old friend. It seemed Satoshi's Zanpakuto was truly exceptional enough to lure such people out. And this technique that resisted domains, was it called Bankai? Was Bankai an ability exclusive to Satoshi, or could any forged Zanpakuto access it? If all Zanpakuto were capable of Bankai, things were about to get very interesting. A smile curved across Tenjin's lips. Interesting. Very interesting. I wonder if Yuki will be able to deliver my message. I'm already looking forward to meeting this six-eyes user. who shouldn't even exist. In her endless life, few things ever captured Tenjin's interest. Satoshi and the Zanpakuto he forged were currently among them. The Yorozuna. Seeing Yuki trailing behind them all the way, both Satoru and Shunichi were baffled. They'd never seen her before. But since she'd previously appeared with Toji, they assumed the two were acquaintances. So why had this woman followed them back to the Yorozuna? Even though she had helped break the barrier earlier, neither Satoru nor Shunichi dared to relax. The Yorozuna was where Satoshi would be recovering. They wouldn't let anyone suspicious get close to him. Faced with their doubts, Yuki once again revealed her identity. A messenger of Lord Tenjin. Upon hearing that, Shinika's attitude shifted immediately. His earlier surprise at Yuki's strength now seemed reasonable. Chapter 139. Chapter 139. Taken for granted? Bonus. Being chosen as Tenjin's messenger, this Tsukumo Yuki was definitely stronger than him. Shinika's initial speculation about Yuki's strength had now been confirmed. Are you the star plasma vessel beside Lord Tenjin? As a grade 1 sorcerer of the Gojo clan, Shunichi had access to a considerable amount of intelligence. The moment he heard the surname Tsukumo, he had already associated her with the Tsukumo family from Kyoto. Now that she had openly identified herself as Tenjin's messenger, he immediately matched her identity with the intelligence he had collected before. A member of the Tsukumo family, and a messenger of Tenjin. There was no doubt, this woman was the current generation star plasma vessel. Star plasma vessel? Hearing the term, Satoru and Toji instinctively turned toward Yuki. Toji was clearly surprised, while Satoru looked more curious. He had only heard rumors of Tenjin's significance in the Jujutsu world, but knew little about the details of the star plasma vessel. Sensing Satoru's curiosity, Yuki didn't mind explaining and casually clarified the relationship between Tenjin and the star plasma vessel. The so-called star plasma vessel is a human chosen to assimilate with Lord Tenjin. When Lord Tenjin, possessing immortality, reaches a certain age, he begins evolving into a non-human form. Therefore, once every 500 years, he must assimilate with a star plasma vessel to reset his physical memory. Yuki spoke of it with ease, but both Shunichi and Toji fell silent, while Satoru was left pondering. So, will you have to merge with Lord Tenjin in the future? From that point onward, won't you become Lord Tenjin? Satoru's unique interpretation made Yuki laugh. Although Satoshi and Satoru looked identical, Yuki found herself far less interested in Satoru compared to Satoshi. Lord Tenjin will still be Lord Tenjin, but I, too, will become one with him. Satoru then realized, if the girl in front of him merged with Tenjin, would she still retain her consciousness? He wanted to ask, but Shunichi stopped him with a subtle shake of the head. I wonder, what exactly is Miss Tsukumo's relationship with young Master Satoshi? Shunichi took the initiative to ask. Even though Yuki had played a crucial role in breaking the barrier earlier, he still needed to confirm her true intentions. Even if she was Tenjin's star plasma vessel, he couldn't risk another assassination attempt on Satoshi. I'm Satoshi's girlfriend. Besides, I already have my own room in the Yorozuna. Yuki spoke plainly. The shock on both Satoru and Shinika's faces was immediate. How was that even possible? Satoshi had only emerged from seclusion 2 weeks ago, and before that, he had been solely focused on forging Zanpakuto. Where would he have found time to meet Yuki, much less start a relationship? But then again, if there was nothing between them, why would Yuki go to such lengths for him? When did you and young Master Satoshi meet? Shunichi voiced the question that had also crossed Satoru's mind. He knew today was Satoshi's first time stepping out in a long while. Could it be that they had only just met? Yuki answered directly. We met today, right here. Satoru and Shunichi exchanged a helpless look, then turned their attention to Toji. They both felt that this didn't match Satoshi's style. Although Yuki was undeniably beautiful, it was hard to imagine someone like Satoshi falling in love at first sight. Noticing how familiar they seemed with Toji, Yuki shifted her attention to him. Which room should I stay in? Next to his. Realizing her intent, Toji narrowed his eyes slightly but made no move to expose her. He could tell that Yuki genuinely liked Satoshi. More importantly, Satoshi's situation still hadn't stabilized. If Yuki remained at the Yorozuna, it would at least provide an additional layer of protection. Although both Shunichi and Satoru were here, Yuki's current strength surpassed theirs. Stay in the room next to Satoshi. That way, it'll be easier for you to look after him. When Shunichi and Satoru saw Toji's response, their expressions froze slightly. For now, it seemed they had accepted Yuki's claim. Even Yuki was surprised by how cooperative Toji was. She had expected him to expose her or at least stay silent. What she didn't expect. Well, Shoko was also very pretty, but unfortunately, she was only 6. Her appearance leaned more toward cute than beautiful. Moreover, it didn't seem like Shoko had any awareness of danger at all. Is 6 really the age when love starts? Probably not. Love usually begins around 13 or 14. Shoko looked curiously at the girl whom Satoru had introduced as Satoshi's girlfriend. Just as Inamichi expected, at her age, Shoko had no concept of romance. After all, she was only 6. No matter how precocious a girl might be, she wouldn't be thinking about relationships at that age. However, seeing Yuki's slightly more mature figure, Shoko did feel a little envious. Seeing that Satoru seemed like he wanted to talk to Yuki, Inamichi quickly interrupted him. Where is Satoshi? Shoko and I will go check on him. No matter what, he still had to fight for his daughter. Shoko might not have fallen for Toji had already built a close friendship with Satoshi, and even earned the Gojo clan's recognition. If Toji could return to the Zenin family successfully, then the clan's future wouldn't be completely crushed beneath the Gojo clan's influence. Naobito had made his decision. He must bring Toji back to the Zenin clan. The current Zenin family had become too rigid and corrupt. As its helmsman, he could not allow the ship to sink under his watch. Even if that meant appointing a controversial figure like Toji as the next head, it was a risk he had to take. The Yajayo household. Yajayo Yuzuki looked at Simon and Hidetsugu, who had rushed back in a hurry, with a confused expression. The Yajayo family had limited information sources. Up until now, he still didn't know what had happened to Gojo Satoshi. He had no idea that Satoshi had completed his Bankai. He didn't know that Satoshi had been attacked. He didn't know that Satoshi had ties to the tombs of the star. What happened? Why were you in such a rush? In response to Yuzuki's question, Simon and Hidetsugu exchanged a bitter smile. Although the two had taken part in the operation to rescue Satoshi, in truth, aside from Simon briefly releasing his Zanpakuto, Nijibana, and attacking Kenjaku's barrier, Hidetsugu hadn't even had the chance to fight. The entire time, they were more like spectators. They watched Toji's physical strength dominate, witnessed the transformation of Senbonzakura in Satoru's hands, were overwhelmed by Yuki's terrifying curse technique, and saw the vast number of sorcerers assembled by the Gojo clan. But most importantly, they witnessed Satoshi's Bankai, how he used Sode no Shirayuki's Bankai to force back a domain user. What? A curse user? And she had a domain. Yuzuki's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. Is young Master Satoshi alright? Yajayo Yuzuki asked urgently. He could ignore everything else, but not Satoshi, who was deeply tied to the Yajayo family. Simon and Hidetsugu both nodded. In the end, young Master Satoshi used the power of his Zanpakuto's Bankai to repel the attackers. Hidetsugu explained. You mean Satoshi repelled a domain user himself? Even though Yuzuki's own power was weak, he understood the Jujutsu world's power structure very clearly. In this era, the number of sorcerers capable of domain expansion could be counted on one hand. Yet Satoshi had managed to push back a domain user with just his Bankai? At first, Yuzuki thought it was just a fantasy. How could something like that be possible? But Simon and Hidetsugu had witnessed the whole thing with their own eyes. Yes. Simon's heart was still pounding with excitement. He placed Nijibana on the table and gently caressed its hilt. The power of Bankai is beyond comprehension. And young Master Satoshi told us that every Zanpakuto has the potential to awaken a Bankai. Whether it can be achieved depends on whether the wielder can make their Zanpakuto submit. Nijibana had already brought him many surprises. Now, hearing that it still held more hidden potential, Simon was eager to dig deeper. If Nijibana could achieve Bankai, could he fight on equal footing with a domain user? As a sorcerer with no aptitude for cursed energy, all he had were his Senjutsu and the Zanpakuto in his hand. If it were before, he wouldn't have stood a chance against a domain sorcerer. He could only surrender. But now that he had seen the power of Bankai, he had a new idea. He wanted to become someone who could stand up to domain users using just Bankai. After hearing the full story from the two, Yuzuki's expression turned grim. You two should keep a low profile for the time being. The Yajayo family has drawn a lot of attention this time. The other sorcerer families are bound to be jealous. So stay home unless absolutely necessary. Yuzuki didn't want to invite any trouble. He was deeply concerned that the curse user's real target was Satoshi's Zanpakuto. And if they failed to get what they wanted from Satoshi, would they turn to the Yajayo family next? Chapter 142. Chapter 142. Curse Users Gathering. Satoshi's body is currently suffering from severe frostbite, but his recovery rate is fairly quick. He should regain consciousness once the frostbite has fully healed. After exiting the room, Inamichi was still in shock over Satoshi's physical condition. He couldn't imagine how someone could survive after suffering frostbite from such an extreme temperature. That was a body exposed to absolute zero. How could an ordinary person endure such a thing? Without needing anyone to explain further, Inamichi had already concluded that the changes in Satoshi's body were due to the Zanpakuto, Sode no Shirayuki. As expected of a Zanpakuto capable of repelling a domain user, but using such a technique must come at a terrible cost. Fortunately, Satoshi's body was strong enough to sustain self-repair even under this degree of frostbite. If it had been anyone else, even their consciousness would likely have been frozen by that absolute zero. After hearing Inamiki's diagnosis, both Toji and Satoru breathed a sigh of relief. After all, Inamichi was an authority in reverse curse technique. With his assurance, they no longer had to worry about Satoshi's life being in danger. Master Inamichi, would you consider staying here at the Yorozuya for the night? Satoshi's body temperature is still fluctuating wildly. We're worried something could happen again. Shunichi, who had accompanied Inamichi during the checkup, suggested sincerely. Though Inamichi was the head of his family and held a high position, Shunichi set formality aside for Satoshi's sake. Shunika's words took Inamichi by surprise, but a glint of thought quickly flashed through his eyes. Ahem, Master Shunichi, Satoshi's condition has stabilized. There's no need to worry. Even if I stay, I can't accelerate the healing of his frostbite right now. But, if you're really concerned, I can have Shoko stay instead. If Shoko stayed, it would be like gaining the upper hand through proximity. Shoko's proficiency in reverse curse technique wasn't inferior to his own. This could be considered the final card he played for his daughter's future. Both Shinichi and Satoru accepted Inamika's proposal. Though Shoko was still young, she had already mastered the reverse curse technique to a remarkable degree. Based on Inamika's evaluation, she was more than capable of handling the situation. In the end, Inamichi successfully arranged for Shoko to stay. Just yesterday, only Toji had been living at the Yorozuya, but today, it had become a full house. Toji, Satoru, Shinichi, Yuki, Shoko, and Satoshi. Looking at the sudden flood of uninvited guests, Toji felt helpless. Thankfully, there were enough guest rooms on the second floor to accommodate them all. In the end, Toji assigned one of the rooms next to Satoshi to Yuki, so she could keep watch over him. The other adjacent room was given to Shoko, since she was now the assigned doctor. As for the rest of the rooms, Toji didn't care much. However, he still left the well-lit room Satoshi had previously requested to Satoru. After all, Satoru was a shareholder in the Yorozuya, and deserved proper treatment. After the attack on Satoshi became public, the Gojo clan's forces went into full operation. Numerous dormant curse user organizations were suddenly ambushed by the Jujutsu Society and swiftly eliminated. It caught everyone off guard. Like a wildfire breaking out at the city gates, even uninvolved curse users were swept up in the chaos. These small organizations hadn't even had a chance to make a move before being wiped out. As if trying to curry favor with the Gojo clan, many other sorcerer families also mobilized, deploying their clansmen to hunt down curse users. For a while, the entire curse user community was in turmoil, terrified they'd be captured in their sleep by mysterious groups of Jujutsu sorcerers. High-level meeting of curse users. Akazawa Shisako hadn't expected Kaori to act so recklessly, choosing to launch a direct assault on Gojo Satoshi. Worse yet, she failed. A domain user unable to eliminate Satoshi? It was a disgrace. Wearing his monk's robes, Akazawa Shisako began discussing with the other executives how to hold Kaori accountable for the recent losses suffered by the curse user side. The entire leadership quickly reached a consensus. Itatori Kaori needed to be reined in before her actions brought disaster on all of them. If things continued this way, the Jujutsu Society might soon launch investigations and execute them all as criminals. The high-ranking curse users present grew impatient as they waited for Kaori's arrival. After being 10 minutes late, Kaori finally strolled in, looking completely unfazed. She was still her usual self, elegant and calm. With a faint smile on her face, she showed no signs of being affected by her failure to steal Ryujin Jaka. Another meeting so soon? I thought you were all so cautious before. Not worried about being found by the Jujutsu Society. Kaori casually dragged out a chair and sat down. A full day had passed since her assault on Satoshi. While the entire curse user world was in a panic, she remained untouched by the chaos. Of course, she already knew why Akazawa Shisako had called this meeting. She had shown up simply to see what kind of entertainment these so-called leaders would provide her. To her surprise, the moment she sat down, Akazawa Shisako confronted her directly, demanding to know why she had attacked Gojo Satoshi. Wasn't that your decision from the last meeting? You said Zanpakuto could become a threat to the future of curse users. So why is it wrong for me to eliminate the problem at the root? Kaori glanced at Akazawa Shisako and the other high-ranking curse users. The corners of her mouth curled upward. Akazawa Shisako's expression stiffened. They had indeed discussed Zanpakuto in the last meeting, but he never expected Kaori would take it so far as to attack the Six Eyes heir of the Gojo clan. Who in their right mind would do that? Attacking someone with the Six Eyes was the same as declaring war on the Gojo clan. If they were in the Gojo clan's shoes, they would have immediately started a purge. Itatori Kaori, no one gave you permission to attack Gojo Satoshi. Akazawa Shisako shouted furiously at her. As one of the leaders of the curse users, he had nearly forgotten just how dangerous this woman truly was. Chapter 143. Chapter 143. Gojo Satoshi awakens. A trace of impatience appeared on Kaori's face. Too boring. The drama she had anticipated turned into nothing more than tedious accusations. This kind of empty, backhanded finger-pointing didn't interest her in the slightest. But seeing the other attendees echoing Akazawa Shisako's stance, she immediately understood the real purpose of the meeting. They wanted to use her as a scapegoat. Offer her up to appease the Gojo clan's anger? Kaori touched the stitches on her forehead and once again felt the deep inferiority of human nature. Is there something wrong with these people? Had these so-called high-ranking curse users forgotten why they were able to sit at this table? It was all because of her. Her strength. Her cleansing. Without her, none of them would be here discussing the future of the curse user faction. And now these insects wanted her to be sacrificed? Are they completely insane? Kenjaku, controlling Kaori's body, lifted a cup of tea and took a slow sip. I understand your demands. Let me guess. Someone from the Gojo clan contacted you. Kaori narrowed her eyes and swept her gaze across the table. Everyone she looked at instinctively averted their eyes. Even Akazawa Shisako did the same. Guilt filled every expression. Truly disgusting. Curse users are still human, and humans never change their nature. That's why, in the end, cursed spirits were more trustworthy than people. Kaori spoke to herself. The others couldn't hear her muttering, but her final sentence made Akazawa completely freeze. You're all garbage. Die where you sit. Domain expansion womb perfusion. Her domain activated. Energy surged and wrapped around the entire meeting hall. The curse users who thought they could overpower her together never even had a chance. One by one, they were crushed under the pressure of her domain. I really don't know who gave you the courage. Kaori shook her head and turned to leave. These fools had just wasted hours of her time. She still needed to go home and cook for her father-in-law and care for her husband. At the scene of the curse user meeting, a group of uniformed officers had surrounded the area with caution tape. Shunichi and Sabeki arrived as representatives of the Gojo clan. This is undoubtedly the same domain as before. Everyone here was killed by that woman. Every curse user under investigation by the Gojo clan had been killed by the short-haired woman. The sight left both Shunichi and Sabeki stunned. Though these curse users weren't top tier, they still held strength comparable to grade 1 sorcerers. Yet all of them had been annihilated by one person. Judging by the state of the corpses, they didn't even have the chance to fight back. Sabeki's face was grim. As expected of someone who can wield domain expansion. Even outnumbered, she's still unstoppable. Because of his previous mission, Sabeki hadn't participated in Satoshi's rescue. He hadn't felt Kaori's overwhelming presence firsthand. But now, seeing the remains of these curse users each as powerful as himself, he finally understood why Satoshi hadn't returned to the Gojo estate after the attack. Even the Gojo clan might not be enough to withstand such an enemy. At present, among the big three sorcerer families, perhaps only Toji, with his overwhelmingly strong physique, could serve as Satoshi's shield. And above all, what shocked him the most was that Satoshi had managed to face this domain user at the age of 6. He knew full well that Satoshi didn't rely on brute strength, swordsmanship, or physical combat. Satoshi's only weapon was the Zanpakuto he had forged himself. Zanpakuto, Bankai, these two words had become the most talked about terms in the Jujutsu world. Right now, they represented overwhelming potential and unparalleled power. Zanpakuto were already rare, but Gojo Satoshi was the only one who had fully achieved Bankai. Even so, the major families still tried every means to reach out to him. Even curse users were desperate to seize the Zanpakuto forged by Satoshi. We must report to the head immediately. We cannot allow this domain-level sorcerer to continue running loose. Until now, they believed that stories of betrayal and mass slaughter only existed in fiction. But this time, it had happened right before their eyes. The curse user faction needs to be purged. Shinika's tone was icy. Since this person dared to act so brazenly, then let the entire curse user camp suffer the consequences. The Gojo clan might not be able to eliminate a domain-level sorcerer just yet, but clearing out dozens of regular curse users wouldn't be a problem. Kaori didn't realize that her reckless actions would trigger a nationwide crackdown on curse users across Japan. The true heir of Six Eyes had yet to grow up, and curse users had still hoped for a little more time. But thanks to Kaori's actions, they were now on the verge of extinction. Inside the Yorozuya, after 2 full days in a coma, Satoshi finally opened his eyes. Thanks to his high regenerative ability and his adaptation to Sode no Shirayuki, aside from a bit of dizziness, everything else felt normal. Looking at the 2 girls on either side of him, Satoshi blinked in confusion. Shoko's presence didn't surprise him, but why was Yuki also here? You're awake. Yuki, who had been most attentive, immediately noticed the change. The moment Satoshi opened his eyes, she lit up with surprise. Shoko quickly stepped over and began checking Satoshi's condition. Once she confirmed there were no abnormalities, she quietly turned and left to inform Satoru, Toji, and the others. She had no intention of lingering or showing off in front of Satoshi. Why are you here? Satoshi had no idea what Yuki had done during the barrier incident, nor did he understand why she was in his room now. Chapter 144. Chapter 144. I get a headache when I think of Tenjin. Bonus. I'm your girlfriend. I stayed by your side when you were injured and unconscious. Isn't that what I'm supposed to do? Yuki's face was full of smiles, and her tone still carried the same casual charm as before. Satoshi immediately felt a headache coming on. Hadn't he already won the bet before and made her promise not to bring this up again? No matter how you looked at it, Yuki really shouldn't be staying at the Yorozuya. Satoshi, you're awake. The sudden appearance of Satoru interrupted Satoshi's thoughts before he could press the issue further. Satoru, you're out. At the final stage of Sode no Shirayuki's Bankai, although he had remained conscious on the surface, in truth he had been fighting purely on instinct. He didn't even know whose arms he had collapsed into or who had arrived to support him at the scene. He had no memory of what had happened afterward. Now, seeing that Satoru had emerged from his retreat, a twinge of guilt stirred within him. Satoru was supposed to be focused on mastering blue right now. Did the emergency message he'd sent through his Zanpakuto interrupt Satoru's training? Satoru sensed Satoshi's emotional fluctuations. As twins, their bond allowed him to understand Satoshi's thoughts with ease. He smiled and said softly, I've already mastered the basics of the technique. Once you've recovered, I can teach you some of the theory behind it. Wasn't that what you wanted to learn? Satoshi's eyes lit up with surprise. He hadn't expected Satoru to master it so quickly. Then again, it made perfect sense. Satoru was the most gifted sorcerer of this era. He couldn't be measured by ordinary standards. So, this was the key to learning Shunpo? A moment later, Shunichi and Toji also entered the room. Yuki tactfully stood up and returned to her own room. Toji, what's going on with this Yuki? Why is she staying at the Yorozuya? As soon as Yuki left, Satoshi voiced the question that had been bothering him. Hearing that, Shunichi and Satoru both froze slightly. Something didn't feel right. Judging from Satoshi's tone, the relationship between him and Yuki didn't seem as close as they'd been led to believe. But previously, Yuki had clearly claimed to be Satoshi's girlfriend and Toji had confirmed it as well. The two of them turned toward Toji, waiting for his explanation. Yuki is Lord Tenjin's envoy. She's the star plasma vessel. She's powerful. Stronger than both of you right now. Toji laid down 3 simple facts, then said nothing more. Okay, but why did you just go along with her saying she's Satoshi's girlfriend? Satoru narrowed his eyes, and Satoshi's body visibly stiffened at the reminder. Toji frowned. We didn't know where the curse user who attacked Satoshi came from, nor whether they would return. In that situation, why wouldn't we let someone like Yuki stay to protect him? A hint of irritation flashed across Toji's face. Besides, I never said Yuki was Satoshi's girlfriend. You're the ones who jumped to that conclusion. You went along with it. Satoru shot back, displeased as he recalled the earlier exchange. Toji rolled his eyes. If I was weaker than her, there'd be no point in playing along. I'm not arrogant enough to think I'm the strongest. From a protection standpoint, having one more person on our side can only help. Satoshi let out a silent sigh. He hadn't expected Yuki to have such a background. He had known Yuki's identity from the original story, but he hadn't imagined she'd show up here, as Tenjin's personal envoy. If that was the case, then Toji had good reason to let her stay. But the problem wasn't her identity. It was Yuki's attitude. He could only hope this girlfriend label hadn't spread beyond the Yoroswia. But the moment that hope surfaced, Satoru's next words shattered it completely. Actually, because of all the confusion you two caused, the entire Tokyo Jujutsu community now thinks you and Yuki are an item. Even the Tsukumo clan of Kyoto has sent formal greetings to the Gojo clan. Toji crossed his arms, his expression flat. Gossip doesn't matter. Safety comes first. And wasn't it the Gojo clan themselves who took the lead in spreading it? Satoru fell silent. It was true. Without their clan fanning the flames, the rumor wouldn't have spread like wildfire through Tokyo's Jujutsu world. From a public standpoint, Satoshi and Yuki were a good match. The only jarring factor was their age difference. Seeing Satoru speechless, Satoshi realized things had spiraled out of his control. He'd only been unconscious for a couple of days, and somehow Yuki had become his girlfriend and the entire Jujutsu world believed it. He didn't dislike Yuki, but he definitely felt like he'd been railroaded into something he hadn't agreed to. Is this what she was aiming for? But, would a girl really go that far? Does she truly have feelings for me? Satoshi felt he needed to have a proper conversation with Yuki. And as Tenjin's envoy, he still didn't know what her mission was, or what Tenjin's intentions were for involving her with him. Even as a reincarnator, Satoshi couldn't disregard the role Tenjin had played in shaping the modern sorcery world. Without Tenjin, the balance that currently existed in the Jujutsu world might never have formed. But the very thought of meeting Tenjin made Satoshi uncomfortable. That strange figure with a square head and multiple eyes was hard to stomach. If he really had to meet Tenjin face to face, he would need to mentally prepare himself first. Satoshi, you just woke up. Get some rest. Seeing that he was clearly agitated, Satoru and the others chose to leave and give him some space. Toji, can you call Yuki for me? I have something to ask her. A glint of amusement appeared in Toji's eyes as he nodded. He was curious to see what would unfold between Yuki and Satoshi. Chapter 145. Chapter 145. Can star plasma vessels fall in love? While waiting for Yuki, Satoshi was deep in thought about his future plans. This recent ambush by Kenjiku had been dangerously close. Because Kenjiku hadn't targeted young Satoru in the original timeline, Satoshi had never taken him seriously. But after this encounter, he realized he could no longer afford to be so careless. Kenjiku's goal had been crystal clear: his Zanpakuto. Since gaining recognition for creating Zanpakuto, it was inevitable he would draw attention. It was only natural for someone like Kenjiku to covet such a power. He had to admit, Kenjiku's taste was impeccable. The moment he laid eyes on Ryujin Jaka, he wanted it for himself. If not for the system's restriction on transferring ownership, once Ryujin Jaka fell into Kenjiku's hands, that old bastard would basically become invincible. Satoshi could only be thankful he survived. Had he failed, not only would he be unable to change Satoru's fate, he would have died before doing anything significant. Fortunately, Sode no Shirayuki's Bankai awakened at the critical moment. Its full release proved incredibly powerful. If Kenjiku were to attack again, as long as he held some trump cards in reserve, Sode no Shirayuki might just be able to handle him. Currently, the only one in the Jujutsu world who could rival Sode no Shirayuki might be Toji, whose physical prowess was at its peak. Satoru had already mastered Cursed Technique Lapse, Blue, and Satoshi was confident he could make rapid progress in Shunpo next. This time, he was determined to master Shunpo. The art of instantaneous movement was always useful. If you couldn't win, then the next best thing was to escape quickly. He had only been caught this time because of his poor mastery of Ho-Ho. If he had been more proficient, he would have fled the moment something felt off. This battle against Kenjiku made Satoshi painfully aware of his current shortcomings. There was no such thing as a truly omnipotent fighter in the world. Still, he had the system, and he had mastered Zenjutsu, Hakuda, and Kido. So why not become as all-rounded as possible? Thinking of Itadori Kaori, whose body was now under Kenjiku's control, Satoshi's eyes narrowed slightly. Since Kenjiku dared to attack him, he had no choice but to respond in kind. Otherwise, it would make him seem like someone easily manipulated. Now that Kenjiko was using Itadori Kaori's body, he was most likely living with her family. While Satoshi didn't know the exact location, he remembered Itadori Yuji would eventually study in Sendai. That likely meant the Itadori family resided there. Kenjiko, if you won't let me live in peace, then don't expect a quiet life for yourself either. Although he couldn't defeat Kenjiko just yet, after this attack, he wouldn't let Kenjiko or his host family off easy. He might even interfere with the birth of Itadori Yuji. Let's see how Kenjiko's grand plans go without a proper vessel. A cold gleam flashed in Satoshi's eyes. He hadn't retaliated yet, and already Kenjiko had made a move. This clearly showed their current level of strength wasn't enough to be a deterrent. In the future, he, Satoru, and Toji all needed to continue growing stronger. Letting others attack you whenever they please, that was just pathetic. I need to raise my compatibility with Ryujin Jaka as fast as possible. I have to unlock its Bankai soon. While Satoshi was thinking, Yuki stepped into the room. Seeing this tall, stunning woman, Satoshi felt a bit helpless. Still, there was an inexplicable sense of pride in being associated with someone so beautiful. But he needed to understand Yuki's intentions and what Tenjin had sent her here to do. Sit down. Satoshi adjusted his posture and motioned for Yuki to take a seat. Yuki smiled and sat down quietly, unusually well-behaved. It was almost like the person who had boldly called herself his girlfriend before was someone else entirely. Miss Yuki, I'm now your so-called boyfriend in name only. Tell me, what did Lord Tenjin send you here for? Surely it wasn't just to fall in love with me. Yuki cleared her throat, about to answer, but Satoshi's next words cut her off. Do star plasma vessels even have the freedom to fall in love? Satoshi spoke calmly. His face showed no emotion, and his tone remained level. Yuki had known Satoshi was mature for his age, but now faced with his composed demeanor, she found herself unsure how to respond. Was this what he truly meant? Even she didn't know how to answer him. Even if I'm the star plasma vessel, shouldn't I still have the right to fall in love? She mumbled quietly, unsure of herself. Oh, when you finally assimilate with Lord Tenjin, will it be you or Lord Tenjin who's in love with me? Satoshi gave her a sidelong glance. He wanted to know if she truly understood what the process of assimilation meant. The way Yuki's expression darkened told him everything he needed to know. She understood. Since you already know the outcome, then isn't it a little inappropriate to go around calling yourself my girlfriend? Though Satoshi's words were calm, they carried a chill. Yuki's emotions wavered under his steady gaze. She was the star plasma vessel, yes. But maybe I can find a way to stabilize his condition without needing the star plasma vessel. Satoshi's voice was calm, but for Yuki, it was a huge shock. She didn't doubt his words because she knew Satoshi had no reason to lie. A Zanpakuto? Yuki asked nervously. Satoshi nodded. He did have a Zanpakuto in mind that might solve Tenjin's issue, but he needed more time to analyze the details. Hearing that it was really related to a Zanpakuto, Yuki finally relaxed. Even though Satoshi was still young, when it came to forging Zanpakuto, he was the only authority. If he said it was possible to solve Tenjin's problem with a Zanpakuto, then there was hope. As her emotions settled, the tense atmosphere in the room began to ease. Satoshi looked at Yuki seriously. So, now that you know this, you should reconsider your future, Ms. Tsukumo. We're still young. There's no need to rush into life-changing decisions. Yuki lowered her head slightly, glancing at Satoshi who was resting his chin on his hand, and her heart stirred. Despite the obvious age gap, Yuki was drawn to the contrast between Satoshi's mature mind and his young body. For her, interest was the foundation of emotion. Only when there was genuine interest could a real relationship form. I don't think there's anyone more suitable, Yuki suddenly said. As someone blessed with incredible luck and talent, after seeing Satoshi's true strength, her standards for a partner had risen sharply. Even though he was just 6 years old, she felt he was worth waiting for. Satoshi was stunned. He didn't expect himself to be this popular. After all, the woman in front of him would grow to become one of the most beautiful and powerful in the Jujutsu world. If she insisted on being with him, he really couldn't think of a reason to say no. Seeing that Satoshi didn't reply, Yuki pressed forward. Since there's no one else more suitable, why not give it a try? If it doesn't work out, we can talk about it then. Well, that's all we can do for now. After I go to the Tombs of the Star and meet Lord Tenjin, we can re-evaluate our relationship. Just like that, under public pressure and emotional momentum, Satoshi and Yuki unofficially became a couple. Even though most of the Jujutsu world felt the age gap was a bit much, once they considered Yuki's ties to the Tombs of the Star, and the political weight of the Tsukumo clan in Kyoto, the controversy faded just as quickly as it began. Chapter 147. Chapter 147, Tenjin's Summons, Bonus. 1 month later. At the Yorozuya, Satoshi's body had mostly recovered, and Yuki had already returned to the Tombs of the Star to report everything to Tenjin. In another 3 days, Satoshi would personally head to the Tombs of the Star to meet Tenjin. During this time, in addition to healing, Satoshi also began learning Ho-Ho from Satoru. Satoru, who had mastered the cursed technique Lapse, Blue, could indeed be called the fastest sorcerer alive. Although Satoshi couldn't use Limitless, with the aid of 6 eyes, he analyzed the core of cursed technique Lapse, Blue and successfully adapted it into a movement technique for himself. After a month of focused training, Satoshi's Ho-Ho improved dramatically, and his combat flexibility also reached new heights. Even when sparring with Toji, Satoshi's use of Ho-Ho made it difficult for him to keep up. Satoshi didn't overthink his relationship with Yuki. This visit to the Tombs of the Star had two goals: resolving Tenjin's star plasma vessel problem and preparing to claim both Tenjin and Yuki as experience leaks. Gaining experience from an immortal sorcerer like Tenjin and a future special grade like Yuki, Satoshi could already imagine the rewards waiting for him. He had a rough idea of how to forge a Zanpakuto for Tenjin, but when it came to forging one for Yuki, nothing had clicked yet. Creating a Zanpakuto for Tenjin could drastically alter the future. If Tenjin no longer needed to assimilate with a star plasma vessel, then Satoru and Suguru would never be assigned to protect Aminai Riko. That in turn meant Geto Suguru wouldn't spiral into despair over her death. Of course, with Geto's extreme ideology, he might still eventually follow the path of purging humanity, but at the very least, it could be postponed for a few years. Maybe by then, Satoshi could find a way to eliminate curses completely. He looked at Toji and Satoru resting nearby and shook his head. In the end, I'm the one carrying everything alone. The reason they can coexist peacefully now is all thanks to me. Meanwhile, the news that Satoshi had been summoned by the Tombs of the Star shocked the Jujutsu world. People were already stunned when they learned that Satoshi's girlfriend was a star plasma vessel, but now, Tenjin had personally summoned Satoshi. That was almost unthinkable. After all, in the past 100 years, no one aside from the star plasma vessel had been allowed into the Tombs of the Star. Was Satoshi about to become the first outsider to step into the tombs in over a century? Yajayu clan. Yajayu Yuzuki looked incredibly fortunate. Good thing we built a good relationship with Satoshi early on. Being summoned by Lord Tenjin himself. His Zanpakuto must have been acknowledged. Yajayu Simon and Yajayu Hidesugo nodded repeatedly beside him. They had already recognized Satoshi, so anything related to him was viewed from a positive light. Simon, has your Nijibana reached the level of Bankai yet? As the only Zanpakuto outside of the big three sorcerer families, you need to give it your all. Don't bring shame to Lord Satoshi. Yuzuki was grateful that he had handed over Tsuki no Sho to Satoshi under Hidesugo's urging. In return, they'd received the Zanpakuto Nijibana. If he had hesitated back then, the Yajayu clan would have missed out on an opportunity of a lifetime. Faced with his clan head's expectations, Simon's expression turned serious. Compared to Yuzuki, he felt even more pressure. He wanted to attain Bankai badly, to stand beside Satoshi's strength. But the path to Bankai was incredibly difficult. Even after a full month, he hadn't made any real progress. Seeing the look on his face, Yuzuki could already guess the result. The only small comfort was that not even Satoru's Senbonzakura or Toji's Katen Kyokotsu had achieved Bankai yet. Currently, the only one who had achieved Bankai was Satoshi. As the forger of Zanpakuto, it made sense that he was ahead of everyone else. We need to stay focused. That said, the association wants you to take on another exorcism mission. Do you want me to help you turn it down? Though Hidesugo couldn't help with Bankai, he could clear some obstacles for Simon. After thinking for a moment, Simon shook his head. No need. Lord Satoshi achieved Bankai with Sode no Shirayuki during a real battle. Maybe those missions will help me grasp the essence of Bankai. Sitting at home won't make a breakthrough. Might as well go and complete the association's missions. He gently ran his fingers over the blade of Nijibana, eyes full of longing. But no matter how much desire he poured into it, Nijibana gave no response. Clearly, the road to Bankai was still far off. On the other hand, many smaller sorcerer families had begun reallocating the resources they had prepared. Satoshi being summoned by Tenjin meant he was worth serious investment. These minor clans had previously been rejected by the Gojo clan. They understood clearly if the offer wasn't good enough, they wouldn't even be able to meet Satoshi, let alone receive a Zanpakuto. As for the Zenin clan, which had ongoing friction with the Gojo family, they were filled with resentment. In their view, Satoshi was only being summoned to the Tombs of the Star because of his star plasma vessel girlfriend. Even as the Six Eyes prodigy of the Gojo clan, he had no right to covet the star plasma vessel. That vessel was the key to Tenjin's future assimilation. For someone like Satoshi to be involved with Yuki was nothing short of blasphemy. To them, there was no way Tenjin would let Satoshi off. This summoning was clearly meant to punish him. Speculation around what would happen to Satoshi at the Tombs of the Star ran rampant. No one could guess what kind of news he would bring back from that meeting. Chapter 148. Chapter 148, Young Geto Suguru. Iiri Residence. Although Iiri Inamichi wasn't optimistic about Satoshi's trip to the Tombs of the Star, he still hoped Satoshi could safely complete his audience with Lord Tenjin. Even so, he couldn't help but feel frustrated. What's wrong with my daughter Shoko? Why did he have to get involved with a star plasma vessel? That situation is already messy enough. Most people wouldn't want to get anywhere near it, yet Satoshi walked right in. Now you've done it, huh? Inamichi firmly believed Tenjin would be angry about this. The importance of the star plasma vessel to Tenjin was beyond question. He glanced at Shoko, who looked carefree and indifferent nearby, and sighed internally. At the very least, just hurry and finish forging Shoko's Zanpakuto. At the foot of Mount Fuji, Okotsuyato, who was once again heading from his hometown to Tokyo, suddenly sensed a surge of cursed energy. Turning slightly, he saw a beast-shaped cursed spirit staring fiercely at him. He frowned. This one felt different from the usual weak cursed spirits. It looked strong. If it made it into the city, it would probably cause a lot of damage. I'll purify you here. Ever since meeting Satoshi and Satoru at the Gojo estate, Yato had fully stepped into the world of sorcery. Even cursed spirits he would have ignored before, he now took seriously, treating them as a sorcerer should. Cursed energy surged around his hands. Just from his aura alone, the beast-like cursed spirit began retreating. But Yato had already taken action. He wasn't going to let the cursed spirit off. As he swung his blade, a wave of cursed energy shot forth, enough to completely obliterate the creature. However, just as his cursed energy was about to strike, a second, larger cursed spirit suddenly appeared and blocked the attack, shielding the beast-shaped spirit. What the? Yato froze in surprise. Then a young boy's voice rang out. Hey, uncle, why are you attacking my cursed spirit? A boy in a school uniform appeared behind the larger cursed spirit. He placed a hand on each spirit, and they both vanished at his command. Is this kid a sorcerer too? Yato was stunned. Those weren't ordinary Shikigami, but more like summoned cursed spirits. And the boy, he looked no older than 6. He had a bun tied up with a fringe falling over the left side of his forehead. Little guy, are you a sorcerer? Sorry about that. I thought those cursed spirits were wild, so I tried to exorcise them. I didn't realize they were yours. Your technique, is it summoning cursed spirits? Hearing the apology, the boy's sour expression softened. My technique isn't summoning. It's manipulation. He offered only that much before clamming up again. Yato smiled. I see. So what's your name? I'm Okotsu Yato. I'm heading to Tokyo and passing by Mount Fuji. You're pretty young. What are you doing around here? He wasn't underestimating him. After meeting Satoshi and Satoru, Okotsu had long since stopped judging sorcerers by age. A sorcerer's power came mostly from innate talent, and one's cursed technique was their most fundamental weapon. In most cases, the strength of the technique defined the strength of the sorcerer. The boy hesitated, then responded politely since Yato had introduced himself. My name is Gojo Satoru. I'm here at Mount Fuji for personal reasons. Gojo didn't plan to explain his true purpose. He didn't know yet whether Yato was friend or foe. After speaking, Gojo began walking toward the mountain. It's pretty dangerous up there. Even if you're a sorcerer, you shouldn't go up alone. Where are your parents? Yato called after him, concerned. But Gojo ignored him, summoned the beast-like cursed spirit again, climbed onto its back, and shot toward the summit. Yato sighed helplessly. Still, he admired Gojo's vigilance. Even so, he was worried. No matter how you looked at it, that child was only 5 or 6 years old. Climbing Mount Fuji alone wasn't safe. And he was curious. What exactly was Gojo Satoru after? The beast-cursed spirit was fast, but with Yato's cursed energy, catching up wasn't difficult. Hey, Gojo. You heading to the top? What's up there? Gojo glanced back as Yato caught up, surprised that he kept pace on foot. This guy's strong. Way stronger than the cursed spirit from before. Realizing he couldn't beat Yato, Gojo let his guard down. After all, if Yato meant him harm, he wouldn't be able to resist anyway. Yes, there's something I need at the summit. Gojo replied calmly and urged the cursed spirit to speed up. The summit? Mount Fuji was an active volcano. Yato wasn't concerned for Gojo's safety anymore, but for the mountain itself. A child with the ability to control cursed spirits wandering around on a volcano could be a serious problem. Besides, although it was faint, he sensed another cursed presence near the top. Could that cursed energy be Gojo Satoru's target? Yato decided to follow him, both out of concern and curiosity. Gojo glanced behind again and sighed inwardly. Originally, his goal had been to prepare a technique to capture a cursed spirit on the verge of being born. Now, with Yato tailing him, the situation was exposed. Unfortunately, Gojo lacked Yato's perception and didn't realize, another sorcerer was already waiting atop Mount Fuji. Chapter 149. Chapter 149, Cursed Womb in Mount Fuji. At the summit of Mount Fuji, Yuki stood at the edge of the crater, her expression solemn as she stared down into its depths. She didn't fully understand why Tenjin had instructed her to retrieve the unborn cursed womb or why it was said to benefit Satoshi's Zanpakuto. Still, if it was something that could help Satoshi, she had no reason not to bring it back to the tombs of the star. As for the cursed energy emerging from the foot of the mountain, Yuki didn't pay it much mind. Right now, she was confident she could handle any intruder. Gojo Satoru and Yato reached the summit shortly after. When they spotted Yuki, both of them froze. Gojo hadn't expected to see such a beautiful woman standing atop Mount Fuji. Yato, on the other hand, was startled by the immense pressure she exuded. Her power alone was enough to make even him feel a faint sense of threat. This area is off limits. What are you doing here? Yuki frowned at the two before her. She was on a mission from Tenjin and had no interest in dealing with random interference. Within the crater of Mount Fuji, a cursed womb was in the final stages of formation. In just a few days, it would be born as a cursed spirit. And according to Tenjin, this cursed spirit had a direct connection to Satoshi's Zanpakuto. If necessary, she would eliminate all obstacles. Pretty lady, we're just passing by. Honest. Gojo noticed Yuki's attention remained fixed on the crater and began forming his own guesses. He quickly pulled Yato aside and whispered to him about the cursed energy. What are you really here for? Yato narrowed his eyes at Gojo, knowing there had to be more to it than just sightseeing. Could you help me stall that woman? Gojo nudged Yato and whispered his plan. Why? Yato asked, frowning. Gojo went silent for a moment, then explained the principles of his technique in a low voice. Upon learning that Geto's cursed technique was cursed spirit manipulation and that he had come to Mount Fuji for the unborn cursed spirit, Yato's expression changed. The cursed spirit in Mount Fuji. Yato grew serious. Cursed spirits born from Mount Fuji or other natural disasters were generally special grade. Even if it hadn't yet been born, the cursed womb was still the seed of a special grade and not something a 5 or 6-year-old child like Geto could control. Geto nodded. That's right. Just help me distract that lady and I can extract the womb from the magma. I'll be able to control the cursed spirit inside right away. Even though he seemed mature, Geto was still a child and didn't yet understand the danger of such ambitions. The moment he finished speaking, Yato grabbed him by the back of his collar. Hey, miss. This kid here's trying to steal the cursed womb from Mount Fuji. Are you after it too? Uncle, how could you sell me out? Geto flailed and shouted in protest. Yuki's gaze snapped toward him. She had originally thought she was the only one aware of the cursed womb in the volcano, but these two strangers not only knew about it, they had the means to try and take it, and this strange boy was even confident in his ability to steal it. Yuki stepped toward Geto, her presence pressing down on him. This is a mission directly from the tombs of the star. I will be taking the cursed womb back. Whatever your intentions are, I suggest you leave now. She made her affiliation with the tombs of the star clear without hesitation. Yato immediately understood. His earlier assessment hadn't been wrong. This woman was stronger than him, which meant this kid beside him, trying to steal a cursed womb from someone like her, was really asking for death. But when he heard the name Tombs of the Star, the first person that came to mind was Satoshi. Before passing Mount Fuji, Yato had already heard the rumors that Satoshi was going to meet Tenjin. Now, with someone from the Tombs of the Star standing here, he couldn't help but grow curious. The entire Jujutsu world was buzzing with speculation about Satoshi's meeting with Tenjin. Some believed Tenjin was interested in Satoshi's forged Zanpakuto. Others claimed the issue was Satoshi's relationship with the star plasma vessel, that Lord Tenjin opposed it. Yato had originally planned to visit the Gojo family and speak with Satoshi, but now that someone from the Tombs of the Star was here, it was the perfect opportunity to ask. Excuse me, miss, I'd like to ask about. Before Yato could finish, Mount Fuji trembled. It was subtle enough that ordinary people might not notice, but the three of them, all sorcerers, immediately picked up on it. The source was unmistakable. The cursed womb inside Mount Fuji had begun to stir. Yuki's eyes sharpened. This had to be the moment Tenjin had foreseen. Without hesitation, she drew Garuda, cracked it like a whip, and cast the Star Rage spell into it. The massive force generated sent Garuda crashing straight into Mount Fuji. She wasn't just planning to retrieve the cursed womb. She also intended to eliminate the threat of an eruption altogether. Geto stared, stunned by the drastic change in the cursed energy beneath the mountain. Then, as the implications sank in, he actually felt relieved. He had originally thought the cursed spirit would only be grade 1. With his technique, he could control it once it was born. But now, it was clearly special grade. There was no way he could control something like that. Thinking about it made Geto break into a cold sweat. If Yato had gone along with his plan and they tried to seize the cursed womb, they might have been the ones destroyed instead. You little brat, you've got some nerve. That woman's strength is on another level. Even I can't match her. And you wanted to steal a cursed womb from her. Geto grimaced. I didn't expect the cursed spirits in Mount Fuji to be so powerful. They're already top grade by the time they're born. No wonder someone from the Tombs of the Star is here. Still, by my calculations, it shouldn't be time for the cursed spirit to be born yet. Why would someone from the Tombs of the Star arrive so early? He had thought arriving ahead of time would give him an edge. Clearly, they had been prepared far in advance. After a short while, Garuda shot out of Mount Fuji, completely intact. Wrapped in a red sphere, it now carried within it a mysterious, shadowy figure. Chapter 150. Chapter 150, The Attack. On the agreed day, Satoshi, Satoru, and Toji arrived near the Tombs of the Star at the same time. The entire Jujutsu world was paying attention to Satoshi and his group. The reappearance of the Tombs of the Star, long absent from the public eye, was no ordinary matter. Although Satoshi didn't believe Tenjin would harm him, he still insisted on bringing Toji along. As for Satoru, he simply wanted to tag along. 3 distinguished guests, Lord Tenjin invites you. A girl came out to receive Satoshi and the others, but it wasn't Yuki. Satoshi was a little puzzled. This wasn't what had been agreed upon. Yuki had said she would personally meet them. Still, he didn't dwell on it. He had already sensed that the Zenin clan had increased their vigilance. Given the current situation, with the Zenin clan's strength, even the Tombs of the Star couldn't eliminate them without making waves. As long as Toji had a chance to fight back, even the mysterious Tombs of the Star would likely be torn apart by him and Katen Kyakotsu. Elsewhere, in a corner of the Tombs of the Star, Yato and Geto stood in front of the cursed womb, managing its state with helpless expressions. After Yato revealed Geto's plan on Mount Fuji, Yuki unexpectedly brought them back with her. After meeting Tenjin, who turned out to be female, they were treated as laborers tasked with stabilizing the cursed womb. According to Tenjin, this was to provide an opportunity for Satoshi. I never thought Lord Tenjin would be a girl. Geto used cursed spirit manipulation to suppress the development of the cursed womb, a trace of surprise on his face. He had assumed that Tenjin, who had the immortality and barrier technique, would be an old man. Never did he expect her to appear as a girl no older than her teens. All star plasma vessels are female. Since Tenjin assimilated with one, it's essentially confirmed she's a woman. Yato explained, displaying his deep knowledge. Still, he too was surprised that Tenjin looked so young. As for the task given to them, though it was related to Satoshi, neither of them felt any hostility from Tenjin. The girl from the Tombs of the Star led Satoshi and the others inside. They looked around curiously. But soon, a strange cursed force began attacking them. The entire Tombs of the Star began shifting like a Rubik's Cube. Satoshi, Satoru, Toji, and the girl found themselves standing on separate spatial platforms. The three simultaneously drew their Zanpakuto. Something was wrong. Why was the Tombs of the Star behaving this way? Was Tenjin actually hostile? That thought flashed through Satoshi's mind. The next second, the space became sealed. Satoshi, Satoru, and Toji were each trapped inside individual space grid locks, completely separated. Satoshi, wait for me to come get you. Hang on, I'll be quick. Just before the grid sealed completely, Satoru and Toji shouted towards Satoshi. Satoshi curled his lips at their words. He didn't think he was the weakest among them. No matter how bad things got, he could still use Bankai. He wanted to see what kind of game Tenjin was playing this time. At the same time, Geto received an order from Tenjin to withdraw the cursed energy suppressing the birth of the cursed womb. The womb began pulsing violently, as if the cursed spirit inside was about to be born. Bang, bang, bang. Satoshi stood in a silver space, frowning. It felt like this space was meant to restrain him, no visible attack mechanisms. But the constant pounding sound made him uneasy. Was there another creature in this space? The sound resembled a heartbeat. Focusing his 6 eyes, Satoshi traced the sound to its source. Once his vision pierced through the illusion, he realized the noise came from a cursed womb. How could a cursed womb be in the Tombs of the Star? Satoshi was puzzled. No matter how he looked at it, the Tombs of the Star and the cursed womb seemed completely incompatible. But there was no time to wonder. He could feel the cursed spirit inside was moments from being born and it wasn't weak. He had no idea what Tenjin was thinking, but to end things quickly, he decided to use Sode no Shirayuki and eliminate the cursed spirit immediately. Elsewhere in the Tombs of the Star, Toji and Satoru had already released Katen Kyokotsu and Senbonzakura respectively. With the strength of their Zanpakuto and their own power, they were confident they could end this quickly and regroup with Satoshi. But to their surprise, before they could act, the space around them began melting away, revealing the outside. What's going on? Both thought the same thing. Around the dissolving grid, several figures appeared: Yuki, Yato, Geto, and the unfamiliar girl from earlier. The scene was odd. Satoru and Toji couldn't immediately tell whether Yuki was friend or foe. Not seeing Satoshi, they suddenly rushed toward the strange girl beside Yuki. From her position and bearing, they guessed this was Tenjin herself. If Tenjin was the one behind this ambush, then they wouldn't hold back. Lord Tenjin is doing this for Satoshi. Yuki raised Garuda and used Star Rage to intercept their attack. At that moment, Yato also sided with Yuki, helping her block Satoru and Toji's assault. Satoru hadn't recognized Yato at first, but once he moved, the cursed energy gave him away. Yato, why are you turning against the Gojo clan too? Satoru's 6 eyes were sharp with fury. After being attacked upon arrival, he didn't believe Tenjin had good intentions at all.